Earth East Asia District, Jiangzhou City. The night was as dark as ink and rain poured down in torrents. In the distant outskirts of the city, a vast industrial ruin stood silently in the curtain of rain like the skeleton of a colossal beast. Twisted rusted pipes climbed everywhere, shattered windows gazed out like hollow eyes upon the rain-soaked world. The air was thick with the dull odor of rust, oil and rainwater mingled together. Boom! A livid bolt of lightning tore the sky asunder, illuminating for an instant an inconspicuous corner deep within the ruins. Then thunder rolled, shaking the very ground as if it trembled. In the moment the thunder subsided, a sharp, utterly unnatural hissing screech erupted from deep within the ruins, piercing the veil of rain. The sound was like metal being torn apart by immense force mixed with a high-frequency, teeth-grinding buzz. Then came an explosion. A blazing fireball rose from the roof of an abandoned factory building, burning for several seconds even in the heavy rain before being suppressed. Thick smoke mixed with steam spread everywhere. Then gunfire. Rapid and explosive, the roar of human-made weaponry, but soon it was overtaken by a deeper humming sound characteristic of energy weapons and the accompanying fire. Screams. Human cries of agony sounded briefly, then were abruptly cut off. More explosions, crashes, the roar of collapsing buildings. Intense fighting echoed inside the abandoned factory area, yet strangely it was mostly drowned out by the rain and thunder, as if a brutal drama isolated from the outside world. Lin Feng abruptly sat up from a bed cobbled together from old tires and wooden planks, his forehead covered in cold sweat, his heart pounding wildly as if it would burst through his chest. He panted heavily, the terrifying sounds from before seemed to still echo in his ears. Silence. Outside the window there was only the sound of rain, occasionally interrupted by a low roll of thunder. Was it a dream? He murmured, wiping his face with his hand. The cold touch sobered him a little. But he immediately dismissed the thought. Too real. The sound, the vibration. Especially the last inhuman roar, full of destruction, certainly not thunder. He lived in a crude shack on the edge of the waste area, guarding this vast scrap recycling station for an almost never-seen boss in exchange for a meager wage and this shelter from the elements, though it often leaked. He was familiar with every sound of this area. The sound just now was definitely abnormal. The source seemed not far away. A strong sense of unease seized him. He remembered recent vague news reports, several homeless people missing in the suburbs, the military conducting exercises in the nearby mountains blocking roads, and the occasional unidentified flying light seen at night. After a moment's hesitation, Lin Feng gritted his teeth, grabbed a worn raincoat from beside the bed, pulled it on, fished a heavy adjustable wrench from the toolbox, took a deep breath, pushed open the creaking iron door and stooped to merge into the rain. He had to go see. An inexplicable impulse drove him. The rain immediately soaked his hair and face, chilling him to the bone. Using the cover of ruined buildings and piles of scrap metal, he cautiously moved toward the source of the sound, the core area of the abandoned factory. The deeper he went, the more complex the smells in the air became. The smell of gunpowder. Ah! An indescribable strange odor like burnt circuits mixed with ozone. The puddles on the ground showed an ominous dark red color, though diluted by the rain, but that color. Lin Feng's heart sank. He tightened his grip on the wrench, his knuckles white from the strain. Rounding a pile of scrapped car bodies, the sight before him made him stop abruptly, his pupils contracting sharply. The battle was over. Or rather, the slaughter was over. The already ruined factory area had become even more dilapidated, walls covered with huge claw marks and blackened craters from energy weapon burns. Several overturned, twisted black off-road vehicle wrecks lay scattered in the open space, still emitting wisps of smoke. The ground was a mess, broken bricks, twisted metal, scattered shell casings. And the bodies of humans in black combat uniforms. Their deaths were horrific. Some seemed torn apart by immense force, others carbonized by high-energy weapons, leaving only vague human shapes. Lin Feng's stomach churned, he barely suppressed the urge to vomit. He had never seen such a terrible scene. What had caused all this? Bandits. Impossible. Such destructive power. His gaze was drawn to an anomalous object in the center of the area. It was the wreckage of something. About 3 meters long, with a bizarre form like a twisted fusion of some arthropod and a metal construct. It had a dark silver carapace or armor covered in strange patterns. But the carapace was now broken, revealing burnt wiring and mechanical structures inside flickering with tiny electric sparks. Several sharp claw-like or blade-like appendages were broken off at the side, their edges glinting coldly. It had been nearly torn in two by some powerful firepower. A green, foul-smelling viscous liquid was slowly oozing from the wound, mixing with the rain. This was absolutely not a creature from Earth. Nor did it resemble any known machine. Aliens. Monsters. Lin Feng's mind went blank. Immense fear and absurdity overwhelmed him. Just as he was in a daze, his foot accidentally kicked a metal object the size of a basketball, half buried under the rubble. The object seemed to have been a part of that monster's body, rolling here after being blasted off. It was entirely black, its surface seemingly able to absorb light, irregular in shape yet possessing a strange streamlined beauty covered with intricate, incomprehensible patterns. After being kicked by Lin Feng, the black metal block suddenly vibrated faintly and the patterns on its surface lit up with a barely perceptible blue light, flickering once like a breath, then quickly faded as if exhausted of energy. At the same time, a cold, emotionless, neutral electronic voice sounded directly in the depths of his mind, detected compatible mental fluctuations. Contact with unknown technological artifact fragment. Binding conditions met. System Universal Technology Recycling and Disassembly Initializing. Host bound Lin Feng initial scan. Host healthcare current environment high threat available resources extremely low novice survival mission issued acquire first piece of tech scrap mission objective contact and retrieve unknown technology artifact fragment ahead status severely damaged energy nearly depleted mission reward basic material enhancement knowledge infusion preliminary system unlock warning weak life signature approaching. Threat level low but lethal to current host. Immediate action advised. Lin Feng was frozen in place rain sliding down his pale cheeks. System. Alien technology. Mission. Threat. It all happened too fast, too surreal. But the crystal clear voice in his mind and the faint translucent blue arrow mark floating above the black metal block, visible only to him, brutally told him this is not a dream. Woo woo, a faint but clear sound like the chirping of some insect came from the direction of the shattered monster's remains. Lin Feng whirled around horrified to see a portion of the monster's carapace bulge up and a small mechanical creature about half a meter long metallic and spider-like struggling to emerge. Its compound eyes glowed red. It had obviously spotted Lin Feng and was staggering but moving toward him at terrifying speed. A pair of sharp high-frequency vibrating blades extended from its front. Threat. Lethal threat. The system's warning echoed in his mind like a death knell. No time to hesitate. Survival instinct overrode all fear and confusion. With a low growl he didn't even recognize Lin Feng lunged forward, his hand stained with mud and blood, reaching desperately for that ominous black metal fragment. The instant his fingers touched the cold metal, contact completed. Retrieving. Novice mission completed. Reward issued. Buzz. A vast unfamiliar stream of knowledge rushed into his brain like a dam breaking. At the same time he felt a faint but strange warmth flow from the metal fragment in his hand, spreading up his arm to his whole body. The mechanical spider had already pounced in front of him, its high-frequency vibrating blades thrusting straight at his face. Life hung by a thread. Cold fear instantly seized Lin Feng's heart. The mechanical spider's compound eyes flickered with emotionless crimson light, its high-frequency vibrating mandibles tearing through the rain curtain, thrusting straight toward his face with astonishing speed. At the critical moment of life and death, Lin Feng didn't even have time to think. The instinct to survive and the vast influx of knowledge that had just poured into his brain collided violently, sparking astonishing inspiration. Basic material enhancement, knowledge about metal stress structures, instantaneous impact force transmission and the most vulnerable breakpoints emerged as if by instinct. His body lunging toward the metal block was in a forward-leaning posture, his right hand still gripping the heavy adjustable wrench he had brought for self-defense. No escape. Only to brace. Ah. Lin Feng let out a roar, not from courage but sheer desperate struggle. Following the guidance of that strange knowledge in his mind, he did not try to block the seemingly indestructible mandible with his wrench. Instead he exerted strength from his waist and abdomen, twisted his body and swung the wrench at an extremely tricky angle, violently smashing it toward a slender, rapidly moving joint leg on the side of the mechanical spider. Clang. Sizzle. A harsh metallic screech sounded. Sparks flew. A miracle occurred. That seemingly casual and even comical strike had precisely jammed the movement trajectory of one of the mechanical spider's legs, and the immense impact force caused its original pouncing path to swerve violently. Buzz. The deadly pair of mandibles grazed past Lin Feng's ear, severing a few strands of hair, and the gust of wind scraped his cheek painfully. He could even smell the blood of previous victims and a strange burnt odor clinging to the mandibles. The mechanical spider fell off balance into the muddy water, its 6 legs thrashing wildly as it tried to readjust its posture, the red light in its compound eyes flickering violently, clearly surprised that this seemingly fragile target could cause such interference. Now. Lin Feng's heart pounded wildly, almost leaping out of his throat. He knew this was just a temporary fluke. The next moment this terrifying killing machine would lunge again. He had no weapon that could truly damage this thing. Even if he smashed the wrench onto its main armor, it wouldn't even leave a white scratch. His gaze suddenly locked onto the black metal fragment he had just grabbed in his left hand. The interface of the Universal Technology Recycling and Disassembly System clearly appeared before his left eye, cold text scrolling. Recovered item: core fragment of Shadow Class Recon Unit, damage 97. Status: energy near depletion, internal structure severely damaged, information storage unit partially retained. Available disassembly options. 1. Extract remaining energy approx. 3 standard units, contact target required. High risk. 2. Reverse engineer unknown alloy formula fragment, consume 1 standard unit of energy. 3. Reverse engineer low power energy ray generator blueprint incomplete, consume 2 standard units of energy and possess basic electronics knowledge. Warning: target threat approaching. It is recommended to prioritize option 1. Option 1. Extracting energy. How to extract? Use it on this thing. Seeing that the mechanical spider had already readjusted its posture, letting out another threatening hiss, about to launch a second unavoidable pounce. Lin Feng's mind went blank, almost with the last shred of trust in the system that had suddenly appeared in his mind. Following its guidance, he clutched the cold metal fragment like a brick and with all his strength smashed it fiercely toward the cluster of glowing red compound eyes of the spider that had just risen. Suck it. The moment he pressed the fragment onto the spider's compound eye. Buzz. The black metal fragment suddenly erupted with a final burst of intense dark blue light like a last flare. Countless fine abyss-like blue patterns instantly covered the entire head of the mechanical spider. The mechanical spider's body stiffened abruptly, all motion ceased instantly, the red light in its compound eyes flashed wildly, emitting an extremely painful sharp electric whine. Its hard shell dulled at a visible rate as if the energy inside was being frantically drained. Within a second or two the dark blue light and eerie patterns suddenly vanished. Crack! Crash! The mechanical spider that had been so ferocious moments ago, as if having endured centuries of corrosion, in an instant collapsed into a pile of smoking lifeless scrap metal crumbling into the muddy water. Successfully extracted 3 standard units of energy. Energy deficiency warning lifted. Basic system functions activating. Personal status module loading. Technology tree blueprint module loading. Micro-material manipulation basic permission unlocked, requires energy. The cold system prompt tone sounded again. Lin Feng slumped in the icy muddy water, leaning against the cold scrap heap behind him, gasping heavily, rain washing over his pale face, his whole body trembling uncontrollably. He looked at the completely wrecked mechanical remains in front of him, then at the black fragment in his left hand that seemed even more dim and lusterless. Everything that had just happened was like a nightmare. But the clearly existing system interface in his mind and the faint but real warm current from the extracted energy in his body all told him this was not a dream. Scrapyard rainstorm alien invasion system life and death struggle. His ordinary life from this moment came to a complete end. In the distance the faint sound of sirens drew rapidly closer. With a start Lin Feng snapped awake. Can't stay here. No matter who was coming, he couldn't explain any of this. He would be taken away, the system. The fragment. The pile of mechanical spider parts. He struggled to his feet, his gaze quickly sweeping the battlefield. Suppressing his nausea and fear, he quickly stuffed the most important black metal fragment tightly into his chest, then took another look at the pile of mechanical spider remains. Discovered recyclable remains of Feng-class autonomous mechanical unit integrity 15. Disassembly options. Recycle. He murmured in his heart. Shoo. The pile of remains vanished, instantly drawn into some storage space of the system. Obtained unknown tough alloy X2 units. Obtained damaged optical sensor X1. Obtained ultra-micro energy conduction line fragments X several. Tech points 5. No time to check details, the sirens grew closer. Gritting his teeth, Lin Feng took a last look at this hellish battlefield, grabbed his wrench, turned, crouched, and like a startled hare quickly disappeared into the dense piles of scrap and the depths of the rainstorm. He had been gone less than a minute when several black SUVs with flashing red and blue lights harshly crashed through the debris entrance barriers, bursting in. The icy rain trickled down his neck, seeping into his collar, and Lin Feng couldn't help but shiver, yet he dared not slow his pace in the slightest. Like a startled wildcat, he darted frantically through towering piles of scrap metal and dilapidated factory buildings, using every obstacle he could to shield his figure. From far behind him, the piercing wail of police sirens, the screech of brakes, and faint shouts reached his ears clearly. The authorities had already arrived. They would soon cordon off this entire area and conduct a thorough search. He had to leave immediately. But he couldn't return to that crude shack. That place was too conspicuous, it would undoubtedly be searched first. He needed a new, more concealed temporary hiding spot. Memories surged back, and Lin Feng recalled that deep within the waste zone near the mountain wall there was an entrance to an abandoned air raid shelter, half hidden by a pile of discarded shipping containers known to almost no one. There. He immediately changed direction, stumbling and rushing toward the location etched in his memory. Minutes later he struggled to push aside tangled rusted barbed wire and weeds, squeezing through a narrow gap behind a half-collapsed container just wide enough for one person. Inside was a small space, seemingly a refuge converted from a disused ventilation shaft of the shelter. Though covered in dust and cobwebs, it at least provided shelter from the wind and rain and was exceedingly hidden. Huff huff, Lin Feng leaned against the cold concrete wall, finally able to catch his breath. His heart still pounded wildly, not only from the running but also from the thrilling experience earlier and the system interface that lingered in his mind. He forced himself to calm down. For now he was temporarily safe, but the crisis was far from over. Outside were police and possibly even agents from more specialized departments. The alien fragment tucked in his pocket and the system in his mind were secrets that absolutely could not be exposed. System, he murmured in his thoughts. Whoosh. The translucent blue interface materialized once again before his left eye, seeming more stable and clearer than before. Universal Technology Recycling and Disassembly System host Lin Feng status: minor abrasions, fatigued, mentally heightened, available energy 3 standard units, tech points 5, blueprints held, primary material reinforcement mastered, unknown alloy formula fragment, low power energy ray generator blueprint incomplete, inventory materials unknown, toughness alloy X2 units, damaged optical sensor X1, ultra micro energy conduction circuit fragments X, several available functions, scan low energy. Cost: recycle, disassemble, micro material manipulation, primary activation costs 1 energy unit, micro material manipulation. Lin Feng's attention was drawn to this newly unlocked function. Subconsciously he focused his mind to touch that option. A stream of information surged into his mind. Micro-material manipulation primary allows the host with energy support to shape, separate, combine and reinforce materials on a microscopic level using willpower. Current effective range contact. Current precision micrometer level. Willpower. Shaping. A bold idea instantly sprang to mind. He glanced around, picked up a short piece of severely rusted thick wire from the ground and took out 1 unit of unknown toughness alloy from the system's inventory, a small piece of material with a dull silvery metallic sheen dismantled from the mechanical spider. Holding the wire in his left hand and touching the strange alloy with his right finger, Lin Feng took a deep breath and commanded in his mind, activate micromaterial manipulation. Target partially composite the alloy's property toughness onto the wire's surface layer. Command received. Estimated energy consumption 0.5 units. Confirm. Confirmed. A faint but distinct flow of energy instantly surged from within his body, channeling through his arms to the materials in his hands. Lin Feng's concentration was elevated to its peak. In his perception, the microscopic structures of the ordinary wire and the small piece of alien alloy seemed to unfold before his eyes. A wondrous sense of control emerged. He guided the tiniest particles of the alloy to uniformly coat and penetrate the wire's surface structure in an incomprehensible manner, like a plating process, while undergoing rapid reorganization and reinforcement at the microscopic level. This process lasted only a brief 10-odd seconds. The energy flow in his hands dissipated. Looking at the wire again, its appearance seemed little changed except the rust had vanished, revealing a cold metallic luster. But when he bent it with his fingers, he could feel a remarkable toughness and strength far beyond that of ordinary wire. Composite reinforcement successful. Energy consumed 0.5 units. Obtained primary reinforced wire X1. It worked. An indescribable thrill and excitement surged within Lin Feng. This system was incredibly powerful. It was nothing short of miraculous. However, before he could fully savor this joy, wail, the clear sound of police sirens drew nearer, seemingly just around his hiding place. Then came the voice of a loudspeaker, somewhat muffled in the rain. Area is cordoned off. All personnel submit to inspection. They were searching this way. So fast. Lin Feng's heart instantly leaped into his throat. He fiercely gripped the newly reinforced wire in his hand, his gaze sweeping over the exit of this cramped space. He couldn't just wait to be caught. The sound of the loudspeaker drew nearer, and he could even hear the splashing of boots on the waterlogged ground and the shouts of the search party communicating with one another. Check this area, nothing. Check behind that container. Team 1, attention. Seal off the east exit. Cold sweat instantly soaked through Lin Feng's back, colder than the rain itself. Though this hiding spot was concealed, it was far from foolproof. Once a thorough search commenced, discovery was merely a matter of time. Fight his way out. Outside was at least an entire search squad, possibly more, and he had only a slightly sturdy piece of wire and a wrench. It would be sheer suicide. Hide. The space was too cramped, nowhere to conceal himself. What to do? His gaze swept rapidly across the confined area, his mind racing under the surge of adrenaline. Concrete walls, rusted metal frames, scattered broken bricks. And above. He jerked his head up, staring at the corner overhead. There was an old rusted metal grating, barely recognizable in its original form, likely a remnant of an earlier ventilation system. Behind it lay a pitch-black passage leading to an unknown destination. The grating was fastened to the concrete with several massive rusted screws. If he could pry it open. Time was running out. The footsteps were already nearby. Activate microscopic material manipulation. Target weaken the structural integrity of the grating's fastening screws. Without a moment's hesitation, Lin Feng activated the system again, pressing his hand against those rusted screws. Energy drained rapidly. Command received. Estimated energy consumption 1 unit. Confirm. Confirmed. Buzz, the familiar sensation of energy flow surged once more. In his microscopic perception, the once dense metallic structures inside those screws were being swiftly and precisely dismantled, becoming loose and brittle as if weathered by millennia of corrosion, yet their surfaces showed little change. The process lasted less than 10 seconds. Operation complete. Energy consumed 1 unit. At the same time, a voice came from outside. Chief, there's a gap here, looks like we can get in and check. No time left. Lin Feng leaped up, his wrench slamming hard against the freshly processed screws. Clang. Clang. Unexpectedly smooth. With almost no effort, the seemingly sturdy giant screws shattered on impact. The fastenings collapsed instantly. He yanked hard, and the entire rusted grating along with its frame was torn off, revealing a pitch-black hole barely large enough for one person to squeeze through. A wave of stale, damp air rushed out. Just then a beam from a powerful flashlight shot through the gap at the entrance, illuminating him directly. Someone's in there. Freeze. A sharp shout rang out. Lin Feng's scalp tingled, and without a second thought he scrambled like a startled rabbit, diving headfirst into the dark vent. Bang. A gunshot rang out, the bullet striking the concrete at the hole's edge, sending sparks and debris flying. Report. Target sighted. He's fled into an old ventilation duct. The searchers outside immediately called for backup. Lin Feng could think of nothing else, crawling desperately through the narrow dark dust and cobweb pipe. Behind him came the commotion of searchers trying to follow and calling out, but hindered by the small opening and the unknown interior. Their movements were clearly a step slower. The darkness didn't fully block his vision. The system interface at his left eye emitted a faint blue glow, barely outlining the pipe's contours. He had no idea where this duct led, only that he must get as far from his previous location as possible. He crawled for what felt like an eternity, only daring to stop and catch his breath when the sounds behind him faded completely. He checked the system's energy, only 5 units remained. Temporarily safe. Or was he? He leaned against the cold pipe wall, listening intently. Apart from his own heartbeat and breathing and the faint, more distant wail of sirens from outside the pipe, there was no other sound. It seemed he had shaken them off for now. But a new problem arose. Where was he? How could he get out? He tried tapping the pipe wall with his wrench to gauge its thickness and material, pondering whether he could use his last bit of energy to create an exit. Suddenly. Ding. Detected weak residual same frequency energy signal. Signal source type highly consistent with the core fragment of the recycled Shadow class reconnaissance unit. Signal direction southeast approximately 125 meters. Signal status extremely weak, intermittent emission. The system's cold mechanical prompt sounded again without warning, and the left eye interface automatically displayed a small radar-like diagram with a faint dot flickering in the southeast. Lin Feng's heart pounded. A same frequency energy signal. Similar to that fragment. Could it be? There was another fragment over there. Or another identical Shadow reconnaissance unit. Or even its origin. An immense curiosity and an indescribable allure surged within him. But at the same time, an overwhelming sense of danger descended once more. To go or not to go? Darkness, oppression, suffocation. Lin Feng held his breath in the narrow ventilation duct, every nerve in his body heightened to the extreme. In front of his left eye, a mini radar map projected by the system flickered steadily, representing a source of energy signal like a ghostly blue lighthouse in the dark, tempting yet radiating an unknown danger. To go or not to go? This question lingered in his mind for less than 3 seconds. The answer was obvious. Go back. Outside must be a net of traps. Wait here. He would be discovered sooner or later. The only way forward was to seize every possible opportunity to fight for a glimmer of hope. Since this system arose from that fragment, the energy signal likely meant another chance. I'll gamble. He no longer hesitated, gritted his teeth, and began to crawl towards the southeast direction indicated by the radar, navigating through the intricate and dust-laden duct network. The cold metal pipe walls scraped against his arms and knees, producing faint rustling sounds that echoed unnaturally loud in the absolute silence. 125 meters. 110 meters. 90 meters. The distance was gradually shortening. The duct began to slope downward, and the musty and rusty smells in the air grew stronger. Occasionally he could catch a faint whiff of burnt ozone reminiscent of the battlefield. This confirmed his suspicion. Finally, after crawling through a nearly vertical short pipe, dim light appeared before him. It was not natural light, but a stable cold blue glow emanating from the same source as the fragment in his hand. He cautiously crawled to the exit of the duct and looked down. Before him was a vast underground space, seemingly transformed from an abandoned large air raid shelter or underground warehouse. The ceiling was equipped with old non-functional lighting circuits. The source of that ghostly blue glow was located in the center of this underground space. It was a even larger wreck. Its main body was about 6 to 7 meters long with a more complex shape. One could vaguely discern a biological mechanical style similar to the previous mechanical spider, but with a more refined structure and several times the volume. It resembled a torn metal giant scorpion, its hideous exoskeleton shattered, revealing countless burnt and severed precision circuits and bizarre glowing transistors within. Its rear half had almost entirely vanished, as if torn apart by some immense force. The stable ghostly blue glow emanated from a complex device at the core of its breakage. Warning: Shadow class reconnaissance unit wreck detected, damage level 89. Low power energy core still operational. Warning: residual autonomous defense protocol detected. The system's cold notifications rang out in succession. Lin Feng's heart sank. Autonomous defense protocol. Is there still danger? He observed carefully and found that several piles of fragments similar to the previous mechanical spider lay scattered on the ground around the wreck, as if they had been destroyed by some force while attempting to approach the core. It seemed that although the core was very close, it still wasn't something that could be easily touched. He had to find a way to acquire it safely. His gaze swept across the entire underground space and quickly discovered a path. Several massive concrete beams that had collapsed from above formed a sky bridge leading directly to the top of the wreck, allowing him to avoid potential defensive mechanisms on the ground. There was no time to lose. The search team outside could find the entrance at any moment. Lin Feng took a deep breath, climbed out of the vent, and carefully stepped onto the precarious concrete beam. He tried to keep his body low, maintaining balance. Each step taken was nerve-wracking. The closer he got, the more he felt the enormity of the wreck and the oppressive weight of the inhuman technology. The ghostly blue glow illuminated his face, and the energy readings on the system interface slowly began to rise. Signal source intensity increasing. Suggest prioritizing acquisition of energy core. Finally he reached the top of the wreck. From here he could clearly see that at the center of the fractured surface a complex device about the size of a basketball, composed of countless intricate crystals and metal rings, was slowly rotating, emitting an enchanting glow. It was the source of all energy. But how could he safely retrieve it? Should he directly use his hand to pry it? He had no doubt that the moment he touched it the residual defense system would turn him to ashes. Got it. Microscopic material manipulation. Since he could enhance, then it should also be able to destroy and separate. He focused again, channeling the last remaining 5 units of energy. Activate microscopic material manipulation. Maximum power. Target cut off all critical structural supports connecting the energy core to the main body. Command received. Estimated energy consumption 5 units. Confirm. Confirmed. Ahum. A stronger flow of energy than ever before surged from within him, coursing down his arm. His brain instantly experienced a painful overload and the system interface data in his left eye refreshed frantically. In his microscopic perception, dozens of fine interfaces connecting the energy core to the wreck were being forcibly twisted, severed and separated. This was an extremely delicate and dangerous operation. Any mistake could trigger a catastrophic overload explosion. The ghostly blue glow began to fluctuate wildly, flickering violently. The wreck emitted a piercing electrical noise. Warning: energy core output unstable. Please complete the operation as soon as possible. Crack. Several extremely faint cracking sounds emanated from below. Success. At the moment the energy core completely separated from the main body, the ghostly blue glow of the entire underground space abruptly extinguished for an instant, then lit up again but became exceedingly dim. The core stopped rotating quietly, hovering a few centimeters above its original position, only its surface still shimmering with faint light. The defense system had failed. Lin Feng was overjoyed, immediately bending down and carefully cradling the still warm energy core with trembling hands. The moment he touched the core, success in recovering the Shadow Class Reconnaissance Unit energy core, damage level 35, remaining energy approximately 18. Gained a large amount of technology points. Technology points 50. Detected parsable blueprints, basic biomimetic structure, science, low tier energy crystal synthesis process incomplete, short range optical camouflage device blueprint slightly damaged. Available energy significantly replenished. Current energy 18. 5 standard units. A massive and pure flow of energy surged into his body, making him almost moan in comfort. At the same time, more and more complex knowledge began to flood into his mind. However, before he could digest this immense gain, boom. A dull explosion sound vaguely came from above, shaking the entire underground space and causing dust to fall. Immediately after, hurried and disorganized footsteps, shouts, and the sound of guns being cocked echoed clearly from the direction of the ventilation duct he had just crawled down. Report. Suspicious underground entrance found. Residual energy reaction detected. The demolition team has forcibly breached the passage. Team 1 proceed. Team 2 provide cover. Stay alert. They found this place. And they moved so quickly. Lin Feng's face changed drastically. The joy he had just gained was instantly replaced by a chilling sense of crisis. Holding the still warm energy core, he quickly scanned the nearly sealed underground space. The only exit had been blocked. He had nowhere to escape. Concrete debris showered down from above, and the dense heavy footsteps pounded like war drums against Lin Feng's heart. The beam of a high-powered flashlight began to sway at the entrance, suggesting that fully armed personnel could rappel down at any moment. A true dead end. A genuine crisis. The energy core in his arms, still radiating a faint warmth, was no longer an opportunity but a blazing beacon, mercilessly revealing his location. He could not wait for death. Lin Feng's mind raced at an unprecedented speed. The fragmented knowledge that had just flooded his mind, short-range optical camouflage device blueprint, primary biomechanical structure theory, fused rapidly with the massive wreckage before him and the core in his hands. There must be a way. There had to be. His gaze locked onto a specific part of the shadow wreckage beneath his feet. There, a row of scale-like biomechanical units, though damaged, remained structurally intact. According to his newly acquired knowledge, these appeared to be auxiliary heat dissipation plates, but their material and structure could serve as the foundational refractive layer for optical camouflage. And the energy core in his arms was the perfect powerful power source. System. Scan the target unit. Reverse engineer the short-range optical camouflage device immediately. Based on the available wreckage materials and the energy core, construct a temporary camouflage cover. Maximize coverage on myself. Lin Feng practically roared the command in his mind. Time might only be a second away. Command received. Blueprint analysis in progress. Analysis complete. Required materials located. Sufficient. Energy supply. Adequate. Initiating temporary application construction. The energy core in his hand suddenly erupted with unprecedented blazing radiance. A torrent of energy surged out, not into Lin Feng's body but like sentient blue electric serpents wildly coursing into the row of scale-like units on the wreckage below. Crack. Crack. The units groaned under the unbearable load, their surfaces instantly crawling with cobweb-like blue circuits. In the next moment they tore themselves from the main wreckage and, propelled by an invisible force, shot toward Lin Feng like living things. With a sharp smack they attached to his raincoat, instantly spreading out to form an ultra-thin, unstable shimmering film that enveloped his entire being. At almost the same instant. Thud. Thud. 4 or 5 tactical personnel clad in pure black combat suits, helmets equipped with multifunction night vision goggles and holding compact assault rifles descended nimbly from the ventilation shaft like leopards. Upon landing they immediately dispersed into a tactical formation, their muzzles sweeping across every corner. Clear. Clear. Target wreckage found. Repeat, found large unknown mechanical lifeform wreckage. Energy reaction source is at the center of the wreckage. Wait. The signal is gone. The leading captain gestured and the team moved forward in silent coordination, their tactical flashlights illuminating every inch of the colossal wreckage. Lin Feng was crouching right on the wreckage, less than 3 meters from the nearest operative. He held his breath, his heart nearly stopping. He could clearly see the cold metallic sheen of the enemy's rifle, hear their steady breathing, and even smell the mix of gunpowder and rain on their combat suits. The film covering his body was rippling violently like the surface of a pond struck by a stone, distorting and refracting the surrounding light, the flashlights, the faint glow of the wreckage, into a barely discernible humanoid silhouette. It was extremely unstable, on the verge of collapse. An operative's gaze swept over his position, seeming to pause for 1/10 of a second. Lin Feng's cold sweat instantly soaked through his inner shirt. But the operative just frowned, his gaze under the helmet seemed unable to focus. He finally shook his head, averted his eyes, and continued searching elsewhere. The unstable camouflage and the complex lighting environment had deceived his eyes at this extreme distance. Report to Eagle's Nest. Eagle Eye Team 1 has reached the underground space. Primary target wreckage located. Massive size, unknown type, extremely high technological level. No signs of life detected. Energy signal vanished instantly upon arrival. Suspect shielding mechanism or relocation. Requesting further instructions. The captain pressed his earpiece and reported in a low voice. Lin Feng's heart stirred. An opportunity. Their attention was completely captured by the wreckage and they had made a wrong judgment. He began to move with excruciating slowness, millimeter by millimeter, toward the other side of the wreckage, toward the massive torn gash that led into deeper darkness. Each step was as light as a feather, falling each second as long as a century. The optical camouflage film covering him rippled even more violently. The load on the energy core was clearly immense. Warning: temporary camouflage unit overload at 75. Energy core output unstable. Estimated duration 97 seconds. He had to be faster. He finally reached the edge of the gash. Below lay in even deeper darkness, a subterranean fissure torn by the immense impact, its destination unknown. Just then. Captain. Found something here. An operative suddenly called from the other side of the wreckage. Found non-native metal shavings suspected to be scrapings from tools carried by a person. Also, a small amount of fresh muddy footprints. Someone was here before us. The alertness of the entire team instantly spiked again. Search thoroughly. He might not have gotten far. The captain's voice turned icy. Several flashlight beams began to sweep the surroundings even more meticulously, including the area Lin Feng had just left. He could wait no longer. Taking a deep breath, Lin Feng stopped hiding and lunged forward, throwing himself directly into the bottomless dark fissure. Movement below. An operative reacted swiftly, his muzzle instantly pointing toward the fissure. But at the moment Lin Feng jumped, the optical camouflage on him pushed to its limit by the violent motion, and the instantaneous overload of the energy core finally failed. A faint pop and crackle sounded. The scale units covering his body instantly overheated, emitting wisps of blue smoke. All light extinguished completely, the camouflage effect vanished. But this also used up the last second of cover he had before his jump. When the operative's flashlight swept over the fissure, it only saw rolling darkness and a few dislodged stones falling. Target is fleeing into the underground fissure. Requesting pursuit. The captain immediately barked. Eagle's Nest received. Team 2 secure the scene, seal all exits. Team 1 attempt pursuit. Be cautious, target may be extremely dangerous. A calm command came through the earpiece. 2 operatives stepped forward and tossed glow sticks into the fissure, but their light was quickly swallowed by the darkness, revealing a bottomless depth. Captain: depth unknown, environment unclear. Forced pursuit carries significant risk. The captain walked to the edge of the fissure, looking down at the terrifying darkness. His expression beneath the faceplate was grim. He bent down and picked up an object from the edge of the fissure. It was a small, extremely dull, lusterless piece of black metal, seemingly detached from a larger structure. Its edges still held a faint, peculiar residual warmth. This was not their equipment, nor did it seem to be part of the massive wreckage below. No pursuit, the captain said, slowly straightening up and gripping the metal shard tightly. Seal the entire scene immediately. Highest alert level. Report everything here, especially this, to high command immediately. His gaze fell upon the deep fissure, his tone becoming extraordinarily complex. Notify headquarters. We need the highest level of Dragon Group expert support. Tell him what we found might not just be alien wreckage. It might also be an incomprehensible person. Bitter cold. An icy chill that pierced to the bone. And boundless darkness coupled with immense water pressure. Lin Feng felt as though he were seized by an invisible giant hand ruthlessly plunged into a frozen abyss. The tremendous impact nearly knocked him unconscious. The freezing river water surged wildly into his mouth and nostrils, and the sensation of suffocation struck instantly. His survival instinct drove him into a frantic struggle, paddling upward with all his limbs. After an unknown span of time, perhaps only a dozen seconds, yet it felt as long as a century, his head finally broke the surface. He coughed violently, spewing out the river water he had inhaled, greedily gasping for the damp icy air in great ragged breaths. Before him lay absolute darkness, with only the faint blue glow of the system interface by his left eye barely outlining a blurred silhouette. He seemed to be in an underground river, the current swift. Far above, an invisible dome loomed, and occasional droplets fell from above, echoing with an ethereal resonance. The river channel stretched wide around him, its edges unseen. He had survived. But the cost was devastating. Every inch of his body ached. Especially his right leg and left arm, which throbbed with excruciating pain, likely fractures or severe contusions from striking rock walls during the fall. The icy river water was rapidly draining what little body heat he had left, causing him to tremble uncontrollably. Worse still, the precious energy core in his arms, after enduring the overload of the optical camouflage and the impact of the fall, had dimmed drastically. Its surface flickered like a candle in the wind, unstable and faint. Warning: host suffers multiple soft tissue contusions, suspected hairline fracture of the right tibia, fracture of the left ulnar, risk of hypothermia. Warning: shadow energy core damage, intensifying energy leakage. Current energy 11. 7 standard units steadily decreasing. Temporary optical camouflage unit completely burned out. The system's icy mechanical voice was like frost upon snow. The dire straits seemed never to have left, only to have changed form. He could not remain in the water. He would die from hypothermia. Gritting his teeth, Lin Feng endured the searing pain, relying on the limited vision from the system's faint glow, and paddled desperately toward one side. The current was fierce. Every stroke pulled at his injuries, sending waves of dizziness through him. At last his fingers touched rough, slippery rock. The riverbank. With the last of his strength he struggled ashore, collapsing onto the cold hard rock. He gasped violently like a fish out of water, each breath tinged with the taste of blood and icy pain. After a brief rest he forced himself to sit up, leaning against a rock. He had to treat his injuries and assess his situation immediately. System: scan the surrounding environment. Analyze the rock structure. Locate the most likely exit or safe cave. Prioritize assessing the risk of recent collapse. He issued the command, fighting off dizziness. Command received. Environmental scanning. Scan complete. Current location: underground river system, depth approximately 135 meters. Overall rock structure is stable. However, 300 meters to the southeast, extensive old and new fissures are present in the rock layer with chaotic energy fluctuations, presumed to be caused by the impact of the shadow wreckage. Stability low. Risk of secondary collapse exists. 450 meters to the northwest, a faint airflow is detected. A fissure or cave leading to the surface may exist. An exit. A glimmer of hope rose in Lin Feng's heart. But the collapse risk zone 300 meters away hung over him like a suspended sword. And covering the 450-meter distance in his current state was far too difficult. He had to treat his injuries first. He looked at the dimly glowing energy core, and a bold idea surfaced once more. System: retrieve fragmented knowledge from basic biomechanical structure and unknown alloy formula. Combine with available materials unknown toughness alloy fragments of ultra-micro energy conduction circuit, using the energy core as a power source to construct a temporary external fixation brace. Objective: stabilize fractures and provide minimal assisted mobility. This was the only solution he could think of, using alien technology and materials to fashion himself a splint. Analyzing command. Feasibility 67. Estimated energy consumption 2 units. Materials required: unknown toughness alloy X1, ultra-micro energy conduction circuit X several. Execute. Execute. In the next moment the energy core brightened again. Though the light was not strong, the energy flow it emitted was exceptionally precise. The silver-gray alloy from the inventory, along with several hair-thin conduction circuits, floated up. Wrapped in a faint blue glow, as if manipulated by an invisible skillful hand, they rapidly began to shape and assemble. They did not form a common splint. Instead, they became a miniature futuristic exoskeletal frame, precisely covering and clamping his fractured left arm and right leg. The cold metal clung tightly to his skin, bringing a strange numbness that instantly greatly alleviated the pain. Biomechanical auxiliary brace temporary deployment complete. Stability medium. Can provide approximately 25 weight-bearing assistance. Continuous energy consumption 0. 1 units per hour. It worked. A surge of joy filled Lin Feng. He tried to stand up slowly with the brace's support. Though still agonizing, his leg could at least bear some weight and his left arm could move slightly. He had to leave the riverbank immediately and move toward the northwest, where the airflow originated. This place was not safe. The search party upstream might soon find a way down, where the collapse risk zone could become unstable at any moment. He picked up a thick branch washed ashore to use as a crutch, carefully tucked the dim energy core into his inner pocket, and began limping painfully along the riverbank toward the northwest. Darkness, solitude, pain, cold. Every step was torment. The system's faint glow was his only direction and solace. After an unknown duration, the terrain began to rise gently and the sound of water gradually faded. He sensed that the faint airflow had indeed become more noticeable. Suddenly. Alert! High-energy life form detected. Direction directly ahead upstream of the underground river rapidly approaching. Count 3. Threat level medium. The system's piercing alarm blared without warning. Lin Feng halted abruptly, his heart clenching. He gripped the wooden stick tightly, staring into the darkness ahead. High-energy life forms. What were they? Subterranean creatures. Or another alien construct. Splash, splash, clear sounds of water came from the dark river ahead, accompanied by the noise of some creature paddling forward. 3 vague silhouettes emitting a faint green phosphorescence appeared at the edge of the system's scanning interface. They were approaching his location at a leisurely pace. They seemed to have detected him. No sooner had he escaped one peril than he fell into another dead end. Cold sweat instantly oozed from Lin Feng's forehead, mingling with the damp moisture of the underground river. He clutched the wooden stick tightly in his hand, his body taut, using the rock as cover while fixing his gaze on the dark waterway ahead. The 3 faintly glowing green outlines drew closer, their paddling sounds growing clearer. At last they entered the dim range of the system's faint light. Contrary to Lin Feng's expectations, they were neither ferocious subterranean monsters nor mechanical constructs, but 3 large, strangely shaped fish. Their bodies were a translucent grayish-white, revealing vague skeletal structures within. The pale green glow emanated from lantern-like luminous organs hanging beneath their heads, flickering rhythmically and casting reflections on the dark water's surface. They seemed curious about Lin Feng, an uninvited guest halting a dozen meters away. Swishing their tail fins, they hovered in the water, turning their eyeless heads toward him. Scan complete. Target identified as a specialized subterranean river creature. The fluorescent pouch loach. Contains weak bioelectric energy. Docile temperament. Primarily feeds on aquatic microorganisms and minerals. Luminous organ used for courtship and prey attraction. Threat level reassessed extremely low. The system's prompt allowed Lin Feng to exhale deeply, his taut nerves suddenly relaxing as he nearly collapsed to the ground in exhaustion. It was a false alarm after all. Yet these peculiar creatures offered him a new revelation. This underground river was not a lifeless void but hosted a unique ecosystem. Where there were living beings, there might be other exits and sources of food. The 3 fluorescent pouch loaches, apparently confirming that the faintly blue-glowing object the system interface posed no threat, slowly turned and swam toward the opposite bank. Their light illuminated that shore, and Lin Feng was astonished to discover a sparse patch of fungal plants emitting a soft white glow. These fungi resembled miniature corals clustered together. Their light, though faint, was steady and enduring, casting a hazy, dreamlike radiance over the area. Unknown fluorescent fungal community discovered. Scanning analysis. Rich in specific organic compounds and trace elements. Edibility assessment high. Weak bioelectric field detected. Suspected symbiotic relationship with fluorescent pouch loach. Food. Lin Feng's heart leaped with joy. This was a godsend. He immediately leaned on his wooden stick and cautiously approached the fluorescent fungal grove. Up close he marveled at the wonder of these fungi. Their glow was not constant. When his fingers drew near, the cap's light intensified slightly, as if responding to his approach. Carefully he plucked a small piece and placed it in his mouth. It was crisp with a peculiar sweetness, and soon after swallowing, a faint warmth spread from his stomach, dispelling some of the chill. He quickly gathered enough to sate his hunger and devoured it ravenously. Though insufficient to fully restore his strength, it at least alleviated the gnawing hunger and weakness. As he ate, the 3 fluorescent pouch loaches returned to the area. They circled the largest glowing fungus, their luminous organs flickering faster, and the fungus brightened in response as if in communication. Then the loaches gently touched the fungus base with their mouths, and the fungus secreted tiny glowing particles that the loaches sucked in. A wondrous symbiotic scene. But Lin Feng's attention was drawn to the base of the largest glowing fungus. In the crevice between the stalk and the rock he glimpsed an unusual metallic reflection. His heart stirred and he carefully moved over, parting the dense fungal growth. It was a small twisted scorched piece of metal, still carrying an extremely faint familiar energy fluctuation, a fragment of the shadow wreckage. Likely flung here during the explosion or crash, it had been accidentally covered by the fungi. More importantly, beneath the metal on the rock he discovered traces of artificial carving. Though eroded by time and microorganisms into obscurity, they were unmistakably marks of human activity. And the traces extended toward the rock wall behind the fungal grove. Suppressing his excitement, he carefully examined that rock face. At last he found a crack almost entirely concealed by moss and mineral deposits. This crack was not natural, its edges were relatively regular, more like a fissure above an ancient stone door. Airflow. That faint breeze was continuously blowing from this very crack. There had once been an entrance here. Perhaps an abandoned mine tunnel or a long-forgotten refuge, later buried and blocked by geological shifts. Hope rekindled. But a new problem arose: how to open it. The crack was too narrow to pass through. Force it wider. With his current state and tools, it was nearly impossible. His gaze fell back on the largest glowing fungus and the 3 fluorescent pouch loaches. The system said they contained bioelectric energy and exchanged energy with the fungi. A bold, almost fantastical plan began to form in his mind. System reverse analyze the energy exchange pattern between the fluorescent fungi and the pouch loaches. Calculate whether the energy core can serve as a bridge to temporarily amplify the loach's bioelectric output and direct it to specific areas of this rock layer. Objective: use high-intensity bioelectric pulses to resonantly disrupt the internal rock structure and widen the crack. This plan was mad and risky. Failure could deplete the remaining energy or even trigger unforeseen consequences. Command analyzing. Building energy model. Simulation calculation. Plan feasibility 41. 7. Risks: possible irreversible impact on local symbiotic ecosystem, possible small-scale rock instability, energy core overload. Estimated energy consumption 8 units. Execute. A 41. 7 success rate. Should he gamble? Lin Feng glanced back at the pitch-black downstream and the potential collapse zone to the southeast. He had no retreat. Execute. He growled through gritted teeth. Carefully he took out the dim energy core and placed it beside the largest glowing fungus. Then, focusing all his will, he guided the energy core through the system to emit an extremely fine, specially frequency-tuned energy stream, gently infusing it into the glowing fungus. The glowing fungus blazed brilliantly, its light blinding. Then, as if in a chain reaction, all the surrounding fluorescent fungi began flickering at an extremely high frequency. The 3 fluorescent pouch loaches, intensely stimulated, grew extraordinarily excited. Their luminous organs blazed with unprecedented brightness, unleashing vast bioelectric energy. Through their mysterious connection with the fungi, this energy was channeled and amplified by the external, more powerful flow from the energy core. Ultimately, all the energy coalesced into a visible pale green, intense electrical pulse, like a twisted lightning bolt striking fiercely at the rock crevice. Boom! A dull roar echoed through the underground space. Electric light shot from the rock crack as countless fragments of stone rained down. The crack was visibly expanding and crumbling. It worked. But before Lin Feng could rejoice, the system alarm blared again. Warning: energy core overload. Output interrupted. Warning: high-intensity energy pulse has triggered a chain reaction in the rock structure. Upstream area stability rapidly declining. Large-scale collapse expected within 300 seconds. Warning: unknown high-intensity energy signal source activated by the pulse. Signal source located downstream, deep beneath the original shadow wreckage. Signal signature analysis: not shadow sequence. Repeat: not shadow sequence. A path ahead was about to open. A catastrophe loomed behind, and from the deeper darkness an even more unknown and terrifying signal had been accidentally awakened. A thunderous rumble echoed as if a giant beast was turning underground. The deep muffled sound continued to resonate from the abyss behind him, causing the entire earth to tremble slightly. Cracks on the cliff spread rapidly like a spider's web, and larger stones began to fall in succession, splashing water everywhere. 300 seconds. Only 5 minutes. Lin Feng's pupils contracted, the desire for survival overwhelming all pain and fatigue. He grabbed the energy core on the ground, which had dimmed and even developed fine cracks due to overload, without a moment's hesitation, and stuffed it into his bosom. Ahead, the rock wall that had been struck by biological electric pulses had already cracked open, revealing a dark hole barely large enough for a person to crawl through, with stale, murky air pouring out, carrying a faint breath of the outside world. A path to survival. He hesitated not at all, threw away his wooden stick and scrambled towards the opening, with all his limbs almost rolling as he went. The excruciating pain from his fractures was bearable due to the temporary brace, but every exertion made his vision fade to black. Just as half of his body was about to enter the opening, boom! A sound far more terrifying than before echoed from behind, accompanied by the ear-splitting sound of rocks grinding and breaking. A large section of rock layers in the southeast finally collapsed entirely, cascading down like a landslide. The immense impact even stirred up waves in the underground river, with murky waters swirling and crashing wildly against the surroundings. A powerful gust of air mixed with dust slammed into Lin Feng's back, pushing him deep into the narrow passage. He dared not look back and could only crawl desperately forward along the ancient mine passage that was clearly man-made but had twisted and deformed due to the collapse. Behind him, the sounds of doom and collapse roared as if the entire underground world was being destroyed behind him. Darkness, suffocation, pressure. Time lost all meaning. He did not know how long he crawled, but the distant thunderous noise behind him gradually faded, leaving only his heavy labored breaths and the sound of his body scraping against the rock walls. The passage began to incline upwards. A faint grayish light mixed with cold fresh air seeped in from around the corner ahead. It was daylight. Hope surged into his body like a powerful stimulant, and he summoned his last strength to move laboriously toward that glimmer of light. Finally, he pushed aside a thicket of thorns growing at the exit and thrust his head out. The cold, piercing rain instantly hit his face, but it made him feel incredibly awake and alive. Before him was a hazy gray scene. The sky was not yet fully bright, and a cold drizzle fell. He found himself at the bottom of a very secluded hollow surrounded by steep rock walls covered in shrubs and moss, with the exit hidden behind a pile of rubble and dense vines, making it extremely hard to find. He escaped. The sense of relief from completely leaving the danger washed over him, accompanied by overwhelming pain and fatigue. He collapsed into the cold mud, the rain washing away the grime and blood covering him, feeling the exhaustion of having survived a disaster. But just a few seconds later he forced himself to struggle and sit up again. He could not stay. The commotion here was too loud, someone would come to check soon. Moreover, his injuries needed immediate attention and the energy core also required repair. He looked around and found that this hollow seemed to be a distance away from the previous industrial wasteland, closer to the foothills of the countryside. He needed a place that was absolutely safe. With a vague memory of the nearby terrain, he recalled that on the other side of this hillside there was a small weather observation station that had long been abandoned, almost forgotten. That's the place. He gritted his teeth, using the support of the temporary brace, dragging his battered body step by step toward the direction of his memory. The sky gradually brightened and the rain eased. The industrial wasteland had long been completely sealed off with warning lines drawn for several kilometers. Military vehicles, engineering vehicles and several unmarked black vans were parked around. At the entrance of the underground space the atmosphere was tense. The team leader who had led the operation previously stood with hands at his sides, reporting to an elderly man in front of him. The elderly man was dressed in a neatly pressed Zhongshan suit, his hair combed meticulously and his sharp gaze resembled that of a hawk. Although he appeared to be nearly 60, he stood tall, exuding an aura of authority. Behind him stood several men and women dressed in various outfits. Some wore white lab coats and held tablets, while others were in sharp combat uniforms, their eyes scanning the surroundings with vigilance. They were members of the highest-level expert group Dragon Team, urgently dispatched from the capital. And this elderly man was the person in charge, codenamed Old Zhou. This is the situation. When we arrived, the energy signal suddenly disappeared and we only found large unknown debris and signs of battle. We later tracked it to an underground entrance but encountered severe collapses. Preliminary assessments suggest the target may have survived and escaped through other unknown exits using the collapse. The team leader respectfully finished his report and presented the dull black metal piece he had found at the edge of the crack with both hands. Old Zhou said nothing, just took the piece of metal, running his fingers over it meticulously, feeling its unusual material and the lingering strange warmth. His gaze became incredibly deep. He approached the blasted underground entrance and looked down where it was partially blocked by collapsed boulders and mud, with engineering personnel nervously conducting cleanup and reinforcement. A young female researcher in a white coat hurried over with a tablet, her tone filled with incredulous excitement. Old Zhou, the preliminary analysis results are out. The residual energy spectrum on site is completely different from any known technological system worldwide. And the biological mechanical structure of the debris. This is absolutely a groundbreaking discovery. Also, erase the preliminary scan of that metal piece. Old Zhou raised his hand to stop her further words, yet his gaze remained fixed on the deep cave entrance. Xiaochen, he said slowly, his voice steady and powerful, what do you think about that person? The team leader Xiaochen paused briefly before cautiously replying. He acts decisively, has a strong ability to utilize his environment and seems to master some technology we cannot comprehend, capable of instantaneously shielding energy signals, and may even have triggered the subsequent collapse to escape. The danger level is extremely high. Old Zhou shook his head slightly, his lips seemingly curling into an almost imperceptible arc. Danger. Perhaps. But you're looking at the problem from the wrong angle. He turned around, his gaze sweeping over all the experts and soldiers present. A person who masters unknown technology yet can survive under such a monstrous attack, and may have even engaged with it and taken away crucial items. He raised the cold metal piece in his hand. Before we can determine whether he is friend or foe, he is first and foremost a tremendous opportunity, a key that could potentially break the existing framework. He is heavily injured and will undoubtedly require resources and a concealed spot to recover, not to mention an understanding of the technology in his hands. Old Zhou's eyes suddenly became incredibly sharp. Act immediately. First, expand the blockade radius to 15 kilometers. Second, employ all technical means to monitor any abnormal energy fluctuations, medical supplies flowing, and even garbage collection information in the area. Third, contact the local system. I want the registration materials of all abandoned factories, mines, and remote houses in the vicinity, especially those with independent energy sources and ample space. Find him. Old Zhou's voice was resolute. Before he is found by other forces, or before the trouble he causes becomes even greater. I need to have a talk with him. End of chapter 9. The icy rain hammered against the rusted iron roof, producing a monotonous and irritating patter. Lin Feng curled up in a corner of the abandoned weather station's main control room, wrapped in a moldy military coat he had scavenged from a derelict duty room, yet he still couldn't stop shivering. Every cough sent a sharp pain through his chest, and the taste of rust-like blood filled his throat. Though the fractures in his left arm and right leg were stabilized by temporary splints, the persistent dull ache and high fever blurred his consciousness intermittently. Worst of all was the energy core cradled in his arms. Its surface bore alarming cracks, its glow nearly extinguished save for a faint stubborn flicker of azure at its very heart, like the flame of his own life. Warning: host body temperature 38. 9C multiple soft tissue infections, minor internal bleeding. Warning: energy core structural integrity compromised, energy leakage rate rising. Current energy 9. 1 standard unit continuously declining. Estimated time to complete failure 71 hours 32 minutes. Temporary biomechanical brace energy supply insufficient, functional efficiency reduced to 15. The system's prompts became intermittent and faint as if running low on power along with the weakening core. Can't fall. Absolutely cannot fall here. Lin Feng bit his tongue hard, the sharp pain momentarily dispelling his drowsy consciousness. He had to repair the energy core immediately, at least stop the energy leakage. That was the root of all his hope. He struggled to a dust-covered workbench and carefully placed the nearly extinguished core on it. From the system inventory he retrieved the few remaining materials, 1 unit of unknown toughness alloy fragments of ultra-micro energy conduction circuits and even the initial black metal fragment that still emitted a faint residual heat. The materials were pathetically scarce. System scan core damage and plan the optimal repair using available materials, he commanded hoarsely. Command received. Scanning. Generating plan. Plan 1, use unknown toughness alloy for external reinforcement to forcibly seal major cracks. Success rate 35. Risk may further damage internal precision structures leading to permanent output reduction. Plan 2, channel remaining energy to activate ultra-micro energy conduction circuit fragments, attempting to build a temporary internal energy diversion network to bypass the most damaged areas. Success rate 18. Risk failed energy guidance may cause instantaneous core collapse. Plan 3, combine plans 1 and 2 using the initially recovered shadow fragment same source material as an energy guidance medium and reinforcement material. Success rate 51. Estimated energy consumption 3 units. Risk still requires precise control, failure consequences as above. 51. This was the only gamble worth taking. Execute Plan 3. Lin Feng didn't hesitate. He took a deep breath, gently placed his hands over the dim core and the materials, closed his eyes and focused all his mental energy. The interface before his left eye glowed faintly, projecting the core's intricate, severely damaged microstructure and the particle state of the materials into his perception. Initiate micromaterial manipulation. Maximum precision. Command confirmed. Beginning output of guidance energy. A faint but highly concentrated stream of energy was drawn from the core's remaining glimmer and infused into his arms. The intense mental strain made his temples throb, veins bulged on his forehead, and cold sweat instantly soaked his underclothes. Under his control, the initial small black metal fragment first melted into a liquid metal shimmering with starlight, which, as if alive, precisely seeped into the largest crack of the energy core, performing basic structural filling and energy bridging. Next, the fragments of ultra-micro energy conduction circuits were activated like delicate nerve endings, carefully guided to connect with the core's still intact internal energy nodes, constructing temporary winding micro-energy channels. Finally, the unknown toughness alloy was stretched and extended, becoming extremely thin, like the toughest bandage tightly wrapped around the core's outermost layer for final reinforcement and sealing. The entire process was slow and exquisitely delicate, like performing microsurgery on a beating heart. Lin Feng's consciousness teetered on the edge of overload, and every subtle fluctuation of energy made his heart skip a beat. Time passed minute by minute. The rain outside stopped unnoticed, and a pale ray of sunlight streamed through the broken window frame, falling on the workbench. Finally, core repair complete. Major cracks sealed, energy leakage stopped. Internal temporary diversion network successfully constructed. Current energy 6. 1 standard units stable. Output power restored to 17 of rated value. Thud. Lin Feng could no longer hold on. He collapsed directly to the floor, gasping for breath as if just pulled from the water, unable to move even a finger. Yet his heart was filled with immense joy and a sense of achievement. It worked. On the workbench, the energy core's glow, though still dim, had stabilized, pulsing slowly and rhythmically like breathing. A faint but continuous stream of energy flowed back into his body, nourishing his parched form, and the operating efficiency of the braces on his left arm and right leg improved noticeably. Host status update: energy replenishing. Infection and fever require physical treatment. With energy, many things became easier. After resting a moment, he struggled to his feet and began using the system to scan the entire weather station. He discovered an abandoned small backup generator, rusted solid but with residual fuel inside. He also found some rusty tools, half a bottle of unopened distilled water, and even an old first aid kit containing expired anti-inflammatory drugs and bandages. For someone with micromanipulation abilities, a rusted generator was no problem. He spent 0.5 units of energy to easily remove the corrosion from key components and successfully started it with the found fuel. Rumble, the old generator emitted a deep, powerful roar, bringing long-lost electricity to this dead station. Though the voltage was unstable and the lights flickered, it meant light and energy. He boiled water, cleaned his wounds, swallowed the anti-inflammatory drugs, though expired. The system scan deemed them still somewhat effective, and rebandaged himself. After all this, he felt as if he had been pulled back from the brink of death. He sat by the roaring generator, sipping hot water in the dim flickering light, gazing at the steadily operating energy core on the workbench. Hope was rekindled in his heart. The low hum of the drone gradually faded, eventually disappearing entirely into the desolate wilderness. Lin Feng leaned against the cold, damp wall, slowly sliding down to sit on the ground, his heart still pounding violently in his chest. Cold sweat soaked through his back, mingling with the musty smell of his military coat, creating a sticky, icy discomfort. He couldn't stay any longer. This place was no longer safe. That drone might not have spotted him this time, but what about the next? Or the time after that? The nation's search network would only tighten its coverage, shrinking ever smaller. He had to gain the ability to protect himself and move on as quickly as possible. His gaze swept across the dilapidated weather station. The old generator, rusted equipment, discarded office supplies. All of these were potential resources. System: perform a full scan of all discarded items in the station, assess their recyclable value and prioritize materials that can be used to manufacture components for a low-power energy ray generator or short-range optical camouflage. Lin Feng commanded in his mind. Command received. Scanning. A faint blue light flickered in his left eye interface and invisible scanning beams spread out, covering the entire weather station. Scan complete. Recyclable items found: 1. Old generator core coil X1 copper, average purity, can be remelted and refined, can extract base material for high conductivity electromagnetic coil. 2. Damaged mercury barometer X1 contains a small amount of liquid metallic mercury, can extract trace amounts of liquid metal conductor. 3. High-strength aluminum alloy weather vane bracket X2, structural integrity acceptable, can be used for the external base of the energy ray generator. 4. Discarded military-grade battery pack X1, internal sulfuric acid has dried up but electrode plate structure is unique, can be disassembled to obtain high-performance electrode plates and some acidic compounds. 5. Various small steel tools, wrenches, screwdrivers, etc. can serve as supplementary common metal materials. The materials were limited and crucially they lacked the most essential energy conducting and focusing crystals. Directly manufacturing an energy weapon or optical camouflage was temporarily impossible. He had to adjust his goals. What was more realistic, a more urgent need? Concealment, mobility, or a limited capacity for counterattack. His eyes fell on the 2 high-strength aluminum alloy brackets and the pile of discarded tools. A simpler, more primitive design, yet perhaps more practical in the current environment, quickly took shape in his mind, leveraging his existing knowledge: an electromagnetic rail crossbow capable of firing metal projectiles. It didn't require complex crystals or energy focusers, just a powerful instantaneous current and sufficiently sturdy rails. This could perfectly utilize the repaired energy core for short-term high-energy discharge along with those high-strength aluminum alloys. Without further ado, Lin Feng sprang into action. He first dismantled the old generator completely, carefully extracting the densely wound copper coil inside. Activate micromaterial manipulation. Target: purify the copper coil, remelt and draw it into a standard cross-section superconducting coil. Basic. He gripped the coil of copper wire with both hands and the energy core output a steady stream of energy. Estimated energy consumption 0.8 units. Under a flash of azure light, the copper wire writhed in his hands like a living thing. Impurities were separated and stripped away. Its structure became denser and more uniform, eventually forming a segment of standard superconducting coil that shimmered with a high-quality metallic luster, thinner and tougher. Next, he picked up the 2 aluminum alloy brackets, using the same method to shape them into a pair of parallel rails about 60 centimeters long, complete with precision slots and heat-dissipating grooves, along with a crude but ergonomic crossbow stock frame. The most challenging part was the firing mechanism. He chose the heaviest adjustable wrench and a few of the strongest springs, reinforcing and modifying them through micromanipulation to create a rough hammer and trigger structure capable of withstanding immense electromagnetic forces. Finally, he tightly wound the superconducting coil around the rear section of the 2 rails, connecting the coil's ends to the high-performance electrode plates disassembled from the discarded military battery pack. The electrode plates were then linked to the energy core via several thin wires made of liquid metallic mercury extracted from the barometer. The entire process consumed a great deal of his mental energy and energy reserves. By the time the last component was assembled, over half the day had passed. A weapon of extremely bizarre appearance, full of makeshift elements yet exuding a cold technological aura, now rested in his hands. It had the shape of a crossbow but lacked a bowstring, replaced by 2 smooth aluminum alloy rails and a strange back end wrapped in copper coils connected to various wires. A crude scope scavenged from some discarded optical instrument was forcibly mounted on top. Simple electromagnetic rail crossbow, trial type 1, fabrication complete. Usable ammunition: any metal projectile with sufficient mass. Firing mode: single shot, manual reload. Energy consumption per shot 1.5 standard units. Estimated muzzle velocity pending testing. System assessment: crude, inefficient but sufficient to handle current threats. Although the system rated it as crude and inefficient, as Lin Feng stroked the cool rails, a profound sense of achievement filled him. This was his first true black tech weapon. He needed to test fire it to know its power. He moved to the window, carefully aiming at the trunk of a dead tree about 50 meters away. He loaded a thick screw rod about 10 centimeters long, sawed off from a tool, into the rails. Taking a deep breath, he pulled the trigger. Click, hum. A crisp hammer strike was followed by a high-frequency, teeth-grinding hum. The wrapped superconducting coil was instantly surged by a powerful current, generating an immensely strong instantaneous magnetic field. The screw rod propelled as if by an invisible giant handshot along the rails at high speed, even sparking faintly, then whoosh, thud. Almost the instant he pulled the trigger, a fist-sized hole exploded in the trunk of the bull-thick dead tree 50 meters away. Wood chips flew everywhere. The screw rod with undiminished force pierced through several bushes behind, finally embedding itself deep into a rock in the distance, leaving only a smoking small hole. The power far exceeded expectations. It was already comparable to or even surpassed traditional rifle bullets. However, the immense recoil numbed Lin Feng's arm, nearly causing him to lose his grip on the crossbow. The energy core reading instantly dropped by 1.5 units. Moreover, the rails showed slight deformation due to the intense heat and powerful Lorentz forces from the instantaneous discharge. Electromagnetic rail durability decreased 8. It is recommended to replace the current rails with materials that have higher heat resistance and strength. It is recommended to optimize the energy output mode to reduce waste. There were many issues, but it was sufficient. With this, he at least had a basic means of self-defense and hunting. Just as he was stroking the slightly worn rails, contemplating the next optimization step, warning. Detecting multiple human life signs approaching. Distance 300 meters. Direction east, hillside below. Movement speed relatively fast. Threat level medium. The system's alarm blared suddenly. Lin Feng's expression changed drastically. He immediately crouched low, pressing his eye to a crack in the window to look outside. He saw 5 or 6 figures on the eastern hillside below, moving in a skirmish line, cautiously searching towards the weather station. They wore ordinary outdoor jackets, but their movements were sharp, their eyes keen, constantly scanning the surroundings. In their hands, they held metal detectors and thermal imagers. Not military. But definitely not ordinary hikers. Were they coming for him? Or something else? The figures seemed to spot the vague outline of the weather station on the hillside, exchanged hand signals, quickened their pace, and moved directly to encircle it. The fleeting sense of security from just acquiring the weapon vanished instantly. Lin Feng's heart tightened again. He gripped the still-hot electromagnetic crossbow tightly, slowly loading a new bolt, a cut piece of rebar, into the rails. The cold sensation transmitted through the rough steel rebar to Lin Feng's fingertips as he half-squatted beneath the broken window ledge, intently watching the figures rapidly approaching outside through a narrow gap. There were 6 people in total. 2 by 2 they advanced in a standard tactical search formation, alternating in cover. The metal detectors and thermal sensors in their hands swept continuously over the ground and the abandoned buildings ahead, their movements professional and efficient, distinctly not those of ordinary civilians. They were coming for him. It was almost certain. Who were they? Officials shouldn't be in plain clothes, and their equipment would be better. Could it be some private organization or multinational corporation alerted to the news? Was it for the technology in his hands or for the alien remnants? Regardless of who they were, the newcomers meant trouble. Lin Feng's heart pounded heavily in his chest, and he deliberately slowed his breathing. He gently adjusted the angle of the electromagnetic crossbow, bringing the crude sight to bear on the team member at the front, who was less than 150 meters away. The opposing team seemed to sense something, suddenly stopping in their tracks, raising their thermal sensors to carefully scan the main structure of the weather station. "Boss, there's a weak heat source response. It's in the direction of the control room, but the signal is very chaotic and heavily interfered with by the background," the team member whispered into his earpiece. "Continue to approach. Be careful, the target may be armed with dangerous items." A calm order came through the earpiece. The 6 moved forward again, slowing their pace and becoming more vigilant. No more waiting. Once surrounded, he would have no chance. Lin Feng took a deep breath, suppressing the slight tremor in his arm caused by tension. His right hand slowly tightened around the rough trigger. Target 120 meters, currently using a large boulder as cover, peering out. Now is the time. Click, buzz. The familiar sound of the hammer and high-frequency buzzing exploded again. This time it sounded particularly harsh in the silent mountains. A blurry shadow ripped through the air at a speed difficult to capture by the naked eye. Almost at the moment the sound erupted. Bang! A muffled thud. The team member who had just poked his head out used a boulder the size of a basin as cover, which exploded violently. Debris scattered like shrapnel from a shell. Ugh! The team member screamed in agony, knocked to the ground by the massive impact and flying debris, a crack appearing on his helmet, blood instantly streaming down from his forehead. Although he was not directly hit, he was clearly stunned and temporarily incapacitated. Enemy attack. 10 o'clock direction. Inside the abandoned building. The remaining 5 reacted swiftly, almost diving to the ground the moment the gun fired, seeking cover with astonishing speed. What weapon? A rocket launcher. Someone shouted in horror. The power of that boulder explosion was too terrifying. Doesn't look like it. No visible smoke. Be careful. Find cover. Lin Feng, having hit his target, did not pause. He quickly pulled the rough lever mechanism and slid another polished steel bar into the rail. The rail of the electromagnetic crossbow became even hotter with the next shot, even showing slight deformation. Rail durability 74. Overheat warning. He paid no heed to this, aiming again, this time at another team member trying to flank from the side, who was rushing toward a large tree. Buzz. Second shot. The steel bar transformed into a deadly shadow. Click. Boom. The trunk of the tree, large enough for one person to hug, was directly pierced. Wood chips flew everywhere. The steel bar grazed the back of the team member, tearing a large hole in his backpack, scattering equipment all over the ground. The team member, terrified, shrieked and rolled back behind the tree, no longer daring to poke his head out. Suppressing fire. Firepower coverage. The opposing commander, clearly stunned, couldn't determine the source and type of attack and could only order blind firing. Instantly, the sound of assault rifles shattered the silence of the mountains. Bullets poured down on the control room of the weather station like a rainstorm, shattering bricks, blowing apart window frames and scattering glass shards. Lin Feng had already withdrawn his head, dense bullets whizzing past over him, striking the wall behind with popping sounds. He crouched beneath the wall, feeling the old building tremble under the hail of bullets, his heart racing. The enemy's firepower was fierce, but for now it posed no direct threat to him. The thick concrete walls provided excellent protection. However, they were completely pinned down behind their cover, not daring to advance easily. A stalemate. Lin Feng needed this stalemate. He needed to buy time to think of a strategy. He checked the energy core for 6 units of energy remaining. He could fire 2 more shots at most. Moreover, the rail would probably not withstand another shot. The enemy's firepower began to thin out, clearly realizing that blind firing was not very effective. The target weapon is highly powerful, but its firing rate seems quite slow. Group B, go around from the west side and use grenades. The commander changed tactics. Oh no. Lin Feng's expression changed as he heard their shouts. If they flanked him and threw grenades, it would truly be the end. He had to stop them. He suddenly leaned forward, risking being struck by stray bullets, once again raising the electromagnetic crossbow, roughly aiming at the moving figure on the west side. Buzz. Third shot. This time he didn't even aim carefully. Ah. A piercing scream rang out. It seemed the shot had hit its mark. From the group attempting to flank on the west side, one person's thigh was torn open by the high-speed flying steel bar, almost severed, collapsing to the ground and wailing endlessly. The flanking operation was forcibly halted. But the electromagnetic crossbow in Lin Feng's hands also emitted a groan of being overburdened. Snap. With a crisp sound, the aluminum alloy rail on the right side finally deformed and broke due to overheating and continuous impacts. It was completely destroyed. Electromagnetic rail crossbow prototype I has been damaged. Just when it seemed things couldn't get worse. His weapon seems to be broken. Or he's out of ammo. Suppressing fire stopped. Group A, follow me. Charge. The enemy commander keenly sensed the anomaly and immediately ordered the last 2 remaining combatants to charge. 3 figures leaped out from behind cover like leopards, sprinting towards the weather station's entrance. Lin Feng's face turned pale as he discarded the broken electromagnetic crossbow and instinctively reached for the only remaining adjustable wrench he had brought with him. It's over. Unarmed, how could he fight against 3 well-trained, heavily armed personnel? Just at this critical moment, wail, wail, the piercing and familiar sound of police sirens suddenly approached from the foot of the mountain like music from heaven. And not just one. Following that was the loud voice from the loudspeaker, filled with undeniable authority: "We are the National Security Forces. Everyone at the foot of the mountain, put down your weapons immediately and cease resistance. Repeat, put down your weapons immediately. The aerial units are in position. Any movement will be regarded as hostile behavior and will be met with decisive retaliation." Almost simultaneously with the shout, a larger military drone, more imposing in design, swooped down from the clouds, its optical probe and suspected weapon mounts clearly visible, locking onto this area below. The 3 armed personnel who had just charged out abruptly came to a halt, looking uncertainly towards the road below and the drone in the sky, glancing at the nearby weather station, their faces filled with reluctance and struggle. Retreat. The leading commander decisively shouted through gritted teeth, unhesitatingly turning to help the team member with the injured thigh, while the other 2 helped the dazed one, hastily retreating into the dense forest in the opposite direction of the road, even neglecting to collect their fallen comrades' equipment. They weren't their people. Lin Feng leaned against the wall, slowly sliding down to the ground, breathing heavily, soaked in cold sweat. He was saved. Temporarily saved. But who had come? Friend or foe? He struggled to crawl to the window, cautiously peering out. He saw several black SUVs and a clearly designated signal jamming vehicle had stopped on the road below, with more soldiers in black combat gear, well-equipped, quickly disembarking to establish a blockade. The military drone in the air circled like a vulture, monitoring everything. Unlike the previous batch of private armed personnel, this was true national power, well-trained and imposing. A person who appeared to be an officer raised binoculars, looking far towards the abandoned weather station atop the mountain. The eyes of the 2 seemed to briefly collide across a distance of over 1,000 meters. Lin Feng's heart tightened again. He knew he had been thoroughly exposed. And this time what was coming was likely a truly irresistible force. What should he do? The mountain wind swept through, carrying the scent of gunpowder and blood. The abandoned meteorological station stood silently like a scarred lone boat after a storm, silhouetted against the rising twilight. Lin Feng leaned against the cold mottled wall, the sound of his rapid heartbeat reverberating in his eardrums. The flashing red and blue police lights on the road below, the deep humming of drones in the air, and the soldiers swiftly establishing a blockade like black boulders wove an invisible and massive net that enveloped him on this mountaintop. There was nowhere to escape. This realization was cold and cruel. He glanced at the completely wrecked electromagnetic crossbow in his hand, its rail twisted and broken, and sensed the core in his arms, which had only 6 units of energy left and could not be rapidly replenished. Resisting. It would be utterly meaningless. The other side represented the machinery of the state, wielding overwhelming power and resources. The drone hovering in the air could erase him and this meteorological station from the map with a single missile. Surrender. Hand over the core and the system. And then what? Be dissected for research. Lose freedom forever. Perhaps even invite disaster upon himself. He could trust no one, especially when facing technology that transcended comprehension. He could not imagine what inherent greed and fear within human nature might produce. Cold sweat trickled down from his brow again. His gaze quickly scanned the room, wrecked generators, scattered tools, those meager supplies of food and water. There was no bargaining chip. Just as his mind was in turmoil, new movements occurred down the mountain. The door of a conspicuous command vehicle opened and a figure stepped out. It was not a soldier clad in tactical gear as imagined, but a tall middle-aged man wearing a dark trench coat. He held a loudspeaker, walking a few steps forward under the guard of a team of soldiers looking up towards the meteorological station atop the mountain. The twilight blurred his features, yet a steady aura as solid as a mountain emanated from him. The voice from the loudspeaker amplified and echoed clearly in the mountain hollow, calm in tone, even laced with a deliberate gentleness, yet contained undeniable authority. Hello friends in the meteorological station. Please do not be alarmed, we mean no harm. We are from the National Dragon Group Special Operations Unit. I am the person in charge, you can call me Zhou Xiong. Note the surname Zhou is carried over from Chapter 9 for character naming, but he is not Zhou Lao. We have come for you, but our purpose is not to capture or harm you. We witnessed the conflict that just occurred and saw the extraordinary abilities you displayed. We believe you possess something critically important, and because of this you are in tremendous danger. His words paused slightly, seemingly giving Lin Feng time to digest the information. The ones who attacked you are a notorious private military company known internationally as the Vulture Mercenaries. They are profit-driven, acting without ethical boundaries, resorting to any means to acquire cutting-edge technology. Their ability to find you means other forces could equally locate you. Your current situation is extremely perilous. Lin Feng's heart constricted sharply. Vulture Mercenaries. A private military company. Indeed. Zhou Xiong's voice became more earnest. As a lone fighter you cannot handle the possibly ceaseless troubles that may come next. You need protection, you need resources, you need to truly understand and safely utilize the technology in your hands. And we can provide you with all of this. We hope you can trust us and step out voluntarily to talk with us. We can guarantee your personal safety and offer you the respect and treatment you deserve. Your technology may hold immeasurable value for our nation and even for all of human civilization. Promises, analyses of advantages and disadvantages, demonstrations of value. His discourse was a blend of soft and hard approaches, highlighting the severity of external threats while extending an olive branch for cooperation with a stance low enough, yet the absolute power behind it was indisputable. Lin Feng bit his lip tightly, his mind racing. How much of what the other side said was true? How much was false? The existence of the Vulture Mercenaries should be real. The attack he had just witnessed was proof. But what about after going out? Safety guarantee. Respect and treatment. Could these truly be trusted in the face of absolute power and interests? His system and technology were too astonishing. He dared not gamble that the other side would remain as gentle upon seeing the real thing. But what if he didn't go out? The other side had clearly locked this place down completely. A strong assault was merely a matter of time. Once they lost patience. Just as his internal struggle intensified and the scale began to tip towards a risky attempt to negotiate. Warning. A super high-intensity energy signal source has been detected as active again. Signal strength is rapidly rising. Location deep within the original underground river, unknown target. Signal feature analysis, possessing strong aggressiveness and spatial distortion characteristics. Warning, extremely high threat. Warning. The system's alarm pierced his mind like the sharpest ice pick. Almost simultaneously. Whoop buzz. A deep resonant hum that felt as though it could penetrate the soul did not travel through the air but directly affected a deeper level of perception emanating faintly from the depths of the earth. It was as if some ancient behemoth, having slept for billions of years, let out its first low roar after awakening beneath the crust. Below the mountain all the soldiers stirred almost simultaneously, warily looking towards the ground beneath their feet. The drone in the air also noticeably exhibited unstable shaking, the pilot seemingly struggling to adjust its posture. Zhou Xiong abruptly lowered the loudspeaker, pressed his ear to the headset, and his expression turned extremely grave as he listened intently. Report. Zhou Bureau. The Geological Monitoring Station reports. Strong abnormal infrasound waves and geomagnetic disturbances have appeared in the surrounding area. Source depth undetectable. The intensity is still rising. The drone control system is experiencing severe interference. The backup system is switching. That thing underground. That unknown signal source of the non-shadow sequence. It was not buried by the collapse. It was completely activated by the previous high-energy pulse. It seems it is about to emerge. Lin Feng's face turned as pale as paper in an instant. A stake machine was sealing him in front while a world-ending unknown threat was awakening behind. A dead end. A truly desperate situation with no way out. Zhou Xiong had evidently also realized the drastic change in circumstances and the dangers far exceeding expectations. He raised the loudspeaker once more, but the previous gentleness had vanished, replaced by an urgent and decisive tone. Friend inside. Do you hear me? Do you sense it? The situation has changed. The anomalies occurring now far exceed our estimates. It is extremely dangerous. This is no longer just your personal matter. I assure you, in my capacity as the highest authority of the Dragon Group and as a military officer. Now immediately come out and walk with us. This is the only chance for survival. We need to concentrate all our strength and wisdom to address the crisis at hand. Including yours. Please trust us. Time is running out. His voice carried an unprecedented urgency, even a hint of barely perceptible fear. Is it a trap? Or a genuine doomsday warning? Lin Feng leaned against the wall, slowly closing his eyes, his fingers digging tightly into the gaps in the wall. The tremors from the ground beneath him seemed increasingly pronounced. That deep subterranean hum sounded like a countdown to death. He must make a choice immediately. Chapter 13 End. The deep hum originating from the core of the earth not only did not weaken but rather sounded like a war drum, each beat heavier and more urgent than the last. The mountain beneath began to groan under the immense pressure, small rocks rolling down from the cliffs. The military drones in the sky swayed violently as if intoxicated, ultimately losing control and careening erratically towards the distant forest, igniting into a burst of flames. On the road below the mountain, all vehicle lights began to flash wildly, some even extinguishing, while electronic devices emitted deafening noises, completely malfunctioning. The trained soldiers maintained their formation, but their faces were filled with horror, tightly gripping their weapons while unaware of the enemy's location. This was a heavenly might that no human could resist. Zhou Chu. The intensity of the sonic waves has exceeded the safe threshold. The geomagnetic disturbances are interfering with all electronic devices. The source point is rising rapidly. Estimated to breach the surface soon. Right below the abandoned factory. The communication officer's voice trembled, barely contained within the remaining wired communication channel. Zhou Shun's face turned pale and he threw away the malfunctioning loudspeaker, pulling out his sidearm and shouting at all the soldiers, everyone on high combat alert. Target underground anomaly source. Prepare for engagement. His gaze fixed fiercely on the weather station atop the mountain, his voice cutting through the chaos with a finality. You inside. You heard that. This is not a personal grudge between us. This is a battle for survival. The last chance, come out. Or die together here. Inside the weather station, Lin Feng leaned against the violently shaking wall, gasping for breath, his heart racing as the alarm from the system pierced his mind, warning. Ultra-high intensity energy signal has reached the near-surface layer. Spatial distortion is rapidly increasing. Life forms cannot be analyzed. Immediate evasion is advised. Immediate evasion. Evade. Where to evade? The shadow of death gripped his heart like a cold hand. He glanced at the soldiers below, who though tense had not yet broken formation and were attempting to hold their ground, then looked at the dimly flickering energy core in his hand. Zhou Shun's words might have been calculated, but the impending disaster was all too real. Staying here alone meant certain death. It's a gamble. A glint of mad determination flashed in Lin Feng's eyes as he suddenly leaned out of the window, using all his strength to scream down the mountain and going out. I will go with you. But I need your support. The thing underground. It fears high-frequency energy. Especially high-frequency energy of the same source. This is the only leverage I can provide and the only thing that might work. Based on my understanding of the shadow wreckage and the energy core. Zhou Shun's eyes lit up and without hesitation he shouted, Team 1. Assault team. Move up the mountain for support. Hurry! 3 soldiers immediately broke formation, darting up the mountain like agile cheetahs, braving the increasingly violent tremors and falling debris. Almost simultaneously, boom. A terrifying roar as if from the depths of primordial chaos erupted suddenly from the direction of the abandoned factory several kilometers away. The earth was easily ripped apart like a fragile eggshell. A massive pillar of blazing heat over 100 meters in diameter surged skyward amidst molten rock and indescribable dark purple energy streams. It vaporized and obliterated everything in that area, ruins, vehicles, and even the landscape. The sky was instantly dyed a bizarre mix of dark red and purple black. The terrifying shockwave of energy spread outwards like a tsunami, snapping trees and shattering rocks. Amidst the destructive energy beam, a colossal shadow slowly rose. It was not a complete entity but rather a massive presence composed of boiling lava, twisted shadows and violent purple energy, something indescribable. Countless tendrils resembling lava stretched out from its core, flailing wildly through the air, each strike accompanied by a tearing shriek that rent the very fabric of space and triggered further energy explosions. A chaotic, brutal mental pressure filled with a desire for destruction enveloped the entire area. Alarm! Lava nightmare, a high-dimensional energy lifeform larval unstable state has breached the surface. Detecting ultra-high heat sources, distortion, force fields, mental pollution. Extreme danger. Lin Feng felt as if his brain had been struck by a heavy hammer, a wave of intense pain and dizziness crashing over him as if countless mad whispers were screaming in his ears. Below the mountain, the soldiers, though gripped by extreme fear, still opened fire under Zhou Shun's furious commands. Bullets from rifles and machine guns rained down on the colossal entity. But whether from solid bullets or grenades, as they neared a certain range of the entity, they were instantly deflected, melted, or even vaporized by the distorted force field and extreme temperatures. It was hardly even a scratch. Damn it. Zhou Sheng's eyes widened in rage. This enemy was far beyond the capabilities of conventional weapons. High-frequency energy. He just mentioned high-frequency energy. Zhou Sheng suddenly recalled Lin Feng's words, shouting hoarsely at the first team that had just rushed up the slope. Ask him how to use it. A soldier thrust a heavy backup battery-equipped military communicator into Lin Feng's hands. Lin Feng fixed his gaze on the massive lava entity that was continuously drawing energy from the ground, growing even larger, and shouted rapidly into the communicator its core. Attack its core. There is a point of maximum energy concentration slightly below the center of its main body. Use your strongest energy weapons to strike there. Or give me a launcher and I'll overload my energy core and shoot it out. This was the only weakness he had detected through system scanning. Without any hesitation, Zhou Sheng immediately ordered deploy the Zhulong individual energy cannon. Hurry! Target the monster's core. Full power charge. At the back of the team, 2 soldiers quickly unloaded a scythe-looking weapon with a thick barrel from a truck that had been specially reinforced against electromagnetic interference, rapidly setting it up and charging it. This was a high-energy weapon still in the experimental stage, equipped for the Dragon team. The Zhulong cannon began to gather a bright white light, energy readings skyrocketing. Sensing the threat, the lava nightmare let out a roar that tore through the spirit, and several massive lava tendrils rose violently, crashing down towards both the army's position and the weather station atop the mountain with devastating energy. It was attacking both locations simultaneously. There's no time to charge. The soldier operating the Zhulong shouted in despair. The speed of the tendrils was too fast. At the mountain's peak, Lin Feng looked pale as he watched the lava tendrils crashing down like meteorites, glancing at the core in his arms, which had only 6 units of energy left and was covered in cracks. I'm going for it. He snatched an offensive grenade from a soldier's belt, yelling, "Cover me." Then he recklessly charged towards a relatively open boulder platform to the side. What are you doing? The soldier cried out in horror. Lin Feng reached the edge of the platform, looking at the sky-shrouding lava tendrils, a glint of madness flashing in his eyes. He suddenly pulled the pin from the grenade but did not throw it. Instead, he pressed the dim energy core firmly against the grenade. System. Maximum output. Reverse all energy into the core to trigger structural resonance. Overload it. Warning. This operation will cause the energy core to completely collapse and explode. Power cannot be estimated. Success rate 9. Confirm. Confirm. Lin Feng used all his strength, throwing the grenade with the energy core pressed against it like a baseball, hurling it towards the midsection of the incoming lava tendril. He was not attacking the core but rather this tendril. He needed to buy precious seconds for the Zhulong below. The energy core glowed with blinding blue light as it flew. It was like a supernova about to explode. The lava tendril seemed to sense the extreme instability of the violent energy contained within that small object, showing a hint of hesitation and fear as it contracted. Now's the time. Boom. Blue and white light instantly engulfed everything. A blast far more terrifying than any prior explosion erupted in the sky. The violent energy shockwave collided, obliterated, and tore apart with the dark purple energy contained within the lava tendrils. The massive lava tendril was brutally severed by the small explosion, losing a third of its length. Scorching lava and energy fragments splattered like a torrential rain. Zhulong. Launch. Zhou Sheng seized this fleeting opportunity, shouting with rage. Zoom. A beam of white energy heated to the extreme pierced through the dark red sky like a spear of judgment, striking precisely at the pulsating energy core slightly below the center of the massive lava entity. Puff. A strange sound as if a red-hot iron were plunged into ice water echoed. Ah. The lava nightmare let out an unprecedented, terrifying howl of pain and rage. Its core was melted by the Zhulong energy beam, creating a massive hole, dark purple energy spraying out like blood. Its form began to destabilize, twisting and flickering violently. It suddenly retracted all its tendrils, letting out a final roar filled with unwillingness as its massive body slowly sank into the still erupting chasm of lava and energy, vanishing from sight. The destructive energy beam also extinguished. The dark red sky slowly faded and the earth's tremors gradually ceased. Only a devastated battlefield remained, with flames burning everywhere and the survivors lost in a deathly silence. Lin Feng collapsed weakly onto the boulder platform, watching the widening chasm slowly close, gasping for breath, his body trembling uncontrollably. Below the mountain, Zhou Sheng slowly lowered his binoculars, looking complexly at the figure atop the mountain, and spoke into the communicator, his voice hoarse, "Bring him down. Be careful. He is ours." Chapter 14 End. When Lin Feng was carefully helped down the mountain by 2 soldiers, he was nearly collapsing from exhaustion. The physical pain, the immense mental depletion, and the profound inner emptiness caused by the complete collapse of his energy core made his steps unsteady and his vision blur before his eyes. The scene at the foot of the mountain was shocking. The ground looked as if it had been plowed by a giant plow, covered with cracks and scorched craters. Several military vehicles were twisted out of shape by flying molten rocks and were even still burning. The air was thick with the heavy smell of sulfur ozone and an indescribable eerie aura, as if the spirit itself had been scorched. Soldiers were busily treating the wounded, extinguishing flames and establishing new temporary defense lines. Each face still bore the pallor of lingering fear, but their eyes were exceptionally resolute. Zhou Song stood beside a relatively intact command vehicle, his trench coat covered in dust, holding a satellite phone and arranging follow-up matters in an urgent tone. Seeing Lin Feng descending, he quickly finished his conversation and hung up his sharp gaze, sweeping over. That gaze was tangible, carrying scrutiny, inquiry, and a trace of barely concealed shock. He carefully examined Lin Feng, this young man who looked so youthful, disheveled, and even needed support to stand, yet possessed the power to briefly contend with that cataclysmic existence and had made such decisive and even reckless actions at the critical moment. Immediately conduct a medical examination and treat the wounds. Administer broad-spectrum anti-infection agents and sedatives, Zhou Song instructed the military doctor beside him, his tone leaving no room for argument. Then he added, be gentle. He did not question him immediately, but first ensured Lin Feng's physical condition. This was both a gesture and a form of control. Lin Feng did not resist allowing the military doctor to examine his wounds, clean and bandage them, and administer the injections. The cool sedative flowed into his bloodstream, slightly alleviating the excessive tension in his nerves, but his mind was racing. He was observing the soldiers' equipment, their operational efficiency, and the way they looked at Zhou Song, a gaze mixed with reverence and absolute trust. He was assessing the strength of the Dragon Group and the man Zhou Song himself. Soon a specially modified medical vehicle, its interior resembling a small mobile laboratory, drove up. Get in. It's not safe here, we need to relocate immediately, Zhou Song said tersely as he opened the door. The vehicle started and, escorted by 3 other off-road vehicles, drove away from this devastated area. Through the window, Lin Feng could see larger troops moving in behind, more engineering and research vehicles arriving to completely seal off and investigate the land that had just erupted with divine miracle and disaster. The convoy did not head toward the city but traveled along remote roads for about an hour, finally entering a secret base hidden within a mountain. The heavy alloy doors slowly opened and then closed, sealing off the outside world completely. Inside the base was brightly lit, exuding a cold technological atmosphere. Everywhere there were researchers in white lab coats and technicians moving briskly with various advanced instruments and equipment operating, emitting a low hum. The air circulation system brought clean but slightly dry air. Lin Feng was led into a spacious room. It did not resemble a prison but rather a well-equipped medical observation room or a high-level safe house. There was a bed, a private bathroom, and even a bookshelf and a desk. But the walls were made of special alloy guards stood at the door, and invisible surveillance was undoubtedly omnipresent. You need rest. Food and water will be brought. If you need anything you can ring the bell, Zhou Song said from the doorway without entering. I know you have many questions, and so do I. But right now your physical condition is the priority. When you feel better, we'll talk. His attitude remained restrained and polite, but the invisible pressure and sense of control were undiminished. He did not rush to extract information but instead appeared extremely patient, which made Lin Feng feel a deeper pressure. Having said that, Zhou Song turned and left, the alloy door sliding shut silently. Only Lin Feng remained in the room. He slowly walked to the bed and sat down, feeling the drowsiness from the sedative but without any sleepiness. He checked himself. The fractures had been professionally set and treated, and the infection was under control. But in his mind the system interface had become exceptionally dim, as if it might go out at any moment. The destruction of the energy core seemed to have caused some fundamental damage to the system itself. System energy level 0. 7 extremely depleted. Core functional modules offline. Scanning, recycling, disassembly, micromanipulation and other functions cannot be enabled. Basic analysis and storage functions operating at minimum power consumption. Warning: high purity energy must be replenished as soon as possible or the system will enter permanent hibernation. This was troublesome. His greatest reliance had almost vanished. He was now like a tiger whose fangs had been pulled out. Though he was being treated courteously, his situation was actually more dangerous. Once the other party discovered he had lost his value or their patience ran out, he must restore the system's energy as soon as possible. At least restore some functions. But where in this base could there be high purity energy? And how could he access it? His gaze swept across the room. The wall power socket. No, the voltage and current form were wrong, the system could not absorb them directly. Those advanced instruments and equipment. He had no way to reach them. Just as he was at a loss, the door slid open silently again. A young female researcher in a white lab coat, wearing rimless glasses and exuding a cool temperament, entered carrying a tray with a nutritious meal and a glass of water. Your dinner, she said flatly, placing the tray on the desk, her tone devoid of any emotion. But her gaze quickly and professionally swept over Lin Feng's entire body as if recording his condition. After setting down the tray, she did not leave immediately but took out a palm-sized, exquisitely designed portable environmental monitor from her lab coat pocket, seemingly performing routine checks. As the monitor passed by Lin Feng, a certain indicator light on the device flickered faintly, emitting a very soft beep. The female researcher's gaze instantly sharpened. She lowered her head to quickly examine the data on the screen, a fleeting abnormal energy reading so weak it could almost be ignored, yet different from any background radiation she had detected before. She looked up at Lin Feng again, a flicker of intense curiosity and inquiry deep in her eyes, but her expression remained unchanged. Please enjoy, she said, putting away the monitor as if nothing had happened, and left the room. Lin Feng's heart skipped a beat. Had she detected something? Was it the faint energy fluctuation left by the system? That monitor. An extremely risky idea surfaced in his mind. Perhaps. The opportunity lay with these researchers and their equipment. He looked at the food on the tray, then at the tightly sealed alloy door. The game had already begun from this moment. The alloy door sealed shut, isolating him from the outside world. Lin Feng was left alone in the room with only a tray of nutrient-rich meal emitting faint steam. He had no appetite at all. In his mind, the dim flickering light of the system interface, like a dying ember, pierced deep into his nerves like a thorn. With only 0.7 energy, even the most basic scanning function couldn't be activated. It was as useless as scrap metal. Without the system, his greatest value, the technological knowledge beyond his era, could not be effectively extracted or proven. The faint beep from the female researcher's detector before she left was like a spark of light in the darkness. She had detected an anomaly. Though weak, it was undeniably present. This meant the base's detection equipment could potentially sense the residual energy fluctuations of the system, or rather a unique spectrum emitted by the system itself. This was a risk, but also perhaps an opportunity. Directly exposing the system would be foolish. But maybe, he could guide them, make them actively provide what he needed. High purity energy. What kind of energy would meet the requirements? Electrical energy. Chemical energy. Nuclear energy. The system hadn't specified, but based on the experience of absorbing the core energy of Shadow, that highly condensed, almost pure form of energy was clearly the optimal choice. Where in this base could similar energy be found? His gaze swept the room again. The wall outlet was too primitive. Could the researchers coming and going carry high-energy experimental samples or device batteries? A rough plan began to take shape in his mind, risky but worth a try. He needed to recover just a tiny bit of energy first, even if it only brought the system back from the brink of death, enabling minimal interaction and analysis. He walked to the door and pressed the call button. A few minutes later, the alloy door slid open, revealing the same cold female researcher, her face bearing a formulaic expression of inquiry. "What do you need?" she asked, her gaze habitually sweeping over Lin Feng as if observing a precious experimental specimen. "I need some things," Lin Feng said, trying to keep his tone calm, even feigning weakness and restraint. "My leg and arm still hurt badly. The sedative from earlier seems to have worn off. Also, I'm having trouble sleeping. It's too quiet here and I can't fall asleep. Do you have an old-fashioned radio, one that doesn't need electronics? Just something to make some noise, or some old tech magazines to distract me?" He made 2 requests: painkillers and non-electronic old items. The painkillers were for the potential chemical energy they contained, though minuscule, it might be a form the system could absorb. Asking for old items was a setup for his next plan, while also fitting the reasonable need of an injured person seeking distraction. The female researcher studied him for 2 seconds as if judging the truth of his words, then nodded. "I'll report it to the higher-ups. Painkillers need a doctor's evaluation before I can give them to you." "Thank you," Lin Feng said softly. The researcher turned and left. This time she didn't take out the detector. About half an hour later, the door opened again. It wasn't the female researcher, but a stern-faced soldier. He held a small paper cup with 2 white pills and a glass of water. "These are doctor-approved painkillers," the soldier said, placing the cup and water on the table in a brusque tone. "The other things you asked for are being searched for and will be delivered once found." With that, he turned and left without delay, the door closing tightly. Lin Feng stared at the 2 pills, his heart sinking slightly. They were cautious. The entire process of delivering the medicine was handled by the soldier, eliminating any chance of direct contact or probing with the researchers. He picked up the pills and examined them carefully, the most common nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drug. He swallowed them as instructed, while secretly trying to channel the faint, barely perceptible system energy toward the dissolving pills in his stomach. Detected trace chemical energy. Conversion efficiency below 0.001. Energy absorption negligible. As expected, it didn't work. The energy in the pills was too primitive, with nearly 0 conversion efficiency. This path was almost completely blocked. He waited patiently. After another hour, just as he began to think they had ignored his second request, the door slid open again. This time a young technician entered, holding several yellowed, clearly aged issues of radio magazine and a palm-sized yellowed plastic transistor radio with a telescopic antenna. These were found in the storage room. "They should still work," the technician said, placing the items on the table and curiously sneaking glances at Lin Feng as if trying to see what kind of person required such a massive operation from the Dragon Group. "Thank you," Lin Feng said softly again. The technician left quickly after setting down the items. Lin Feng picked up the old radio. It was like with a rough plastic casing. When he flipped the switch, it emitted a crackling static and faint radio music. A typical product from decades ago, simple in structure, using the most common carbon zinc batteries. He didn't need the radio itself, but the batteries. Carefully he turned the radio over, removed the back cover, and took out the 2 equally aged cell batteries inside. Carbon zinc batteries, chemical energy. The energy purity was equally low, but compared to the pills they were a more professional energy carrier. He held the batteries in both hands, focusing all his will to connect with the faint system light in his mind. Absorb, try to absorb. He repeated the thought, silently concentrating all his intent. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Just as he was about to give up, he felt an extremely faint, almost imperceptible warmth at his fingertips. In his mind, the dim system interface flickered. Though still weak, it seemed to stabilize just a tiny bit. Detected low-purity chemical energy. Beginning ultra-slow conversion and absorption. Energy level 0. 71. 0. 72. It worked. Though the speed was agonizingly slow, it was indeed effective. The energy from these 2 old batteries was being slowly absorbed by the system at an extremely low efficiency. At this rate, draining both batteries might bring the system energy to about 0. 8. A drop in the bucket, but it proved the path was viable. Moreover, this low-level energy absorption didn't seem to trigger any monitoring alarms. Hope reignited. But what next? Where could he find higher purity energy? Batteries. Larger batteries. Or... His gaze fell on the radio magazines. He flipped one open, randomly finding mostly basic circuit diagrams, component introductions, and radio assembly tutorials. Suddenly his eyes were drawn to a short article in the corner of a page, a brief analysis of the evolutionary possibility from chemical batteries to atomic energy batteries. The content was superficial, merely a conceptual discussion. But a few keywords made Lin Feng's heart leap. High energy density isotope decay, energy stable discharge. Isotope batteries. In other words, nuclear batteries. A device that converts energy released from radioactive isotope decay directly into electricity. Though the power output was usually low, the energy density was extremely high, lasting a long time with great stability. Could the system absorb this kind of energy? What would the efficiency be? This thought grew like wild grass in his mind. But nuclear batteries were strictly controlled items. How could he ask for one? Even if he did, how could they possibly give it to him? He looked again at the disassembled radio and the old batteries in his hand. A bolder, more dangerous plan gradually took shape. He needed to make the base personnel actively and unavoidably deliver higher energy items to him. He picked up the 2 old batteries, a look of determination flashing in his eyes. Then he hurled the batteries with force against the hard alloy wall. Bang! Bang! The battery casings cracked, spilling chemical paste inside. At the same time, he let out a muffled groan, his body collapsing backward, crashing into the chair with a loud noise. He curled up, trembling violently as if in immense pain. He let out suppressed, agonized moans. Almost the next second after he made the noise, beep. A sharp, piercing alarm instantly filled the room. Red warning lights flashed wildly. The alloy door slid open. 2 fully armed soldiers rushed in, first their guns aimed warily around the room. Close behind were the cold female researcher and 2 technicians carrying various portable detection devices. What happened? The female researcher demanded sharply, her gaze quickly locking onto the broken batteries, spilled chemicals, and Lin Feng, who was curled up, trembling and wearing a pained expression. Energy, fluctuations, abnormal. Lin Feng raised his hand with difficulty, pointing at the broken batteries on the floor, muttering brokenly as if unconsciously, no, this energy, wrong, repulsion, it hurts so much. The female researcher's expression changed dramatically and she immediately shouted to the technicians, quick. Scan the environment. Scan him. Various detection instruments were instantly aimed at Lin Feng and the mess on the floor. Report. Detected minor chemical leakage, non-toxic but. Report. Detected abnormal energy reaction inside the target. Very weak but matching the previously recorded spectrum. It's fluctuating violently. It seems to be stimulated. The female researcher stared at the jumping, weak yet highly unstable energy curve on the detection screen, then at the 2 ordinary old batteries on the floor. Her brow furrowed tightly, her eyes filled with immense confusion and a hint of an almost unbelievable speculation. Could it be that he had a special sensitivity to energy, or even an absorption ability? And the low-purity energy from the old batteries had caused some kind of contamination or repulsion. This idea was too shocking, yet it was the only inference that could explain the bizarre situation. She immediately pressed her earpiece and reported urgently, Director Zhou, the target is experiencing an abnormal condition. Suspected strong repulsion reaction from contact with low-purity chemical energy. Requesting instructions. There was a few seconds of silence on the earpiece, followed by Zhou Song's deep voice. Stabilize his condition. Allocate necessary resources at the highest priority. Find out what he truly needs. The female researcher took a deep breath, looked at Lin Feng, who was being supported by the soldiers, still painfully gasping, and her gaze became incredibly complex. Inject a mild sedative. Then. She paused as if making a difficult decision. Apply for a backup unit of the lowest power radioisotope thermoelectric generator RTG with intact shielding. She wanted to see whether this mysterious young man truly had a special need for energy or was putting on a spectacular act. A gentle sedative was injected into the vein and Lin Feng cooperatively allowed his body to gradually relax, his curled posture unfolding as the deliberately controlled tremors slowly subsided, leaving only a faint weak gasp as if he had survived a catastrophe. He half closed his eyes, the thick lashes obscuring the fleeting tension and anticipation deep within his gaze. The gamble had begun, now it was up to the opponent to place their bets. The room was in disarray with black sludge leaking from a broken battery exuding a faint chemical smell. Several technicians were nervously conducting environmental sampling and cleanup, various detection instruments emitting subtle hums. The female researcher, Lin Feng, learned from the soldiers that her surname was Qin, was intently staring at the screen of a portable monitoring device. The curve representing the energy response within Lin Feng's body, although no longer fluctuating violently, remained at an extremely weak yet unusually stable frequency, unlike any data recorded previously. Her brows were tightly furrowed, seemingly under immense pressure. She applied for the activation of the RTG radioisotope thermoelectric generator unit. Even the lowest power backup required bearing immense responsibility. A misjudgment could lead to unimaginable consequences. However, Zhou Chu's instructions were clear: prioritize allocations first, clarify what he needed. Time passed in the oppressive silence, ticking away second by second. Finally, rhythmic knocking came from outside the alloy door. Upon receiving permission, a technician in a special protective suit wearing heavy gloves pushed in a small explosion-proof transport vehicle. Secured on the vehicle was a metal box about the size of a dictionary, wrapped in lead gray composite material and equipped with multiple safety locks. All eyes instantly focused on this box, and the atmosphere grew even more serious. Researcher Qin took a deep breath and stepped forward. Through the control panel of the transport vehicle, she entered a long authorization code and conducted an iris verification. With a series of clicks, the layers of safety locks on the metal box were successively released. She cautiously opened the lid of the box. Inside was a thick shielding layer of lead-based composite material with a recess in the center holding a cylindrical unit about the size of an adult's thumb, dark silver in color and with a smooth surface. Even through the thick shielding, one could vaguely sense a heart-pounding, silent yet powerful energy contained within. This was the core of the RTG unit, a device that utilized the heat generated by the decay of radioactive isotopes, typically plutonium-238, converting it into electrical energy through the thermoelectric effect. While the electrical output might not be substantial, the purity and density of its energy source far exceeded that of ordinary chemical batteries. Target status. Researcher Qin did not immediately retrieve the unit but first confirmed Lin Feng's condition. Vital signs stable, energy response weak but steady, still under the influence of the sedative. A technician reported. Researcher Qin nodded, donned extra protective gloves and with specialized tools carefully extracted the dark silver RTG unit from the shielding recess. Even though it was only the lowest power unit, the radiation it emitted had to be handled with caution. Holding the unit, she walked step by step toward Lin Feng, who lay on the bed seemingly in a daze. All instruments were pointed at the two of them, data streams wildly refreshing on the screens. Attempt to make contact. Everyone record all data changes. Researcher Qin's voice carried a barely perceptible tremor. She slowly and gently placed the dark silver small unit in Lin Feng's outstretched palm. A cold sensation spread from his palm. Lin Feng's heart nearly stopped beating. All his senses heightened to their peak at that moment. It has begun. At the instant of contact, warning. Detected ultra-high density decay energy. Energy purity extremely high. Compatibility assessment excellent. Initiating emergency absorption procedure. In his mind, the previously dim and fading system interface suddenly erupted with unprecedented brilliant light. Like a parched desert encountering the long-awaited rain, it began to crazily and greedily absorb the vast energy transmitted from that small unit. 0. 72. 0. 8. 1. 5. 10. The energy reading soared at an unprecedented speed. Lin Feng could hardly contain his expression. A powerful, pure, gentle yet immensely overwhelming stream of energy surged through the meridians of his arms into his entire body, not only filling the system but also nourishing himself. The weakness and pain from his previous injuries were rapidly alleviating, and an unprecedented sense of power surged from deep within his body. But he gritted his teeth, forcing himself to maintain a weak state, even deliberately making his body tremble slightly again. This time it was no longer a painful shiver but a tremor of overload, as if overflowing with energy that he could not fully bear. Outside, the data on the monitoring instruments exploded. Energy readings are soaring. Exponential growth. The energy response intensity within the target has exceeded the monitoring limit. The output power of the radiation shielding unit is dropping abnormally. The decay rate. Heavens, the decay rate is accelerating. This is impossible. A technician stared at the wildly fluctuating data on the screen, exclaiming in shock. Researcher Qin's pupils contracted sharply and she suddenly looked at Lin Feng's palm. The dark silver RTG unit was visibly losing its luster at a noticeable speed, and its surface even began to show fine cracks. As if the radioactive materials contained within were being forcibly accelerated in decay by some power draining its energy completely. This completely defied the laws of physics. The scene before everyone exceeded their comprehension. Disconnect. Quickly disconnect. Researcher Qin reacted, horrified, wanting to reach out and take away the rapidly failing unit. But just as her fingers were about to touch the unit, buzz. A formless energy pulse suddenly erupted from within Lin Feng. It was not aggressive but carried a kind of energy dissipation that was difficult to fully suppress as the system function began to restore. The lights in the room suddenly dimmed, all the screens of the precise electronic monitoring instruments flickered and emitted piercing noise before going black. The shrill overload alarms rang out in unison. Researcher Chin and several technicians rushed forward, pushed back several steps by this gentle yet irresistible energy, their faces filled with shock and disbelief. Lin Feng, lying on the bed, suddenly opened his eyes. No longer showing the previous weakness and confusion, his gaze was now sharp and piercing like a blade. A faint, nearly imperceptible glow of energy seemed to envelop him, though fleeting it brought an inexplicable sense of oppression to everyone, originating from a level of life. The RTG unit in Lin Feng's palm had completely turned into a small handful of gray-white energyless powder slipping through his fingers. System energy level 41. 3 moderate recovery core function module rebooting. Scanning module online limited. Analysis module online. Micro storage space online. Warning: the energy absorption process has triggered energy dissipation beyond controllable limits, attracting external attention. It worked. Lin Feng's heart was filled with wild joy, but his face quickly shifted back to a slightly bewildered and pained expression, as if just waking from a muddled dream, looking in confusion at the chaotic scene around him, the black-screened instruments and the startled researchers. "Wah! What happened?" he asked hoarsely, his acting quite convincing. Researcher Chin steadied herself, her chest heaving violently. She stared intently at Lin Feng, glanced at the handful of powder in his palm, and finally looked at all the high-tech equipment around them that had malfunctioned. Her worldview was undergoing an unprecedented shock. This young man had drained a nuclear battery unit capable of powering certain deep space probes for decades in just a few seconds. And had triggered such a massive energy pulse and electromagnetic shock. This was beyond science. It was almost a miracle. Or rather, it was a manifestation of technology that they could not comprehend, transcending the current level of human civilization. She pressed her earpiece, her voice slightly distorted due to extreme excitement and shock. "Zhou Chu. I need to see you immediately. The situation is completely beyond expectations." He absorbed the RTG unit. Completely absorbed it. And triggered an unknown energy shock. On the other end of the communicator there was a prolonged deathly silence. After a long time, Zhou Song's voice slowly came through, devoid of any discernible emotion, yet carrying an unprecedented weight. "Seal the site. All data classified as top secret. I'm on my way." Researcher Chin put down the earpiece, her gaze toward Lin Feng had completely changed. No longer viewing him as a research subject or potential collaborator, but as a walking enigma and miracle that could not be measured by common sense. Lin Feng met her gaze and coughed weakly. He knew that the first phase of the objective had been achieved. He now possessed the bargaining chips for preliminary negotiations. But a greater storm was about to unfold with Zhou Song's arrival. End of chapter 17. A peculiar atmosphere filled the room. Most of the precision instruments remained in a state of shutdown, their screens dark with only a few emergency lights providing dim illumination. A faint scent of ozone lingered in the air, along with an indescribable residual energy overload. Researcher Chin and several technicians stood in a corner, barely daring to breathe, their gazes cautiously shifting between Zhou Song and Lin Feng. Zhou Song stood in the center of the room, his silhouette appearing increasingly towering and steadfast like a mountain under the dim light. He did not speak immediately. Instead, with eyes as sharp as an eagle's, he meticulously scrutinized Lin Feng, who had already sat up on the bed inch by inch. His gaze was no longer merely one of examination, it carried a heavy probing intent that seemed to pierce through the skin and look straight into the essence. Lin Feng met his gaze openly. Though his complexion remained somewhat pale, his eyes had regained clarity and composure and even held a faint elusive confidence. The system within him stabilized at 41. 3 energy level, far from full recovery but no longer a state of vulnerability. The silence stretched on the air, seeming to solidify the pressure mounting. Finally Zhou Song spoke slowly, his voice low and steady, betraying no emotion yet carrying an undeniable authority. "How do you feel?" A seemingly ordinary greeting, yet laden with immense weight. "Much better," Lin Feng replied with equal simplicity, his tone neither humble nor arrogant. "Thank you for your special medicine." He deliberately emphasized the last 3 words. The corner of Zhou Song's mouth twitched almost imperceptibly, as if in a smile or not. "It seems ordinary painkillers have limited effect on you. You need something more potent. Energy." Lin Feng cut straight to the point, no longer beating around the bush. "My body, or rather something I possess, requires a specific form of energy to sustain itself. Low-purity chemical energy won't work, it even triggers rejection. The kind just now was perfect." He opened his palm, revealing the now useless grayish-white powder. Zhou Song's gaze fell on the powder, a faint ripple passing through the depths of his eyes. Seeing it firsthand was vastly different from hearing reports. The impact of this incomprehensible scene was immense. "That special medicine is very precious," Zhou Song said slowly, his tone ambiguous between statement and pressure. "I know." Lin Feng nodded. "So we can talk about a trade. I'll provide what interests you, technical information about those extraterrestrial artifacts and even some possibilities for reverse engineering. In return you provide the necessary energy support along with a certain degree of safety and freedom." He laid out his terms and demands directly without preamble. In the face of absolute power and the state apparatus, playing mind games was futile and would only seem ridiculous. Candor might earn a sliver of initiative. Reverse engineering. Zhou Song seized on the word, his gaze sharpening. Can you do it? Partially. Lin Feng didn't overstate his case. I need equipment, materials, and most importantly energy. That unit from before is an excellent catalyst. He skillfully packaged the system's need for energy absorption as the energy source required for his technical analysis and research. Zhou Song fell silent for a moment as if weighing his options. The room was so quiet a pin drop could be heard. Researcher Qin and the others unconsciously held their breath. How much do you need? Zhou Song asked. It depends on the research progress, Lin Feng said. Initially at least 1 unit of the same specification per week. Later, if the research deepens, I may need more or higher purity energy sources. He tentatively put forward his request. Zhou Song didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to the cart carrying the shielded RTG box, his fingers tapping obsessively on the lead gray casing, producing a soft knocking sound. Do you know what this is? He asked suddenly. A radioisotope thermoelectric generator powered by the decay of plutonium-238. Lin Feng answered fluently. Such basic knowledge was recorded in the system's database. Its cost, its level of control, and what it represents. Zhou Song turned around, his eyes blazing. 1 unit a week. Young man, your appetite is considerable. Compared to the value I can provide, it's perhaps a negligible cost. Lin Feng met his gaze without flinching. You must have already conducted preliminary research on the remains of that shadow. How is it going? Can you understand the operating principles of its energy core? Can you replicate its biomechanical structure? Or even figure out what that larger thing underground really is? With each question he asked, Zhou Song's expression grew more grave and researcher Qin's face turned paler. Clearly Lin Feng's questions had hit their pain points and bottlenecks. Extraterrestrial technology was hardly easy to crack. Can you? Zhou Song asked just 2 words, but they carried immense weight. I can provide direction and key insights for cracking certain nodes. Lin Feng chose his words carefully. This could save you countless hours, resources, and trial and error costs. It might even help you find a way to counter that underground threat more quickly. He opportunistically brought up the common enemy, the lava earth fiend. Zhou Song fell silent once more, his gaze deep, as if calculating countless possibilities and risks. After a long moment, he slowly raised his head. We can provide you with energy and support, but there are conditions. First, all research must be conducted in a designated absolutely secure base with our personnel overseeing and assisting throughout. Second, all technical information and insights you provide must be shared without reservation. No concealment or alteration is allowed. Third, you must cooperate with necessary physical examinations and data recording to help us understand your special condition. Fourth, externally, you and your research results will be classified as top state secrets. You must sign the corresponding confidentiality agreements and accept our protection, or rather supervision. The conditions were harsh, especially regarding personal freedom and research independence. But this was within Lin Feng's expectations. I can accept supervision and restrictions on the research location, but my physical examinations must be voluntary and conducted without endangering my own safety. Additionally, I need a clear energy supply agreement and a limited right to internal information. I need access to information related to those extraterrestrial technologies and the underground threat that doesn't involve your other core secrets. This will aid my research. Lin Feng put forward his counter conditions. He needed information needed to understand the enemy's movements. He couldn't be a blind research machine. Zhou Song stared at him as if trying to discern deeper intentions from his eyes. After a few minutes, he slowly nodded. Agreed. The specific details will be finalized with you by Dr. Qinyu. He gestured toward the female researcher, who will be your primary liaison and supervisor. Qinyu stepped forward, her gaze toward Lin Feng still complex but now tinged with a business-like seriousness. So a preliminary agreement. Lin Feng extended his hand to Zhou Song. Zhou Song looked at his hand, not immediately taking it, but said flatly, remember Lin Feng. This is a cooperation but also a test. Your value determines the resources and freedom you'll receive. Don't try to cross the line, the consequences are something you can't afford. The warning was unmistakable. With it, he reached out and shook Lin Feng's hand. His palm was dry and firm, carrying the control of one long accustomed to authority. Just then, a low unsettling hum from deep underground, faint yet seemingly penetrating through the thick rock and alloy walls, echoed again. Though so faint it was almost like an illusion, everyone present changed color instantly. Lin Feng felt the energy core system in his chest tremble slightly, conveying a brief warning fluctuation. Zhou Song abruptly released his hand, pressed his earpiece and listened intently, his expression turning grim. Isn't that quiet? Lin Feng said softly. Zhou Song gave him a deep look, said nothing more and strode out quickly, issuing urgent commands into his earpiece. Notify the geological department and monitoring stations, highest alert level. Synchronize all data to the main conference room in real time. Now. The negotiation had just concluded and the real threat was already impatiently sounding the alarm once more. Thus the cooperation began amidst crisis. The heavy lead gray alloy door slid open silently along its tracks, revealing an even vaster brightly lit space beyond. A cold air carrying a peculiar mixture of ozone and the metallic scent of some unknown element rushed forth. Lin Feng, accompanied by Qin Yu and 2 fully armed special agents from the Dragon Group, stepped into the deepest, highest security research hall within the mountain base, the core zone of Project Zero. His pupils contracted slightly. At the center of the hall, within a massive sealed isolation chamber constructed of high-strength bulletproof glass and multiple composite force fields, lay the severely torn main wreckage of a Shadow-class reconnaissance unit. Even in its heavily damaged state, lying there motionless, it exuded a chilling inhuman technological beauty and a sense of oppressive dread. The dark silver biomechanical armor was shattered, revealing an intricate network of crystal conduits flickering with faint azure light and energy wires resembling biological fibers within. The fractures were jagged, hinting at the terrifyingly precise internal structure. The massive side-like limb, which had effortlessly torn through rock and armored vehicles, hung limply at its side, its blade still gleaming coldly. The area was filled with advanced scanning probes, robotic arms, and monitoring equipment. Dozens of researchers in full protective suits worked busily, but progress seemed excruciatingly slow, with confusion and gravity etched on every face. This is the primary research subject, the Zero wreckage. Qin Yu's voice sounded beside him, regaining its earlier calm professionalism, though her gaze at the wreckage remained filled with awe and bewilderment. We've deployed all current analytical methods, but the composition of many basic materials, the principles of the energy circuits, even its fundamental operational logic, are beyond our comprehension. Its technological tree is completely distinct from human civilization. She pointed to a massive screen displaying complex molecular structures and a scrolling list of failed analysis reports. For instance, its main armor, we still cannot fully analyze its composition or synthesis process. And its energy core, though you've already taken it, the residual conductive structures possess a superconducting property we cannot understand. Lin Feng listened silently, the system interface already activated in his mind. Detected Shadow-class reconnaissance unit main wreckage, 89 damage. Initiating full scan. Scan obstructed. External force field and shielding interference. Close contact required for detailed data. I need to go in, Lin Feng suddenly said. Qin Yu and the agents nearby changed expression. Enter the isolation chamber. That violates safety protocols. Qin Yu immediately objected. The wreckage is unstable, there may be unknown radiation or... Without close contact I can't obtain effective information, Lin Feng interrupted, his tone calm yet firm. This is where your research bottleneck lies, isn't it? Observing through layers of shielding will only ever scratch the surface. He looked at Qin Yu. If safety is a concern, let me wear a protective suit. Or you can remotely monitor all my physiological data and pull me out immediately if anything goes wrong. Qin Yu furrowed her brow, clearly engaged in intense internal conflict. Zhou Song's orders were to accommodate Lin Feng's research needs as much as possible, but safety was paramount. Let him in, Zhou Song's voice came through Qin Yu's earpiece, evidently watching from a monitoring room. Prepare with the highest protection level. All emergency teams on standby. With the highest command issued, efficiency was paramount. Soon Lin Feng donned a heavy, fully enclosed protective suit with a life support system and multiple sensors, and under the escort of 2 similarly equipped agents passed through a series of airtight sterilization doors into the isolation chamber. The closer he got, the stronger the oppressive aura of the alien creation became. The bizarre patterns on the wreckage's surface seemed to flow slowly, emitting a faint residual energy glow. Interference resolved. Initiating deep scan. Scanning. 1. The system's prompt became clear and steady. Lin Feng extended his hand, his thickly gloved fingers slowly touching the cold, damaged dark silver armor. The moment his fingertip made contact. A hum. It was as if a switch had been flipped, a colossal data stream flooded into his mind like a bursting dam. The system interface blazed with light, countless complex 3D structures, energy flow diagrams, and material molecular formulas refreshing at unprecedented speed. Scan complete. 15. Analyzing. Material analysis. Main armor is a nanocomposite of shadow krypton and bioactive titanium. Synthesis requires specific gravitational fields and energy catalysis. Reverse engineering blueprint generating. Required tech points 2000. Insufficient energy system. Residual circuits based on superfluid energy conduit technology. Efficiency 377 times that of current superconducting materials. Reverse engineering blueprint generating. Required tech points 1500. Propulsion system severely damaged. Detected residual localized gravity distortion technology. Insufficient data. Detection system core optical sensor based on neutrino imaging principle. Reverse engineering blueprint incomplete. Required tech points 800. Warning, detected residual low-level AI core logic fragments with passive defense mechanisms and information encryption. Attempting decryption. Decryption failed. Requires higher computational power. A flood of technological information far beyond current human understanding surged in, and even with the system's assistance Lin Feng felt a slight dizziness and information overload. Yet an indescribable excitement welled up within him. This was the true treasure. An alien technological system far surpassing Earth's civilization. Compared to this, the things he had previously cobbled together were mere child's play. In the main control room outside, all researchers held their breath, staring at the large screen displaying Lin Feng's physiological data, all normal, almost eerily calm. Meanwhile, the data stream from Lin Feng's external suit sensors began showing extremely faint energy fluctuations with bizarre patterns and frequencies. What is he doing? A young researcher whispered. Xinyu stared at the screen, shaking her head, her eyes filled with confusion and shock. How could this young man merely by touching it trigger such peculiar energy reactions when their massive equipment had failed to effectively probe its internal structure? Inside the isolation chamber, Lin Feng had already circled the wreckage, his palm brushing over several key areas. Deep scan 100 complete. All obtainable data recorded in database. Generating reverse engineering overview, unlockable blueprints partial 1. Shadow Krypton nanosmelting process basic requires 500 tech points, 100 units high purity energy specific rare metals. 2. Superfluid energy conduit fabrication technology basic requires 300 tech points, 80 units energy ultra pure silicon based materials. 3. Shadow personal optical camouflage damaged repair version requires 150 tech points, 50 units energy existing materials partially substitutable. More blueprints require higher permissions or tech points. Tech points. Again tech points. This seemed to be the key to unlocking and applying these technologies. And based on past experience, the way to acquire tech points was by dismantling and analyzing more advanced technological creations. Lin Feng took a deep breath, suppressing his excitement. He withdrew his hand and turned toward the isolation chamber exit. After removing the heavy protective suit and returning to the main control area, all researchers' eyes were fixed on him. How is it? Xinyu asked eagerly, even forgetting the formal restraint expected of a subordinate. Lin Feng didn't answer directly but walked to an idle terminal and connected to an encrypted data interface Xinyu had given him. Grant me the highest data input permissions, he said. Xinyu glanced toward the monitoring direction and, receiving tacit approval, quickly operated to authorize. Lin Feng closed his eyes as if recalling and organizing. Then his hands began flying across the keyboard at a speed that left after images. Complex molecular formulas were listed. Unheard-of nanolevel smelting processes were described in detail. Energy conduction models based on entirely new physical principles were constructed. What he input was the core data and key difficulties of the Shadow Krypton nanosmelting process basic and superfluid energy conduit fabrication technology basic as parsed by the system. This data directly solved the fundamental material bottlenecks that had stumped the Dragon Group researchers for countless days and nights. The main control room fell into a deathly silence, broken only by the clatter of Lin Feng's keyboard. Then more and more researchers gathered, staring at the screen filled with arcane yet logically rigorous and targeted data and formulas, unleashing incredulous gasps and exclamations. Heavens! This molecular structure. So that's how it's combined. Good Lord. Requires a specific frequency of gravitational field oscillation as a catalytic condition. How is that even possible? Superfluid, achieving energy superfluid at room temperature. This defies existing physical laws. Exclamations, doubts, and ecstatic mutterings intertwined. The entire control room descended into an academic frenzy. Xinyu looked at the screen, then at the focused Lin Feng beside her, frozen, her mind blank. He had actually done it. In less than an hour he had solved the most fundamental and deadly challenge that had eluded them for months. This wasn't speculation or a direction, it was a tangible, immediately verifiable technological pathway. Striking the final enter key, Lin Feng stopped, turning to the still-stunned Xinyu with a calm tone. These are the preparation approaches for 2 basic materials. You can start with small-scale experiments for verification. The required equipment modifications and energy supply needs are listed in the appendix. He paused, then added, also the residual AI fragments within the wreckage have passive defense mechanisms. Forcible decryption might trigger unpredictable consequences. I suggest isolating them for now and avoiding provocation. With that he ignored the now frenzied scientists and researchers, turning his gaze toward a direction where a concealed camera was located. He knew Zhou Song was watching. He had shown his first token of sincerity and value. Now it was the other side's turn. The fervent atmosphere in the control room had yet to subside when Lin Feng was escorted out by Qinyu, returning to his room that served both as living quarters and a monitoring station. As soon as the door closed, Qinyu took a deep breath and spoke with a complex tone. Zhou Chu wants to see you. It's about the energy supply and equipment modification. What must come will come. Lin Feng nodded and followed Qinyu through several heavily guarded corridors until they reached a thick metal door with no markings. After triple verification, iris, voiceprint, and password, the door slid open silently, revealing an office with simple furnishings yet a strong technological ambience. Zhou Song stood before a massive one-way glass wall, gazing at the bustling control room beyond. Sit. Zhou Song did not turn around, his voice betraying no emotion. Lin Feng took a seat in the chair before the desk and waited in silence. Xinyu stood quietly by the door like a statue. Minutes later, Zhou Song slowly turned, his gaze falling on Lin Feng with a heavy scrutinizing weight. The materials you provided have been preliminarily assessed as extremely valuable, he cut to the chase. But they also imply unimaginable resource investment. The high-frequency gravitational field oscillation generator and molecular-level electrospinning device you requested either require custom fabrication or are strictly controlled non-export items in various countries. Lin Feng responded calmly, cracking alien technology naturally demands unconventional methods and equipment. If it were easy, you wouldn't have been stuck here for so long. Zhou Song walked behind the desk and sat down, folding his hands on the table. The equipment can be arranged. But the energy. One standard RTG unit per week, do you know what that means? That's equivalent to draining the energy budget of 3 deep space probes for the next 20 years. Moreover, the inventory and production rate of plutonium-238 can't keep up with such consumption. Then do you have a better energy source with sufficient purity? Lin Feng countered. Or are you willing to slow down the research progress? That thing underground probably won't give us much time. He once again timely invoked their common threat. Zhou Song's eyes sharpened. This is exactly the second matter I want to discuss with you. He pressed a button on the desk and one wall of the office lit up, displaying a massive, constantly updating global geological dynamics map. Several areas, including their own, were marked with glaring red indicators. The tremors and hum you felt are not isolated incidents. Zhou Song's voice turned extremely grave. Globally, including 7 locations, the Mariana Trench, the East African Rift beneath the Siberian permafrost, and others, similar abnormal infrasound waves and geomagnetic disturbances of varying intensities have been detected in the past 72 hours. The pattern is highly similar to what happened here. Lin Feng's heart sank. You mean that lava earth fiend isn't the only one? I'm afraid so. Zhou Song nodded grimly. Moreover, based on the latest shared data model analysis, they don't seem to be naturally occurring creatures. They resemble more some kind of activated deep-buried defense mechanism or sentinels. Defense mechanism? Against whom? Lin Feng pressed. That's precisely the key question. Zhou Song's gaze focused on Lin Feng again, as if trying to see through him. Based on preliminary studies of the shadow wreckage and the energy circuit information you just provided, we have a bold, unconfirmed hypothesis: the shadow and the earth fiend may not share the same origin and might even be hostile to each other. Lin Feng's pupils contracted. This hypothesis coincided with the system's earlier prompt of non-shadow sequence. The shadow is a highly sophisticated reconnaissance unit with a technological path leaning toward biomechanics and energy manipulation, while the earth fiend is more like a pure violent manifestation of an ecological disaster based on geothermal energy and some unknown dark energy. Their energy spectrum characteristics are completely different, even exhibiting some mutual exclusivity. Zhou Song brought up 2 complex energy spectrum comparison charts. The difference is starkly evident. We suspect that the crash of the shadow or some action of its accidentally activated the deeply buried earth fiend. And the awakening of the earth fiend is a non-discriminatory purge program targeting all surface activity. They might be this planet's true most ancient native threat, only long sealed or dormant underground by some force. The sheer volume of information left Lin Feng momentarily overwhelmed. He had always assumed the alien invasion was a single event, never imagining it might involve an older, more terrifying truth. So Zhou Song leaned forward, exuding immense pressure. We may now be facing 2 wars, one against the external scout shadow and the civilization behind it, the other against the planet's own immune system that has been inadvertently awakened. And your value lies in the possibility that you hold the keys to both threats, the technology of the shadow and your unique way of utilizing energy. He paused and delivered the final proposal. We can meet the energy supply. We can even provide a higher purity, more stable energy source than RTG units. There's a small nuclear fusion experimental reactor Xianyuan deep in the base capable of providing nearly limitless electrical power. But Zhou Song's tone was resolute. You cannot directly access the fusion core. We need you to design a safe and reliable energy transfer interface to convert the fusion reactor's electricity into a form you can safely absorb and utilize. At the same time, the technical details of this interface must be fully disclosed. In return, besides energy, part of the Xianyuan reactor's computing power can also be open to you for cracking the residual AI fragment. Additionally, within your clearance you can access most non-core intelligence related to extraterrestrial technology and underground anomalies. Lin Feng weighed the options rapidly in his mind. Direct use of fusion energy would be far more efficient than RTG units, and the computing support was crucial for cracking the AI fragment. But designing the energy interface meant exposing part of the system's absorption frequency and conversion requirements, posing some risk. However, the conditions offered and the shared intelligence demonstrated sufficient sincerity. More importantly, the urgency of the global crisis left him with little choice. Agreed. Lin Feng finally nodded. I'll need the relevant materials, high-precision processing equipment, and the output parameters of the Xianyuan reactor. Dr. Qin will fully cooperate with you. Zhou Song looked at Qin Yu by the door, who immediately nodded in acknowledgement. Additionally, Lin Feng added, during the design and manufacturing of the interface I need at least 2 RTG units as backup for transition and testing. He had to restore the system's energy to a higher level as quickly as possible to cope with the upcoming research. Zhou Song gave him a deep look, as if seeing through some of his intentions, but did not expose him, merely nodding agreed. The negotiation concluded, terms agreed upon. Lin Feng had obtained energy support and information access far exceeding his expectations, but he also bore heavier responsibilities and hopes. As he left the office, Zhou Song said, one last thing, come up with results quickly. Lin Feng. Our time may be shorter than we think. According to monitoring, their activity frequency is accelerating. The heavy metal door closed behind him. Lin Feng gazed at the cold walls of the corridor as if he could feel through the rock layers the terror buried deep underground gradually awakening. The war had long since begun in silence. The efficiency after the agreement was astonishingly high. Under Qin Yu's coordination, the list of materials and equipment requirements Lin Feng needed was delivered at the highest priority to a workshop specially designated for him within the base, equipped with basic processing tools and precision instruments. The 2 promised RTG units were also delivered swiftly, carefully stored by Lin Feng as backup energy sources. Inside the workshop, Lin Feng closed his eyes and concentrated his consciousness, sinking into the system interface. The system energy fluctuated gently at 41.3. System, based on the superfluid energy conduit technology and available materials, designed the optimal energy conversion interface solution. Input source: standard electrical output from the nuclear fusion reactor Xian Yuan. Output requirement: convert into a high purity energy stream efficiently absorbable by the system. Constraints: use the provided materials and reserve 10 redundancy to handle output fluctuations. Command received. Generating solution. Solution generation complete. Blueprint for fusion system energy bridge unit ready. Required materials: high conductivity electromagnetic alloy substitute materials available from inventory, high strength aluminum alloy, copper ingot, specialty steel. Ultra pure silicon based materials available inventory, high purity monocrystalline silicon wafers, rare earth magnetic materials available inventory, neodymium marine boron magnets. Required energy: 15 standard units of energy will be consumed during manufacturing for micro-shaping and integration. Estimated efficiency approximately 71. For conversion rate from electrical energy to absorbable energy. An efficiency exceeding 70. This far surpassed any known energy conversion technology on the market. Lin Feng was resolute. The solution provided by the system was always optimal. Though materials were limited, it was sufficient to complete the task. He immediately sprang into action. The workbench was soon cluttered with various metal ingots, silicon wafers, magnets, and complex cables and instruments. Lin Feng's hands moved as if they had a life of their own, operating swiftly among the tools and equipment. Cutting, grinding, welding. His movements were fluid and seamless. More crucially, he would periodically focus his mind, channeling the system's 41.3 energy to perform micro-level shaping and modification on key components. A faint blue light flickered occasionally at his fingertips. The metal changed its internal structure as if it were clay, and the circuits on the silicon wafer were etched with nanometer precision. This ability to combine macro-level operations with micro-level manipulation left Qin Yu and a few technical personnel who were supervising and assisting utterly dazzled and dumbfounded. This had completely transcended the realm of skilled labor, approaching an art form or even magic. Energy consumption 3. 1 unit. Energy consumption 5. 8 units. The system energy was slowly declining, but the prototype of the interface was rapidly taking shape. It was a multi-layered device about the size of a microwave oven, extremely complex in structure with external heat dissipation fins and ports, while inside it was filled with precision structures shaped by system energy conforming to the characteristics of superfluid energy conduits. Hours later, when Lin Feng embedded the last neodymium marine boron magnet into its specific slot and connected the final superconducting wire, the entire device emitted an extremely faint hum and the indicator light on its surface lit up a steady green. Fusion system energy bridge unit manufacturing complete. Current system energy 20. For it was done. Lin Feng wiped the fine sweat from his forehead and looked at Qin Yu. It's ready. Notify the control room to prepare for a low-power test connection. The message was sent out immediately. Soon Josong personally arrived at the observation area outside the workshop, watching the test through the thick bulletproof glass. The entire base's energy supply department also entered standby mode. 2 technicians carefully pushed the heavy energy interface device toward the dedicated interface room connected to the Xian Yuan reactor's energy output terminal. Lin Feng and Qin Yu followed behind. Inside the interface room, thick superconducting cables coiled like giant pythons connected to a standard fusion reactor power output port. The air was filled with a faint smell of ozone and a sense of pressure from the powerful electromagnetic field. The technicians connected the input port of the bridge unit to the output port and locked it. All data lines and monitoring equipment were connected. Interface connection complete. Insulation test passed. Remote control system connection normal. A series of preparatory commands sounded over the intercom. Mr. Lin Feng, please confirm. The person in charge inside the interface room looked at Lin Feng. Lin Feng took a deep breath, stepped forward and pressed his palm onto a specialized palm print sensor area on the side of the bridge unit. Embedded inside was a conductive plate he had specially treated to interact directly with the system. System prepare to receive energy. Initiate buffer protocol, gradually increase absorption power. Command confirmed. Buffer protocol initiated. Ready to begin at any time. Lin Feng nodded to the person in charge. You can start. Begin at 0. 1 of rated output power increase by 0. 1 every 30 seconds. Understood. Xian Yuan reactor output port opening. Output power 0. 1. Hum. A low hum came from the thick cables and the power indicator light on the bridge unit glowed faintly. Beginning energy reception. Conversion efficiency 71. 3. System energy level 20. 5. 20. 6. Stable. Efficient. Lin Feng rejoiced inwardly. The system energy began to slowly recover at a steady and appreciable rate. Increase power to 0. 2. Energy level 20. 8. 21. 0. Increase power to 0. 3. Energy level 21. 3. 21. 6. Everything was going smoothly. In the observation area, Zhou Song's expression relaxed slightly. Xin Yu also breathed a slight sigh of relief. However, when the power was increased to 0. 5, an unexpected change occurred. Hoo hum. That familiar heart-stopping hum from deep underground sounded again without warning. And this time it seemed extremely close beneath their feet. At the same time, the lights in the entire interface room dimmed sharply and all instrument screens flickered violently. Report. Intense geomagnetic disturbance detected. Source depth. Extremely shallow. Right below the base. Report. Slight fluctuation in Xianyuan reactor output. Warning. Abnormal harmonics detected on the energy transmission lines. Stabilize output immediately. Locate the interference source. Zhou Song barked the order over the intercom. But just as the command was issued, warning. Detected high-intensity coherent interference energy pulse propagating backward along the energy lines. Warning. Energy stream purity dropping sharply. Contains unknown chaotic spectrum. Buffer protocol overloaded. Unable to fully filter. System energy stream contaminated. Stability decreasing. Lin Feng's face turned ashen. He felt a violent chaotic energy filled with a destructive aura mixed with the pure fusion electricity surging through the bridge unit and violently into his body. Ugh. He grunted, his body trembling violently, his hand pressed against the sensor area, feeling as if branded by a hot iron, searing with pain. In his mind, the system interface flashed wildly, data streams becoming chaotic. Disconnect. Cut the connection now. Lin Feng roared hoarsely. The operators also noticed the abnormal surge and distortion in the energy readings and frantically tried to remotely cut off the output. But it seemed they were a second too slow. Boom. A muffled explosion came from inside the bridge unit. Several precision components overheated and burned out, emitting billowing black smoke. The entire device shook violently and dangerous blue-violet electrical sparks even shot from the output port. The powerful energy recoil threw Lin Feng heavily to the ground. System energy level 35. 7 energy absorption forcibly interrupted, partial energy contamination, stability 65, bridge unit damage 40, cut the output. Medical team. Hurry. Zhou Song's furious voice came through the intercom. The energy lines were forcibly severed and the interface room was filled with a pungent smell of burning. Alarms blared, medical personnel rushed in, helping up Lin Feng, who was pale and had a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Xin Yu rushed to his side, asking urgently, "How are you?" Lin Feng coughed violently a few times, pushed away the medical staff's hand, struggled to stand on his own, his eyes filled with shock, anger and lingering fear. It's that thing underground. He panted, pointing at the ground. It can sense the concentration and flow of high-purity energy. It's interfering. Even trying to contaminate and seize the energy. This inference sent chills down everyone's spines. The fluctuation in the Xianyuan reactor's output was no accident, it had been precisely interfered with. That chaotic energy pulse propagating backward along the energy lines was clearly a malicious targeted energy attack. Not only did the lava nightmare possess terrifying power, but it also had such sophisticated ability to interfere with and plunder energy systems. What kind of monsters were they? Zhou Song, his face livid, walked into the chaotic interface room, looked at the smoking bridge unit and the injured Lin Feng, his eyes dark and stormy. The first connection test had failed. Not only had it failed, but it had also revealed an even more terrifying fact. The threat from underground was far more bizarre and troublesome than they had imagined. Lin Feng wiped the blood from his mouth, looked at the damaged interface, but a flame of defiance flickered in his eyes. The interface needs enhanced shielding and filtering design, he said in a deep voice. Additionally, the output stability of the Xianyuan reactor must be prioritized. For the next test, we need stronger protection and a more cautious power escalation plan. The setback did not deter him, instead it ignited his fighting spirit. This battle for energy had only just begun. The interface chamber was thick with the acrid smell of burning and a tense atmosphere. After the medical staff confirmed that Lin Feng was merely suffering from surging qi and blood due to the energy impact with no lasting damage, Zhou Song dismissed them with a wave. All eyes were fixed on the energy bridging unit, which was still emitting wisps of blue smoke, its casing partially melted and warped. What exactly happened? Zhou Song's voice was as cold as ice, his gaze sweeping over the chaotic scene in Lin Feng's pale face. Lin Feng took a deep breath, suppressing the still turbulent energy within him, and said in a deep voice, "The thing underground, it can sense and interfere with high-purity energy flow. Just now a highly destructive chaotic energy pulse traveled backward along the power lines, contaminating the energy stream and directly overwhelming the interface's buffer protocol." He pointed at the damaged unit. "Its goal is clear, to stop us or even seize the energy." This conclusion made all the technical staff gasp in shock. To be able to so precisely interfere with nuclear fusion energy output and launch a directed energy attack was beyond their understanding of subterranean lifeforms. Is there a way to defend against it? Zhou Song asked the most critical question. If this interference could not be resolved, not only would Lin Feng be unable to obtain energy, but the entire base's energy security would be under immense threat. Lin Feng did not answer immediately. Instead, he closed his eyes and sank his consciousness into the system. Although the energy stability was only at 65, the analysis function was still operational. System analyze the recorded interference energy spectrum characteristics, simulate its conduction pattern, and calculate the optimal shielding and filtering solution. Instruction received. Analyzing. Interference energy spectrum analysis complete. Characteristics: chaotic waveform, high frequency oscillation carrying strong information entropy disturbance force. Simulating conduction pattern based on vacuum fluctuations and geomagnetic coupling, conventional electromagnetic shielding ineffective. Calculating optimal solution. Solution generated requires construction of quantum probability filtering field combined with superfluid energy guiding trap. Requires consumption of technology points 100 for solution optimization and specific structure blueprint generation. Requires new materials crystal with specific quantum spin properties e.g. lithium niobate crystal superconducting coils upgraded. Technology points. Lin Feng's heart tightened. That was what he needed most right now. It seemed he must begin dismantling and researching more things as soon as possible. He opened his eyes and looked at Zhou Song. Conventional methods won't work. That interference isn't simply electromagnetic waves, it's more like an information state contamination that exploits loopholes in the fundamental laws of physics. An unconventional shielding method is required. He quickly explained the concept of quantum probability filtering, a cutting-edge theoretical idea that uses local quantum state superposition to probabilistically filter out specific spectral energy disturbances, and the role of the superfluid energy guiding trap in channeling and buffering pure energy. Zhou Song and Xinyue, who was standing nearby, listened with furrowed brows. These concepts touched the very frontier of theoretical physics, some existing only in hypothesis. What do you need? Zhou Song asked directly. 2 key materials: high-purity lithium niobate crystal with specific quantum spin properties and better superconducting material to upgrade the coils. Also, Lin Feng paused. I need the authority and resources to immediately begin dismantling and researching other parts of the shadow wreckage to obtain more technical details and data. This will help refine the solution. This was his best excuse to acquire technology points. Zhou Song was silent for a few seconds, weighing the risks and benefits before decisively ordering Dr. Qin fully cooperate with him. The materials on the list, use every channel to get them as fast as possible. Elevate Project Zero clearance to allow him to conduct planned dismantling and research on non-core parts. With the command given, the entire base swung back into efficient operation. Over the next few days, Lin Feng practically lived between the Project Zero hall and his own workshop. Under the assistance surveillance of several researchers and special agents, he began carefully dismantling the relatively independent and non-critical parts of the shadow wreckage: a damaged leg armor plate, a set of broken energy conduction bundles, a severely deformed attitude regulator. Each time he removed a piece, he would spend a long time pretending to inspect it with various instruments, sometimes pondering deeply, other times recording large amounts of data on the terminal. Meanwhile, system prompts kept sounding: recycled shadow leg armor fragment damaged. Technology points 8 dismantled shadow secondary energy conduit. Technology points 12 analyzed shadow attitude regulator wreckage. Technology points 15. Technology points 135. The technology points grew slowly but steadily. At the same time, he took this opportunity to have the system deeply scan and record countless details of the wreckage, enriching the database. The required special materials were also delivered to his workshop one after another. Especially the palm-sized ultra-high-purity lithium niobate crystal, which was allocated quickly through national reserves. Technology points have reached 100. Will you consume 100 points to optimize the quantum probability filtering field generation blueprint and generate a specific crystal structure engraving plan? Yes. A flood of information poured into his mind: how to utilize the specific quantum properties of the lithium niobate crystal through extremely complex microscopic engraving to make it the core generator of the filtering field, how to redesign the superconducting coils to form the guiding trap, how to perfectly integrate both into the new bridging unit. Lin Feng once again threw himself into the creation process, forgetting sleep and meals. This time his operations were even more precise, especially the engraving of the lithium niobate crystal, which nearly drained all his recovered mental energy and energy reserves, pushing the system's microscopic control precision to its limit. Energy consumption 10. 3 units. Current system energy 10. 1 stability 70. On the workbench, a new interface device with a more complex structure imbued with a certain non-Euclidean geometric aesthetic gradually took shape. Its core was no longer complex circuits but the lithium niobate crystal engraved with countless nanoscale patterns and emitting a faint glow, surrounded by new coils shimmering with the cold light of superconductivity. A few days later, the second generation fusion system energy bridging unit was completed. Back in the interface chamber, the atmosphere was even more tense than before. Zhou Song personally oversaw the control center. All energy output ports had triple physical isolation gates added and emergency teams were fully in position. Initiate quantum filtering field preheating, Lin Feng commanded. As the technicians operated, the lithium niobate crystal inside the new interface unit glowed faintly, emitting a strange force field that seemed to distort the surrounding light enveloping the entire unit. Filtering field stable. Output port connection complete. Begin output power at 0. 1. Lin Feng's voice was calm as he pressed his palm onto the sensor area again. The energy stream surged in again. Beginning energy reception. Quantum filtering field functioning normally. Interference spectrum attenuated by 99. 97. Energy purity 99. 99. Conversion efficiency 70. 8. System energy level 10. 2. 10. 5. It worked. The filtering field was perfectly effective. Increase power to 0. 2. Energy level 10. 9. 11. 3. Increase power to 0. 3. Energy level 11. 8. 12. 2. Stable. Efficient. No interference. Expressions of relief appeared on the faces in the control center and on Zhou Song. The power was gradually increased, quickly surpassing the 0.5 mark from the previous incident, moving toward 1. System energy level 25. 7. Just as everyone thought everything was going smoothly. Warning. Detected ultra-strong interference pulse attempting to breach the filtering field. Intensity is over 3 times the previous one. Quantum filtering field overload 7. Restabilizing. Warning. The interference source is analyzing the filtering field pattern, attempting to find probability loopholes. The entity underground seemed enraged, launching a more ferocious attack. Lin Feng's expression changed and he immediately shouted, "Maintain current power. Do not increase it." He concentrated, fully guiding the system to fine-tune the quantum state distribution of the filtering field, filling the probability loopholes that the enemy was probing. A silent battle fought at the quantum level raged fiercely through the energy lines. Filtering field stability 92. 95. 93. Interference intensity continues to climb. Beads of sweat formed on Lin Feng's forehead. The enemy's learning and adaptation speed were astonishing. Just as the filtering field stability slipped back toward the critical point of 90, interference intensity plummets. Interference source ceases attack. It suddenly retreated. Lin Feng was startled but dared not let his guard down. The control center also detected the sudden stabilization of the energy flow. "What's going on?" Zhou Song's voice came through. Lin Feng carefully sensed the energy flow and said slowly, "It stopped attacking. It seems." After confirming it couldn't break through, it chose to give up. But was that really the case? Why in those final moments did he seem to sense an extremely subtle emotion, different from the pure destructive desire before? A hint of confusion. That thing underground didn't seem to have only a beast's instinct. This thought sent a deeper unease through Lin Feng. System energy level 38. 5 stable energy replenishment could finally continue, but the road ahead seemed even more shrouded in mystery. The sensation of stable energy infusion surged through his body like a warm current, and the originally dim light on the system interface became steady and bright. An energy level of 38. 5, though still far from its peak state, was sufficient to support the normal operation of most functions. Lin Feng did not dwell long in the joy of energy recovery. The faint trace of puzzlement that the underground entity had revealed last time lingered like a thorn, stirring a subtle unease within him. It was far from a mere creature of destruction. It possessed the ability to learn and perhaps even some form of intelligence. He had to understand it as quickly as possible before it launched another, more ferocious and bizarre attack. Director Lin Feng contacted Zhou Song directly through the internal communication system. "I need to access part of the computing power from Xianyuan and all data permissions from the base's geological survey department. Especially the detailed scanning data of the geological structure beneath the base and all records of changes since that impact." "What are you planning to do?" Zhou Song's voice carried a hint of caution. Having just stabilized the energy interface, what major move was this kid plotting now? "An experiment, one that might allow us to see the approximate form and activity patterns of that thing underground," Lin Feng explained. "Last time it precisely disrupted the energy flow, showing it's highly sensitive to high-purity energy. But what about sound waves? Especially passive acoustic detection at specific frequencies and low intensity. Perhaps we could evade its perception, or at least avoid triggering such a violent reaction." Acoustic detection was a common tool in geology and oceanography. Zhou Song pondered for a moment, finding the approach relatively safe and risks manageable. "Approved. Dr. Qin will assist you with computing power and data. What equipment do you need?" "No additional equipment," Lin Feng said, startling everyone. "Use the base's existing ventilation water supply and even cable conduits as natural acoustic waveguides. I need you to inject a set of low-intensity specific spectrum composite acoustic signals I've designed into these pipes, then monitor all pipe wall vibrations, especially those from deep underground. The computing power of Xianyuan will process these vast, extremely subtle feedback signals to construct an underground image. This was essentially turning the entire underground infrastructure network of the base into a massive acoustic radar antenna. The idea seemed insane, yet upon careful thought it held remarkably high feasibility. Zhou Song deliberated for less than 10 seconds. Approved. Dr. Qin, give him full support with all computing power and data needs. Coordinate with system departments to ensure the injected signals don't disrupt base operations. The command was as firm as a mountain. The vast national machinery once again set in motion for Lin Feng's idea. A flood of data streamed into the terminal in Lin Feng's workspace, displaying a three-dimensional map of the base's labyrinthine underground pipe network. Geological scan data models of sound wave propagation through different rock layers, the astonishing computing power of Xianyuan, everything was ready. Lin Feng closed his eyes, his consciousness deeply connecting with the system. System based on existing geological data and the pipe network model designed the optimal composite acoustic detection frequency combination. Develop an algorithm for processing underground acoustic feedback signals, maximize the use of available computing power and generate a real-time three-dimensional imaging model. Command received. Calculating. Composite acoustic frequency combination generated. Feedback signal processing algorithm optimizing. 3D imaging model constructing. Technology points required 50 for algorithm optimization and model construction. Deduct them. The technology points decreased again, but in return an extraordinarily complex and exquisite acoustic detection and imaging scheme emerged in his mind. He quickly relayed the frequency combination and algorithm requirements to Qinyu. The base's engineers cautiously injected the set of specific faint acoustic signals, barely perceptible, into the vast pipe network. Then came the weight and data collection. Thousands of vibration sensors at key nodes in the pipes began to work, collecting vast amounts of subtle data, typically dismissed as background noise, and transmitting it in real time to Xianyuan. The supercomputing power roared into action, executing the complex algorithms provided by Lin Feng, far surpassing current standards, and processing the ocean of data. On the massive screen in the main control room, the previously fuzzy underground structure map based on old geological scans began to sharpen and refine at a visible pace. The density of rock layers, the structure of fault zones, even the flow of underground rivers were presented with greater precision. All the geologists stared in awe at this miraculous sight. Yet this was only the beginning. As the algorithm delved deeper, the imaging depth extended further downward, 500 meters. 1,000 meters. 1,500 meters. At a depth of approximately 2,100 meters, a stunning scene emerged. The imaging was no longer clear rock structures, but a vast blurry writhing and shifting mass of dark red shadow like boiling lava. This shadow covered an enormous area, nearly encompassing dozens of square kilometers directly beneath the base. At its core, the highest brightness indicated an unimaginable high-energy reaction. So this is the lava nightmare. Xianyu's voice was dry, filled with disbelief and shock. Though it was only a simulated image of energy and density, its immense size and the terrifying energy it contained sent chills down everyone's spine. No. This doesn't look like a living organism. An elderly geologist pushed up his glasses and said tremblingly, it looks more like a vast living ecosystem. Or rather, a complete underground energy circulation system. Lin Feng stared intently at the screen as the system's data analysis ran simultaneously. Detecting super-large life-energy hybrid reaction. Structure shows high networking and functional zoning. Detecting multiple high-energy concentration points, suspected cores or nodes. Detecting dark energy geothermal hybrid features distinct from and repelling the shadow residues energy spectrum. Warning, detected extremely weak shadow fragment signals at the network's edge. Enlarge the GW17 area. The edge zone. Lin Feng suddenly pointed at a spot on the imaging map. The technician immediately zoomed in. There at the edge of the boiling dark red network, an extremely faint point out of place from the surroundings with a hint of blue light was moving slowly yet unwaveringly toward the network's depths. Like a drop of water trying to merge into a burning sea of oil. That is. Xianyu covered her mouth. It's a fragment of the shadow. Lin Feng's voice carried a hint of dread. It wasn't completely destroyed. It's still active. What does it want? To infiltrate. Or to return. This discovery made everyone's scalp tingle. A fragment of an alien reconnaissance probe was trying to merge into that terrifying planet-level defense network creature beneath their feet. At that moment, the brightest core area on the imaging map suddenly pulsed violently. As if a slumbering giant beast had abruptly opened its eyes. Then an indescribable sensation, not through sound but directly impacting the consciousness of all living beings, a gaze like icy water surged up from the deep underground, piercing through thick rock layers and enveloping the entire base. Everyone, whether researchers in the main control room or soldiers in the corridors, felt an inexplicable palpitation and chill at that moment, as if being swept coldly by an incomprehensible colossal will. The underground imaging on the screen instantly turned to static and all sensor feedback data plunged into complete chaos. The acoustic detection has been discovered. Lin Feng exclaimed. Despite all efforts to conceal it, the subtle acoustic disturbances had still alerted the consciousness of the entity deep below. The next second. Boom. A thunderous roar more violent and closer than ever before rumbled from the depths of the earth. The entire base, like a small boat in a raging storm, began to shake violently. The ceiling lights flickered wildly and then burst one after another. The piercing emergency alarm blared through every corner. Report. Multiple rock layers beneath the base are experiencing severe displacement. Report. Severe collapse in Zone 3 passage. Report. External cooling pipe pressure of Xianyuan is spiking abnormally. A physical attack. After the energy interference failed, the entity underground finally resorted to the most direct and brutal method. It was going to bury this ant's nest, the base that had dared to spy on it and harbored fragments of its enemy, completely. Activate full emergency protocols. All non-combat personnel evacuate to the core zone. Special forces prepare for possible surface breaches. Josong's roar cut through the alarms. In the chaos, Lin Feng gripped the control panel tightly to steady himself. But his gaze remained fixed on the static-filled screen, as if he could still see that persistent blue dot moving toward the abyss core. Shadow fragments. Nightmare network. What was their true relationship? Was this sudden devastating attack due to the spying or because of that infiltrating shadow fragment? The base was in howls of despair. Violent tremors shook every inch of structure in the mountain's belly as if an endless earthquake was tearing it apart. Concrete fragments and metal components fell like raindrops from above, crashing onto the ground of the corridor, and the emergency-activated protective force field producing a jarring sound that made one's teeth ache. The piercing sound of twisted metal echoed from all directions as if the entire base was being squeezed and kneaded by an invisible giant hand. The blood-red light provided by the emergency lighting system flickered in the dust-filled air, elongating the frantic figures of people into distorted silhouettes. The shrill alarms and reports of casualties echoed through the broadcasting system, amplifying the atmosphere of despair. The tunnel in Zone 3 has completely collapsed. Confirmation of personnel trapped. Pressure in the life support system of Zone 6 is plummeting. The cooling circulation pump surrounding the Xianyuan pile has malfunctioned. The core temperature is slowly rising. In the main control room, Josong stood like a rock amidst the chaos, his face pale yet issuing orders clearly and calmly. Abandon Zone 3, focus all efforts on reinforcing the core area and the tunnel to the Xianyuan pile. The engineering team should prioritize repairing the cooling system. All non-essential energy should be concentrated on structural support and the protective force field. His gaze swept across the main screen, which had once displayed the terrifying scenes underground, now flickering with static, finally landing on Lin Feng and Qingyue, who had just been escorted in by the special forces. Your sonar detection seems to have completely provoked it. Josong's tone was ambiguous, neither accusatory nor declarative. But it has also revealed the truth to us. Lin Feng wiped the dust from his face, his eyes sharp. Conventional methods cannot withstand geological shifts of this magnitude. We must immediately reinforce the critical support structures of the base and the periphery of the Xianyuan pile. What materials will we use for reinforcement? The existing engineering materials and force field generators are already operating at overload, a nearby engineer shouted in despair. Use the technology from Shadow. Lin Feng proclaimed astonishingly, the Shadow Krypton nanocomposite combined with the superfluid energy conduits as rapid delivery and shaping mediums. They possess strengths and energy adaptability far beyond existing materials. But those technologies are still in the experimental stage, they cannot be applied on a large scale. Qinyu said anxiously. We don't need large-scale applications. We only need localized reinforcement and energy redirection at critical nodes. Lin Feng quickly approached a still-functioning terminal, accessed his permissions and commanded system immediately calculate the 17 most vulnerable stress points in the core area of the base and the periphery of the Xianyuan pile. Generate the optimal nano-reinforcement plan utilizing the existing superfluid energy conduit technology as the delivery and rapid forming process. Command received. Calculating. Plan generation. Required technology points 30. Required materials reserve metal materials available, high purity energy available, consume. Lin Feng did not hesitate. In the next second, complex structural diagrams and construction plans appeared on the screen, precisely marking the locations of every point that needed reinforcement, the amounts of nanomaterials required, and the paths for energy redirection. Concentrate all available engineering robots and 3D printing units at these coordinates. Grant me access to the energy interface of the Xianyuan pile. Hurry! Lin Feng shouted. Josong hesitated for only a second before decisively ordering, do as he says. Highest authority. At this moment, every possible opportunity must be seized. Soon dozens of engineering robots carrying reserve metal ingots and printing materials rushed toward the coordinates designated by Lin Feng, braving the danger of constant collapses. Lin Feng's workspace also received several high-precision industrial printing arms urgently. System remotely guide all printing units to begin nano-level smelting and printing. Simultaneously guide the energy flow for on-site fusion reinforcement. Lin Feng pressed his hands on the terminal, closing his eyes, pushing the system's control to the limit. 38. 5 of energy began to deplete rapidly. Energy output 5. Guiding printing units to start working. Energy output 8. Constructing superfluid energy conduits. Delivering nanomaterials. Energy output 12. Critical stress point S7 begins fusion reinforcement. Incredible scenes were unfolding throughout the base. The metal materials carried by the engineering robots melted and reformed at a visibly rapid pace into a substance shimmering with dark silver sheen resembling liquid metal, then were precisely guided by an invisible energy flow to the violently shaking fissures and vulnerable nodes, quickly permeating, fusing and shaping, almost instantaneously forming an incredibly sturdy support structure and reinforcement layer. It was less like welding or pouring and more like growing. A metallic structure with a striking alien technological aesthetic and astonishing strength was frantically growing out from the critical points inside the base, bracing itself against the destructive pressure from the outside. The intensity of the tremors seemed to have lessened slightly. Especially in the core area and near the Xianyuan pile, the structures had obviously stabilized. There is an effect. Stress readings are decreasing. Cooling pump malfunction eliminated. Pressure stabilized. Load on the force field generator reduced by 15. The reports filled with the joy of surviving a catastrophe rekindled hope among those who were nearly in despair. Incredible. Xinyu murmured, watching the dark silver structures that seemed to grow like living beings on the monitoring screen. This was nothing short of a miracle. Zhou tense expression slightly eased and his gaze towards Lin Feng became even more profound. However, Lin Feng's brow furrowed tighter. The system's energy was depleting rapidly, having fallen below 20. Moreover, the portion of computational power he had allocated was still monitoring the movements underground through the few deep sensors that remained intact. The frenzied attacks from below seemed to have hesitated due to the sudden sturdiness of the base, but that massive energy network was still boiling. What concerned him more was the small azure point representing the shadow fragment. It had not been destroyed in the recent violent geological upheaval, rather it had accelerated its movement, seizing the opportunity amid the chaos and the energy network's concentrated assault on the base. At this moment it had delved deeply into the depths of that dark red network and stopped. The location where it stopped was precisely at a structurally complex node on the edge of the highlighted core area from the previous sonar imaging. What was that place? Just as Lin Feng was puzzled, the azure point suddenly emitted an extremely weak yet exceptionally sharp energy pulse. This pulse was not offensive, it felt more like a specific signal. Or perhaps a key. The pulse vanished in an instant. In the next second another anomaly occurred. The violent tremors of the base abruptly ceased without warning. Like a duck with its neck pinched, all the sounds of earth shaking and rock cracking vanished within seconds, leaving only the residual alarm sounds from inside the base and the heavy breathing of people echoing in the empty corridor. A deathly silence descended. Everyone was stunned at a loss. What happened? It gave up. Xinyu asked in bewilderment. Zhou also furrowed his brow tightly. There must be something amiss. Only Lin Feng's expression changed dramatically. His monitoring indicated that the massive dark red energy network underground had not ceased operation, rather it had become even more active. But this activity was no longer chaotic and violent, it was as if something was guiding it and energy was gathering intensely towards a certain point in the core of the network. And the brightness of the complex node where the shadow fragment was located was rising rapidly. It was as if a dormant valve was being slowly opened. It was not there to merge. It was there to activate something. No. Lin Feng shouted, its target is not to destroy the base. It aims to use this attack to draw attention. Its target is the nightmare network itself. It wants to activate. His words were not yet finished. Drip. A sound extremely faint yet clear, as if echoing in everyone's ears, came from nowhere. Followed by the second, third. In the corridor, those metal walls just reinforced with dark silver nanomaterials, and even those that were not reinforced suddenly began to ooze drops of viscous liquid shimmering with dark red light like lava. They flowed along the walls like blood that had a life of its own gathering. The power from below had unexpectedly permeated the base's interior in a new, more bizarre way. Silence and suffocating stillness replaced the deafening roar and alarms, leaving only the crimson glow of emergency lights and the dust-laden air as testament to the near-cataclysmic disaster. Everyone stood frozen, staring in disbelief at the viscous liquid creeping along the walls, shimmering with an ominous dark red luminescence. It resembled sentient blood or molten metal, and wherever it flowed the sturdy alloy walls emitted a faint sizzling sound as they slowly corroded and dissolved. What is this? A young soldier stammered, instinctively raising his gun at the spreading liquid on the wall. Don't touch it. Lin Feng barked sharply. Everyone fall back. Stay away from the walls. His system interface flashed frantic alerts, detected highly active nightmare energy matter hybrid. Possesses strong corrosive, assimilative and energy absorbing properties. Composition analysis contains high temperature plasma state minerals, unknown organic matter, high concentration dark energy. Threat level extreme. Immediate energy isolation recommended. Energy isolation. Use strong energy fields to block them. Lin Feng shouted to Zhou. They're essentially an extension of an energy lifeform. Physical contact will cause corrosion, but high purity energy barriers can temporarily hold them back. Zhou understood instantly and ordered all available force field generators maximum power, aim at the liquid spread area. Hurry! The surviving force field generators pivoted, unleashing azure energy barriers that materialized like invisible walls before the dark red liquid. Sizzle. The moment the dark red liquid contacted the energy barrier, a violent energy annihilation reaction erupted, emitting a piercing screech as red and blue light flickered and clashed. The liquid was temporarily halted, but the force field generators' energy readings plummeted rapidly. They were being consumed at an alarming rate. There. Absorbing the energy field's power, the operator reported in horror. This was no long-term solution. Dr. Chin. Analyze the liquid's composition, immediately find its weakness or a method to inert it. Zhou Song commanded while turning to Lin Feng. Any ideas? Lin Feng's mind raced. The system had only 18 energy left, insufficient for large-scale operations. A direct confrontation was absolutely out of the question. His gaze fell upon the remaining barely functional deep sensor readings on the main console. The core node where the shadow fragment resided had stabilized at an extremely high luminosity, like a beacon successfully activated. Meanwhile, the nightmare network's energy was slowly converging toward that node in a strange orderly manner, no longer as violent and chaotic as before. It's not trying to destroy us. Lin Feng murmured, a startling hypothesis forming in his mind. It's transforming. Using the shadow fragment as a key and guide, it's remodeling the nightmare network in this area, infiltrating this liquid, this lava blood, to assimilate the base. This land. Completely into itself. To reshape it into a nest suitable for its existence. The thought sent chills down everyone's spine. If true, their resistance seemed utterly futile. The entity's goal wasn't destruction but devouring and conversion. We must stop that fragment. Lin Feng jerked his head up. It's the key. It's guiding and converting the energy. Sever its connection to the nightmare network. How? It's over 2,000 meters deep underground. Chin, you despaired. Energy resonance. Lin Feng's eyes flashed with sharp brilliance. The shadow fragment and the nightmare network have different, even opposing energy spectrums, but they've established a fragile connection through that node. If we can use a powerful energy pulse homologous to the shadow fragment for precise resonant interference, we might break that link. Homologous energy. Where could they find? All eyes instantly turned toward the workshop. There lay a small depleted core fragment of the shadow that Lin Feng had initially obtained. That fragment. Though drained of energy, its material and core frequency are homologous to the one below. Chin, you realized. But it has no energy. Xianyuan reactor does. Lin Feng looked at Zhou Song. We need Xianyuan to provide a powerful pure energy stream emitted through that fragment as a resonator. But it requires extremely precise frequency control, mimicking the shadow energy's characteristic frequency. Any deviation could render it ineffective or even strengthen their connection. This was another colossal gamble, demanding an exquisite understanding of the shadow energy frequency. Can you do it? Zhou Song stared intently at Lin Feng. I can try. But I need full cooperation from Xianyuan and maximum computing power for frequency simulation and calibration. Lin Feng had no certainty, but it was the only hope. Let's gamble. Zhou Song didn't hesitate. Dr. Chin, take him to Xianyuan main control. Authorize maximum energy and computing power. Everyone else maintain the force fields at all costs, buy us time. Lin Feng and Xianyue, escorted by two special operatives, raced toward the core Xianyuan reactor control room. Along the way, the dark red liquid had seeped into deeper areas, some ceiling sections even dripping this terrifying lava blood, while azure force field lights flickered faintly in the corridors, barely holding. Inside Xianyuan main control, the tension was palpable. A massive circular screen displayed reactor parameters. Though the core was stable, peripheral system alarms blared incessantly. Lin Feng placed the dim black core fragment into an emergency modified resonance emitter connected to the main energy conduit. His hands pressed against the console as his consciousness linked with the system. System fully analyze the residual shadow energy characteristics, calculate the optimal resonant interference frequency. Guide Xianyuan energy output, complete calibration. Command received. Analyzing. Energy characteristic simulation. Requires 20 tech points, calculating. Frequency calibration. Requires 10 energy consume. Lin Feng gritted his teeth. Tech points and the already scarce energy dwindled further. Vast computing power and energy converged. The frequency readings on the console flickered and fine-tuned at a dizzying pace, finally stabilizing into an extremely complex, constantly shifting pattern. Now. Output power at 5. Continuous pulse mode. Lin Feng roared. The operator slammed down the control lever. V-room. An unimaginably immense energy stream surged through the thick superconducting conduits into the emitter. The dim core fragment instantly ignited, erupting with an unprecedented blazing azure radiance. A condensed, almost reality-piercing azure energy pulse vibrating at a specific aesthetically perfect frequency shot into the earth, ignoring thick rock layers, and struck the target node 2,000 meters below with pinpoint accuracy. Did it work? Everyone held their breath, staring at the deep sensor feedback. 1 second. 2 seconds. On the screen, the azure dot representing the shadow fragment flickered violently. It seemed heavily disrupted. Its energy connection channel with the surrounding dark red network became extremely unstable, flickering erratically. It was working. Yet before anyone could cheer, warning. Detected abnormal energy convergence at the Nightmare Network core highlight zone. Warning. Interference pulse partially absorbed and converted. Warning. Unknown high-dimensional energy reaction activating. The core of the Nightmare Network, which had been passively gathering energy, seemed enraged or fully activated by this homologous energy pulse. It was no longer content with indirect control through the fragment. An indescribable icy ancient consciousness brimming with an overwhelming will of annihilation surged back up the azure pulse channel like a slumbering primordial titan awakening. Boom! Lin Feng was struck as if by a hammer, spitting out a mouthful of blood as an invisible force hurled him across the room. His system interface dissolved into chaotic static and piercing alarms. That terrifying consciousness had locked onto the source of the energy pulse, the Xianyuan main control room. It was coming. Cold. Not in terms of temperature, but a chilling silence emanating from the depths of the soul, as if thrown into absolute nothingness. Lin Feng's consciousness floated in the endless darkness, the system interface fragmented with only sporadic sparks of energy flickering, each flash bringing a tearing pain. That ancient will emanating from the core of the Dian network felt like an invisible weight of countless tons attempting to completely crush and assimilate his existence. In the control room, a terrifying mental pressure spread like a tangible substance. All the precision instrument screens instantly went black, even emitting wisps of smoke. The operators cried out in agony, clutching their heads, blood seeping from their nostrils and ears, while the weak-willed fainted directly to the ground. The bright lights were completely extinguished, leaving only the eerie blue glow radiating from the Xianyuan pile core through layers of protection which only added to the strangeness. Xinyu collapsed beside the control panel, her face as pale as paper, her body trembling uncontrollably, her eyes filled with unprecedented fear. It was not a fear of death, but the most instinctual and profound awe and despair of lower life forms facing incomprehensible higher dimensional existence. Only Zhou Song remained steadfast, though his face was also pale and his forehead was bulging with veins. He still stood firm like a spear anchored to the ground. He suddenly slammed his fist down on a control panel protected by a special alloy shell. Crack! The shell shattered, revealing an emergency button inside that required simultaneous verification of palm print iris and command. Activate. South Gate. He forced out these words through gritted teeth, his voice distorted by immense pressure. Confirming highest authority. Final defense protocol South Gate activated. Warning: this operation will deplete 95 of the base's backup energy and may cause irreversible damage to the Xianyuan pile. Confirm. Confirm. Zhou Song roared, slamming his palm down. Buzz. Deep within the base, a massive facility that had never been activated before was suddenly powered on. The stored massive energy burned wildly. It was neither an offensive energy cannon nor a physical barrier. An invisible yet extraordinary field that instantly altered the physical rules within a certain range spread rapidly from the control room of the Xianyuan pile. If the will of Dian was attempting to drag this space into its dimension, then the South Gate was forcibly anchoring reality, briefly creating a realm of reality solidification in this area. The crimson blood of lava that was infiltrating seemed to have been paused, instantly solidifying. The tangible, terrifying pressure in the air suddenly paused, as if it had crashed into an invisible wall of absolute rationality. That ancient and cold will revealed a hint of clear astonishment for the first time. It seemed unable to comprehend why this group of lower beings could wield such a defense mechanism that touched upon the rules. South Gate. This is not technology of this era. It is a relic. A remnant from the last civilization cycle, or even earlier, left by humanity or other intelligent life forms. The Dragon Group mastered and repaired it, yet still could not fully comprehend its principles and could only use it as a last resort. This brief astonishment and stagnation bought Lin Feng a crucial moment to breathe. Detecting higher dimensional rule defense field. Countering external will invasion. System core rebooting. Energy level 8. Stability 41. Attempting repair. The shattered system interface struggled to reassemble, still riddled with cracks, but at least restored basic functionality. The pressure that had nearly crushed his consciousness slightly diminished. Lin Feng coughed up a few mouthfuls of blood, struggling to sit up halfway, his gaze towards Zhou Song filled with shock. The Dragon Group actually had such a trump card. The South Gate can't hold for long. Zhou Song gasped, leaning against the control panel to steady himself. Its energy consumption is too rapid. We must find a way before the energy runs out. A way. What way could there be? Facing such dimensional pressure. At this moment, the chaotic spectral data of the Dian network, which remained in Lin Feng's mind from absorbing the RTG unit infusion energy, began to spontaneously compare and analyze with the newly acquired precise frequency characteristics of shadow energy within the peculiar stable field created by South Gate, as if catalyzed in some way. A very weak detail that had previously been completely ignored was magnified. Deep within the chaotic energy spectrum of Dian actually hid an extremely weak frequency characteristic that was highly homologous to shadow energy. Although distorted, covered, and nearly indistinguishable, they indeed existed. Like two extreme dialects of the same language. Or born from the same source but evolved in two completely opposite directions. Brother civilizations. This discovery made Lin Feng's heart race. He suddenly looked at Zhou the south gate. Can it not only defend but also amplify certain specific fluctuations? In theory, it can enhance the physical rules in specific areas including the clarity and range of information transmission. What are you planning? Transmit information. Lin Feng's eyes sparkled with a mad light. Transmit information to the ground. Using the frequency of shadow. The consciousness and energy of Dian are not completely incommunicable. They have commonalities at their core. They might share a common origin. This idea was too bold. It was simply whimsical. Are you crazy? Communicating with that kind of thing? Qin Yu exclaimed. What else? Wait to die. Lin Feng shouted, the south gate can't hold on, and once the Xian Yuan pile is damaged we're all doomed. This is our only chance. Betting that there exists some, even if extremely hostile, basis of understanding between them. Zhou Song stared intently at Lin Feng, glancing at the rapidly depleting energy readings as well as the dark red liquid outside that, although temporarily solidified, still emitted a terrifying aura. 3 seconds later he made a decision. Control of the south gate is temporarily transferred to you. Tell me what frequency to amplify. He chose to trust Lin Feng's incredible intuition and judgment. Lin Feng immediately imported the shadow frequency pattern containing subtle homologous characteristics into the control system of the south gate. Amplify this. Continuous output. Maximum power. The south gate rule enhancement field is adjusting. Target specific information frequency amplification. Energy consumption intensifying. Estimated remaining time 120 seconds. An invisible enhanced specific energy fluctuation like a precisely tuned laser shot down towards the ground again. This time it was neither an attack nor interference but more like a call attempting to establish a connection. 1 second. 2 seconds. The ancient will beneath seemed to pause once more. It sensed this strange information, this familiar yet unfamiliar, homologous yet alien language. The solidified dark red liquid slightly shifted. The terrifying pressure seemed to weaken slightly, no longer purely destructive but carrying an indescribable, complex emotion. At that moment, a transformation occurred once more. The previous shadow fragment that acted as the key to activate the node seemed to be stimulated by this homologous reinforced frequency, suddenly erupting with an extremely brief yet substantial information-laden energy pulse. This pulse was neither the chaotic violence of Dian nor the cold silence of the previous shadow but carried a sense of sorrow, resolution and warning. The pulse information was captured and amplified by the south gate field, instantly reflected onto the terminal screen in the control room. Although most of the information was indecipherable, several repeatedly appearing distorted symbols made a language analyst scream. Wait a minute. These symbols, structures. I've seen similar ones in the fragmented inscriptions of the ancient Atlantis myth. It means cage, guard, betrayal. Cage. Guard. Betrayal. Everyone was stunned. The ancient will beneath, after receiving this pulse information from the shadow fragment, suddenly boiled. But this time it was no longer a desire for destruction against the base but turned towards the shadow fragment deep underground, filled with a fury of betrayal. Did Lin Feng's mind flash with a lightning-like thought? Were the shadow civilization and Dian not simply invaders in planetary defenses? Had they once shared a common origin? Later split due to some betrayal. And was Dian the guard imprisoned here? Or the prisoner sealed here after betrayal? The arrival of the shadow fragment was not to integrate but to reconfirm the seal. Or completely destroy this imprisoned brother. And their energy resonance and information transmission by some twist of fate seemed to be aiding the imprisoned one. At that moment of information shock causing the Dian will to shift, its target energy of the south gate depleted. The field vanished. The humming sound abruptly ceased. The control room was once again exposed to that terrifying will. But this time the ancient will merely scanned across the entire base coldly, no longer carrying the previous destructiveness but instead imbued with an indescribable, complex emotion. As if examining, as if judging. Then like a tide it receded. Even the solidified dark red liquid quickly dissipated, as if evaporating, retracting back into the walls and ground as if it had never appeared. Only the battered base remained, along with a group of survivors who had escaped the disaster, now caught in greater confusion and shock. The crisis seemed to have been temporarily averted. But an even larger and darker ancient secret had just begun to reveal itself. Lin Feng collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, watching the various instruments rapidly return to normal, his back completely soaked in cold sweat. Had they just nearly become pawns in some ancient vendetta that spanned across vast starseas and ages? End of chapter 26. Silence descended once more, but this time it was no longer the suffocating prelude to annihilation. Instead it was an eerie calm filled with ruins and confusion that follows a violent storm. Within the main control room of the Xian Yuan reactor, the deep blue core light stabilized in various instrument screens gradually rebooted, emitting a faint hum. The surviving staff struggled to their feet, aiding the wounded in clearing the chaos. Fear lingered on every face, along with the dazed bewilderment of having narrowly escaped death. Zhou Song leaned against the console, his breathing heavy and a trace of dried blood at his temple. Activating the southern gate had demanded a far greater toll than anticipated, yet he still stood upright, his gaze immediately fixed on Lin Feng, who was slumped on the ground, his face deathly pale. "How are you?" Lin Feng shook his head with difficulty, signaling that he could still hold on. The system's energy was at a mere 8, its stability pitifully low. The lingering aftershocks of excruciating pain in his mind were still present, but what unsettled him more was the complex emotion-laden glimpse cast by the ancient will and the mournful warning emitted by the shadow fragment. Prison. Warden. Betrayal. These 3 words swirled in his mind like a curse. Immediately assess the damage to the base. Prioritize rescuing the wounded and stabilizing the Xianyuan reactor. Zhou Song suppressed his own emotional turmoil, swiftly resuming command. Technical division, focus on data recovery, especially all the energy fluctuations and information fragments we just recorded. Not a single byte can be lost. With the orders issued, the base, like a wounded giant, began a slow and methodical process of self-repair. Supported by a colleague, Qin Yu approached, her voice still trembling slightly. "Director Zhou, Lin Feng. What happened just now? Was it real? Those 2 symbols. Ancient Atlantis." Zhou Song's gaze grew profoundly deep. He looked at Lin Feng. "What do you think?" Lin Feng took a deep breath and said slowly, "DN and the shadow likely originate from the same ancient interstellar civilization. For some reason a betrayal occurred in one side, very likely the shadow imprisoned the other DN deep within the earth. The shadow fragment came this time to reinforce the seal, or perhaps to completely destroy this imprisoned brother. Our previous energy resonance and information transmission may have been misinterpreted by DN as an attempt to release it, which is why it reacted so violently. And the shadow fragment's final warning confirms its identity as the warden or executioner. This bold and startling hypothesis perfectly explained all the previously incomprehensible and contradictory phenomena. If that's true." Qin Yu's face grew even paler. "Then we almost inadvertently helped a sealed planet-destroying terror break free." A chill of fear washed over everyone like ice water. "But DN retreated in the end," a researcher murmured. "It seemed to have changed its mind." "It didn't change its mind," Lin Feng shook his head, his expression grave. "It was weighing its options. Our southern gate and our attempt at communication made it realize we weren't the Shadow Clan as it perceived us. We are a variable. One it might use, or one it needs to be wary of. Its retreat doesn't mean it has given up. It's more like temporary observation." This judgment tightened the atmosphere that had just begun to relax. Being observed by such an entity was far from a good thing. "We must make a choice, and quickly," Zhou Song said gravely, his gaze sweeping over everyone. "Do we attempt to contact the warden represented by the shadow fragment seeking cooperation to maintain the seal? Or do we find a way to engage in limited dangerous communication with the prisoner DN trying to gain power and technology from it, or even exploit their conflict?" Both choices were fraught with unknowns and immense risk. The former, it was unknown whether the shadow civilization was friend or foe, how they would treat humanity was unpredictable, and they might even see humans as ants to be exterminated. The latter was akin to courting a tiger for its skin. DN's terror and chaos were clear for all to see, and the slightest misstep would lead to eternal damnation. "Perhaps there is a third path," Lin Feng suddenly spoke, drawing everyone's attention. Struggling to his feet, he walked to the main console and pulled up the structural diagram of the southern gate system along with the fleeting record of the ancient energy operation pattern. Southern gate. It is not a creation of our era. The fact that it could briefly resist the dimensional erosion of DN suggests its technological level is extremely high, perhaps even on par with the civilizations behind the shadow or DN. Lin Feng said, a gleam of wisdom in his eyes. "It is nearly incomplete and we cannot fully understand or replicate it. But..." He paused, his tone becoming excited. "But just now, while I was guiding it, the system recorded parts of its core operational rules and energy architecture. While we cannot replicate the entire southern gate, perhaps we can reverse engineer some key black technology that we can understand and apply. A black technology of our own based on ancient relic technology." This idea was like striking a match in the darkness. Not relying on the dangerous shadow, not colluding with the terrifying DN, but forging our own path. Excavating the ancient legacy hidden within the earth itself. For example, Lin Feng said, quickly operating the terminal to visualize some of the system's analyzed data. "We can't yet replicate the southern gate's ability to stabilize local physical laws. But its use of energy, the almost absolute order exclusivity when generating a defense field. Perhaps we could simplify that into a personal shield. Or could its technology for amplifying and purifying information frequencies be used to develop quantum communication that cannot be jammed?" Preliminary simplified design blueprints and theoretical models appeared on the screen. Though rough, they pointed toward clear application directions. Everyone's eyes lit up. Especially the researchers, who felt as if a vast new treasure trove of technology was opening before them. And there's this. Lin Feng called up another set of data. Although DN's energy is chaotic and violent, its method of utilizing geothermal and dark energy is astonishingly efficient. If we can analyze its energy conversion model combined with the Xianyuan reactor, we might be able to create a more powerful energy core. Hope was rekindled in the control room. Zhou Song looked at the imaginative preliminary concepts on the screen, then at the resolute expression in Lin Feng's eyes, and slowly nodded. The third path. It may be the most difficult, but it is also the most stable and most hopeful, he decided. Dr. Qin immediately organized a top-tier team to establish the Legacy of Civilization project. Prioritize feasibility studies and preliminary experiments based on the directions Lin Feng has provided. Yes. Qin Yu replied with excitement. Lin Feng. Zhou Song looked at him. What do you need? A higher-level laboratory, top-level data access, and a continuous supply of energy and computing power from the Xianyuan reactor, Lin Feng said without hesitation. I need to recover quickly and begin an in-depth analysis of the Southern Gate and DN data. This will consume a significant amount of resources. All approved, Zhou Song said with a wave of his hand. From now on you are the chief technical advisor for the Legacy of Civilization project. All base resources are to be prioritized for you. Immense power and resources were now available to Lin Feng, but with them came a heavy burden of responsibility. Just then a communications officer rushed in. Report. Urgent intelligence. 7 global anomaly monitoring stations are simultaneously reporting that the index of abnormal subterranean energy activity is rapidly decreasing. They all seem to have fallen silent. Silent. Everyone was stunned. Having just survived an attack that nearly destroyed the base, the other global nodes were falling silent at the same time. This was certainly not a good sign. DN is contracting its power. Lin Feng's expression turned grim. It's not observing, it's concentrating its strength. It is likely preparing for a more precise and terrifying next move. Or is it trying to completely break the seal left by the shadow fragment? Time had suddenly become incredibly urgent. Move now. Zhou Song commanded sharply. We have no time to waste. Lin Feng nodded emphatically, his gaze fixed on the newly born blueprints of humanity's own black technology on the screen. They must arm themselves before the storm struck again. The establishment of the Civilization's Legacy Project Group caused the resources and manpower of the entire Dragon base to tilt toward a single direction with unprecedented efficiency. Within the newly excavated experimental zone beneath the base's core area, equipped with the most cutting-edge facilities, Lin Feng worked almost tirelessly without rest. The steady colossal energy from the Xianyuan pile flowed continuously through an enhanced quantum filtering interface, stabilizing the system's energy at a safe level and allowing it to recover slowly. Vast computational power supported complex simulation operations. The reverse engineering data Lin Feng brought, derived from the Southern Heavenly Gate system and the Earthly Nightmare energy model, became an inexhaustible source of inspiration. His first goal was to develop a simplified personal defensive device based on the principle of absolute order exclusive energy application found in the Southern Heavenly Gate. On the workbench, hundreds of microscopic components were assembled one by one under the coordination of the system's micromanipulation and precision robotic arms. At its core was a specially treated superconducting substrate embedded with a nanoscale lithium niobate filter crystal surrounded by an incredibly complex energy guidance circuit. Energy flow simulation passed. Frequency stabilizer calibration complete. Initiating the first field generation test. Power at 0. 1. Qin Yu reported nervously beside him, now acting as Lin Feng's dedicated assistant. Lin Feng took a deep breath and sealed the final casing. A sleek silver-white device resembling a futuristic warrior's arm guard appeared on the workbench with the filter crystal at its center emitting a faint blue glow. He picked up the device and wore it on his left arm. All personnel retreat to a safe distance. Activate remote monitoring. Zhou Song's voice came through the broadcast as he closely observed everything from the control room. Lin Feng activated the device. A hum resonated. An extremely faint, nearly invisible distorted field instantly expanded from the arm guard, enveloping the space half a meter around him. The light within the field seemed slightly more stable and clear, while external sounds became muffled. Field stable. Energy consumption 0.05 units per minute. Attempting level 1 test, standard 9mm pistol round. A special operations soldier outside the isolation window raised a pistol and aimed at Lin Feng, of course aiming toward the direction of his arm shield. Bang. A flash of muzzle flame and the bullet shot out at high speed. Just as the bullet was about to touch the faint field, pfft. A soft sound like a pebble dropping into a deep pool. The brass warhead struck an invisible wall of infinite resilience, its speed instantly dropping to 0. It was then melted and vaporized by the highly concentrated energy field, leaving not even a trace of smoke. The field didn't even ripple. Defense successful. Energy fluctuation negligible. A stifled cheer erupted from the observation room. Though it was only a pistol round, this effortless defense already surpassed any current personal bulletproof equipment. Level 2 test 7. 62mm rifle round. Bang. A louder gunshot echoed. The result was the same. The rifle bullet was also instantly annihilated. Level 3 test high-speed fragmentation grenade. Boom. The explosion's flash and shockwave were firmly contained outside the field, with shrapnel entirely blocked and annihilated. The test levels escalated until a small caliber autocannon was used, which caused the field to ripple noticeably and energy consumption to surge sharply, yet it still held firm. We did it. We succeeded. Xinyu couldn't help but cheer excitedly. This was a revolutionary personal defense technology. Lin Feng looked at the steadily operating arm guard on his arm, a sense of achievement swelling within him. The Order Shield's defensive power far exceeded expectations with exceptional energy efficiency. Immediately conduct extreme tests and data collection, optimize the design and prepare for small batch prototype production. Zhou Song's voice carried a hint of barely concealed excitement. Prioritize equipping frontline operatives. Yet just as everyone was immersed in the joy of this technological breakthrough, ding. 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 The base's highest level alarm blared again, piercing and without warning through every corner. Report. Urgent message from the Global Monitoring Network. Energy readings at all 7 anomaly points are skyrocketing wildly. Readings have surpassed historical extremes. Still rising. Geomagnetic disturbance intensity index has exceeded the critical threshold. Intense geological activity above multiple anomaly points. Volcanic awakening signs. Abnormal seismic waves. On the main control room's large screen, the red markers representing the 7 global anomaly points had turned an ominous blackish red like 7 blood-dripping terrifying eyes. Countless data streams refreshed frantically with alert entries flooding the screen. They hadn't gone silent. They were gathering strength. And now the accumulation was complete. They want to erupt simultaneously. Zhou Song paled in horror. A single anomaly point's earthly nightmare had nearly destroyed the base 7 erupting at once. That would be a global catastrophe. No. Lin Feng stared intently at the screen. The system's rapid analysis gave him a more precise judgment. The energy readings are off the charts, but the pattern is strange. They aren't releasing energy chaotically. They seem to be synchronizing. The energy fluctuation frequencies of the 7 points are trending toward uniformity. Synchronization. A global synchronization of earthly nightmare network nodes. What were they trying to do? Conduct some ritual. Or construct a super energy network covering the entire globe. Just then the researcher monitoring the shadow fragment signal that had infiltrated the earthly nightmare network screamed, the key fragment signal intensity is also skyrocketing. It seems to be absorbing the energy generated by the network's synchronization. It's being charged. It's being charged. Lin Feng froze, a more terrifying conjecture surfacing. It's not reinforcing the seal. Absorbing energy. It wants to fully activate itself. It wants to do something from within. Was it to completely destroy the earthly nightmare network? Or to open the true prison? Report. Detected ultra-strong energy focusing phenomenon. Energy target directed at. The analyst's voice was filled with disbelief and terror. Directed at the edge of the atmosphere above all anomaly points. They want to bombard the ionosphere. Bombarding the ionosphere would cause a global electromagnetic pulse storm, paralyzing all modern electronic equipment. It could even completely destroy the atmospheric structure. Immediately calculate the consequences and remaining time. Zhou Song shouted. Calculation complete. Consequences 99. 8 probability of global electronic device failure, 47 probability of atmospheric circulation disruption. Remaining time at most 12 hours. 12 hours. The doomsday clock had told again, this time targeting the entire modern civilization. Can the Order Shield defend against this level of electromagnetic pulse? Zhou Song turned sharply to Lin Feng. The shield itself can, but its energy pack and electronic control system cannot. Lin Feng analyzed quickly. Unless we perform an emergency modification using fully shielded materials and an independent power system. But was 12 hours enough? There's another, more troublesome problem. Xinyu pointed to another screen, her face pale. According to the energy-focused trajectory analysis, one of the 7 bombardment points exactly covers our base. They would not only witness the disaster but also bear the brunt of it. Immediately activate the highest emergency plan. Nationwide war status. Contact all possible forces. Zhou Song's voice was like steel striking steel. Lin Feng. I don't care what method you use. Within 12 hours I want a plan to protect the base's core equipment and personnel. The Order Shield modification must be completed as fast as possible. Understood. A resolute gleam flashed in Lin Feng's eyes. He looked at the shield arm guard on his arm, then at the terrifying global energy situation map on the screen. The first fruit of black technology not yet mass-produced was about to face its cruelest real-world test. And what he had to do went far beyond modifying the shield. His gaze fell on a corner of the workbench where lay the core logic fragment of the shadow AI, still faintly resonating with energy. Perhaps it was time to take a risk and contact this guardian. The cold sensation spread from his fingertips, not a physical chill but a frigidness that pierced the soul belonging to a non-material essence. As Lin Feng's finger finally pressed down on the remaining fragment of the shadow AI, logic time seemed to suddenly freeze. Detected high-dimensional information flow attempting to connect. Defense barrier activated. Encountering strong logical impact. Attempting to establish a secure filtering channel. In his mind, the system interface crazily flashed countless garbled messages and alarms at an unprecedented speed. What was contained within that fragment was far from mere data. It was a highly compressed collection of information brimming with alien logic and a chilling will. It was like a raging virus attempting to instantly overwhelm Lin Feng's mental defenses. Lin Feng let out a muffled groan. His temples throbbed violently and the scene before him began to distort as if countless shattered geometric shapes flickering with ghostly blue light and incomprehensible symbols were forcefully surging into his brain. I can't resist Hedon. I must guide it. He suddenly bit down on his tongue. The sharp pain brought him a fleeting moment of clarity and he concentrated all his willpower not to build a defense but to mimic the frequency amplified by the southern heavenly gate that contained a trace of similar characteristics, adjusting his consciousness wave to a highly subtle state. Not resistance but resonance. Or rather disguised as similar beings to emit a simple inquiry signal. He strained to consolidate this simplest concept in his mind. The raging information flow suddenly faltered as if a high-speed rotating gear had abruptly jammed into a wedge. The cold destructive will seemed to have its rhythm interrupted by this sudden simple inquiry that conformed to some underlying protocol. A brief silence ensued. Then a colder yet more orderly stream of information slowly surged into Lin Feng's consciousness as if decompressing. There were no words but the most direct concept was instilled: final protocol purification, target eliminate the aberrant unit, nightmare executor, shadow status executing. Energy absorption. Charging. Warning: unauthorized third-party access detected. Permission verification. Verification failed. Executing elimination procedure. The target also included him as an unauthorized third party. Lin Feng's scalp tingled and he instantly severed the connection, his finger jolting away from the fragment like it had been electrocuted. He staggered back several steps, nearly collapsing, cold sweat instantly soaking his back. What happened? Xinyu, who had been anxiously standing by, quickly supported him. Its purpose is to eliminate the nightmare. But it includes all unauthorized interferers. Like us. Lin Feng gasped, still shaken. It's using the energy synchronized with the nightmare network to charge itself. Once charged, it will execute the elimination indiscriminately. Is there a specific method? How does it eliminate? How do we defend against it? Zhou Song's voice came through the broadcast, still calm but with rapid speech. Frequency. Lin Feng suddenly grasped the key point. Its method of elimination is based on a specific energy frequency. Similar to the energy of the nightmare but sharper and more absolute. If we could mimic some chaotic characteristic of the nightmare's energy, perhaps we could interfere with its targeting. It's like using noise to interfere with precise radar signals. Immediately analyze the most chaotic irregular segments in the nightmare energy spectrum. Zhou Song ordered. The massive computing power was once again put to work. Soon an extremely complex energy frequency model filled with random peaks and valleys was filtered out. Use this frequency. Cover all external energy output devices of the base. Especially the field generators of the order shield. Transform it from an invisibility shield into a noise shield. Lin Feng quickly proposed the plan. This may greatly increase energy consumption, but it might fool the Shadow's elimination scan. Immediately retrofit all shield generators. Synchronize the adjustment of the base's external field frequency. Zhou Song did not hesitate. The entire base operated like a tightly wound machine, starting up again in a frenzy. Engineers and technicians rushed to key nodes, replacing modules and refreshing frequency firmware, undeterred by the incessant warnings of remaining time. Time passed second by second. Global energy synchronization completed. Ionosphere bombardment countdown 10 minutes. Detected shadow fragment energy is full. Elimination protocol preparation initiated. The final moment was approaching. All non-essential personnel had retreated to the deepest fortified shelter. In the core area, all critical equipment was connected to emergency backup power and fitted with temporary noise shield generators. The warriors donned test versions of Order Shield armor, nervously guarding their posts. Lin Feng, Zhou Song, Qingyue and others remained in the control room, which was also enveloped by multiple high-power noise shield generators. Countdown 3 minutes. On the screen, the energy brightness representing 7 anomalies had already erupted like the eve of a supernova. Countdown 1 minute. An invisible chilling sense of oppression spread once more as if the entire planet held its breath. Countdown 10 seconds. 9. 8. 7. Lin Feng clenched his fists tightly. 6. 5. 4. Zhou Song closed his eyes, then suddenly opened them again, his gaze sharp as a blade. 3. 2. 1. Boom. This was not a sound transmitted through the air but a terrifying energy tsunami that directly affected all electronic devices and energy fields. At 7 points around the globe, 7 streams of condensed dark energy, invisible to the naked eye yet clearly captured by instruments, pierced the heavens like the spear of divine judgment, violently striking the ionosphere. Crackling. At that moment, the sky above the entire Earth seemed to transform into a massive sheet of glass struck by an invisible giant hammer. Countless brilliant auroras instantaneously filled the entire horizon like cracks only to vanish in an instant. Following that was the total disappearance of all wireless signals worldwide and the frantic tripping and collapse of the civilian power grid. Within the base the lights went out instantly, leaving only the core equipment powered by backup sources and the Xianyuan pile still operational. Even with layers of shielding and noise shield protection, all screens in the control room flickered wildly. Various instruments emitted piercing overload alarms. External sensors are offline in large numbers. Energy consumption of the noise shield is rising sharply. Estimated to last only 15 minutes. Detected high-intensity directional scanning beam. Sweeping over the base. Here it comes. The Shadow's elimination scan. Everyone held their breath. That invisible cold scanning beam swept slowly over the base like the gaze of death. The energy field generated by the noise shield simulating the chaotic frequency of the nightmare successfully played a role in interference. The scanning beam lingered and hesitated around the base, seeming unable to accurately lock onto this target that emitted a similar yet somewhat off aura. Effective. However, before people could breathe a sigh of relief, warning. Higher priority command override detected. Elimination protocol priority downgraded. New command breakthrough noise interference confirm anomalous signal source. Activating deep analysis scan. The scanning beam suddenly became more condensed and sharper. It actually began to forcefully penetrate the noise interference like a precise surgical knife attempting to strip away the disguise and aiming directly at the core. Did it see through? Or is it executing a higher command? Xinyu exclaimed in shock. It's that fragment. It must have discovered the subtle traces we left when attempting to communicate. Lin Feng instantly understood. The energy of the deep analysis scan rapidly penetrated the outer shield, beginning to seep into the interior of the base. The shield can't hold. At most 3 minutes. The operator shouted desperately. Once it scanned the humans and technological creations inside the base, the elimination protocol would surely execute at the highest priority. What to do? Lin Feng's gaze rapidly swept across the screen, suddenly freezing on another piece of data. After the bombardment, the nightmare network seemed to have fallen into a brief energy trough. An extremely risky thought surfaced. Inject the energy from the Xianyuan pile. Reverse it into the nightmare network. Through that node we previously opened. Lin Feng shouted just for a moment. Create a larger anomalous signal to attract its attention. Are you crazy? That will anger the nightmare again. An engineer exclaimed. No. It's now in a trough, its reaction will be slower. We just need 1 second of interference. Lin Feng looked at Zhou Song. Are we betting? Zhou Song looked at the scanning beam that was about to break through the last line of defense like a finger of death, then glanced at Lin Feng's resolute eyes. Bet. He almost shouted. Energy output. Target the nightmare network. Maximum power. Instant pulse. The operator executed the command with a jolt. A tremendous amount of energy from the Xianyuan pile was forcibly extracted and surged through the previously established communication channel, crashing into the dark red network below that had just calmed slightly. Thud. Like a giant stone thrown into a deep pool. The massive energy body of the nightmare trembled violently and a certain area's brightness suddenly surged. Just as Lin Feng had anticipated, this momentary disturbance successfully attracted the gaze of the Shadow Fragment's deep analysis scan. The scanning beam abruptly withdrew from the base, doubtfully and cautiously directing towards the suddenly active similar beneath the ground. Now's the time. Cut off the energy injection. Maintain noise shield at maximum power. Zhou Song ordered. The channel was severed. The shadow scan lingered beneath for a few seconds, seemingly failing to detect anything unusual, and that sudden activity quickly subsided. Ultimately, the deadly scanning beam like a tide slowly receded and disappeared. Elimination protocol scan ended. No priority elimination targets detected. Entering silent observation mode. In the control room, those who had narrowly escaped collapsed to the ground, drenched in cold sweat with only heavy gasping breaths remaining. A global electromagnetic pulse disaster had occurred, but the base had for now survived. However, Lin Feng's heart sank. He captured a faint, highly targeted information residue left behind by the shadow scanning beam as it retreated to the system. The target of that information was not the nightmare network, but directly pointed to a precise coordinate in outer space. What was it calling for? Or rather, who was it reporting to? Chapter 29 complete. The darkness did not last long. The energy provided by the Xianyuan stable operation stood like a lighthouse amidst a dark ocean, supporting the core area of the Dragon Team base to maintain its operation. The emergency lighting system gradually restored, offering a dim yet crucial light. The air was filled with the acrid smell of burnt electronic devices and the heavy gasps and suppressed groans of the survivors. In the main control room, more than half of the screens remained pitch black, but a few surviving screens were struggling to reconnect to the internal network, displaying damage reports from various areas of the base. Zones 1 to 5 have completely lost contact, confirmed to be sealed off by collapses. All external defenses are paralyzed, energy weapons overloaded and burnt out. Casualty statistics. Initial estimates exceed 30. Each report struck like a heavy hammer on everyone's heart. The power of the global electromagnetic pulse storm exceeded expectations. Even with preparations, the losses were still devastating. Prioritize restoring internal communications and life support. Rescue the injured. Engineer teams split up to check and repair critical lines. Zhou Sheng's voice carried a barely noticeable hoarseness yet remained steady as a mountain, issuing commands to forcefully stabilize the chaotic situation. His gaze turned to Lin Feng. How is the situation with the order shield? Lin Feng was closing his eyes in concentration, quickly checking through the system. The shield unit equipped with the noise generator has increased its energy consumption by 270, but its core functions remain intact. The unmodified units are mostly burnt out. He opened his eyes and added, the noise frequency is effective, but the shadows have a strong learning ability. We may not be so lucky next time. The cost is enormous, but we have withstood the first wave of direct attacks. Report. The communications officer suddenly shouted, his voice tinged with surprise. We have received an external signal. It is a residual strong signal tower from the military's encrypted frequency. It's intermittent. Bring it in. Amidst the crackling electric sounds, a fragmented voice emerged. This is the capital's supreme command. Urgent notice. Global electromagnetic disaster. All electronic devices paralyzed. Repeat. All paralyzed. Activate backup plans. Surviving units across regions gather at designated locations. Civilization regressing to wired communication. Internal combustion engine era. Beware. Social disorder. Riots. We have not been forgotten. The starry sky still watches. After the last sentence filled with ambiguous implications, the signal completely vanished, leaving only noise. A deathly silence enveloped the main control room. The capital is still there. The command system is still operational. Yet this news weighed heavier on everyone. Civilization has regressed to the internal combustion engine era. Social disorder. What kind of hellish scene will this be? The starry sky still watches. Qin murmured, repeating the last phrase, instinctively looking at Lin Feng. Lin Feng nodded gravely. He knew what it meant, the signal emitted by the shadow fragment. Immediately attempt to contact the capital. Inform them of our location and situation. Inquire about the specific meaning of the starry sky watches. Zhou Sheng ordered, then looked at Lin Feng. We need to know how much time we have left. Lin Feng walked to a still-functioning deep space detection array control panel. This system had survived due to being buried underground with independent shielding. He input the outer space coordinates pointed to by the shadow signal captured by the system earlier. Initiate maximum power scanning. Focus on the coordinate area. Filter out all known celestial signals. He needed to know what was at that coordinate. The array was activated and the remaining computing power was fully devoted to analysis. The wait was agonizing. Inside the base, rescue and repair work was proceeding urgently, with new bad news coming intermittently. Food in a certain warehouse was contaminated. A backup power line could not be repaired. A few minutes later, the detection array screen lit up and the analysis results came out. In the coordinate point area there was nothingness. At least under the current detection precision, there were no known planets, stars, asteroid belts, or even visible interstellar dust clouds. Nothing at all. Qin said in confusion. No, wait. Lin Feng frowned. Amplify the background radiation spectrum. Conduct a deep differential comparison. A more detailed analysis was run. This time the results were drastically different. In that absolute void background, an extremely faint but absolutely anomalous energy residue was detected. It was as if a stealthy giant ship had just passed by, leaving behind a weak wake that was about to completely dissipate into interstellar space. The characteristic frequency of this trace was highly similar to shadow energy. It is not calling. It is reporting. Lin Feng suddenly understood, a chill rising from his spine. This coordinate point not long ago just had a ship. Or a fleet. Belonging to the shadows passing by. It was reporting the Earth's situation to its mothership or main forces. The fragment, before executing the cleansing protocol while filled with energy, sent all its findings on Earth, including the existence of the nightmare, the presence of humans and their resistance, along with the Southern Gate technology, to the shadow fleet that happened to pass nearby, perhaps on a patrol or reconnaissance mission. They might not have known about Earth's specific situation. But now they do. Qin Yu's voice was filled with despair. One shadow fragment was already so terrifying, an entire fleet of shadows. That would be true doom. Can we estimate the scale and direction of the fleet? Zhou Sheng's voice was terrifyingly low. The traces are too faint, about to dissipate. Unable to determine the scale and model. But the direction. Lin Feng operated, extending the trajectory of the residual energy wake. The trajectory extends towards beyond the Kuiper belt. In the direction of the Oort cloud. They seem to be heading out of the solar system. A glimmer of hope rose in everyone's hearts. But Lin Feng's words shattered that glimmer of hope. According to the trajectory curvature analysis, they are more likely conducting routine cruising or changing direction. Following this path, they will ultimately return to the inner solar system. The estimated time: at least 3 months at most. No more than a year. 3 months to a year. A tremendous pressure, unprecedented in scale, pressed down on everyone's hearts as if it were tangible. With nightmares potentially erupting from the depths at any moment, the sky was about to welcome the real main fleet of shadows, and human civilization on Earth had just been thrown back into chaos and struggle. Where is the hope? 3 months. Zhou Shong repeated this shortest time, his gaze sweeping over the wrecked main control room, finally landing on Lin Feng. We still have time. His expression became sharp and resolute again. Immediately report the situation at the highest level of confidentiality to the capital. The base enters the highest state of combat readiness. All resources should be prioritized for 3 tasks. First, fully repair and expand the production capacity of the Order Shield production line. Second, based on the Southern Gate technology and nightmare energy models, accelerate the research and development of new energy sources, new weapons, and new communication technologies. Third, at all costs attempt to establish limited and controllable contact with the nightmares. We need intelligence even. We need power. In extraordinary times, extraordinary measures must be taken. Even if it means making a deal with the tiger. The orders were quickly disseminated. This base hidden within the mountains burst forth with astonishing efficiency and fighting spirit like a powder keg ignited. Lin Feng took a deep breath, feeling the heavy burden on his shoulders. But flames also ignited in his eyes. He walked to the workbench, picking up the cold shadow fragment. Fear would not solve the problem. Only technology, only power could carve out a path to survival. System, he silently thought, comprehensively optimize the Order Shield design, reduce energy consumption, and increase production capacity. Next stage, research and development goals: fusion impact cannon based on nightmare energy models and a heavy drilling and communication platform capable of penetrating the mantle. Command received. Calculating. Blueprint generation in progress. Required technology points 200, insufficient technology points. Technology points. He needed more analysis, more disassembly. His gaze turned towards the depths of the base, to the heavily guarded core remains of the Southern Gate system. Perhaps it is time to make contact with this civilizational legacy from an even more distant past. Chapter 30 completed.